Welcome to Thenchuan's story. Wish you happy stories. Strong wind screamed down from above, piercing through the sleeve in everyone's ears, seemingly wanting to rub the sun was half floating in the afternoon. The crimson blinding shook, like a iron canal scattered on the sea surface, to hurricane forever constantly, eroding the hills and mountains on the shore, causing one side of their sea to be deeply concave, looking from a distance like countless undulating Vuong Ki, and the crown of Kim Do Long Chudong, the last sun, cut into a lonely black shadow, causing the wine to tear and wobble, almost wanting. Teen Mac was purple. On the wild mountainside, a huge team appeared, of the ranks of 500 cavalry, clamping with 75 pieces of quadricles. From then on, there were thousands of cavalry and thousands of good sets, before escorting a palanquin embroidered with 16, followed by hundreds of large cars and 500 cavalry. In addition, there were 2,000 good sets. The elderly soldiers were very young, slender body, military uniform and new contemptuous contemplation were too wide. On the shoulders, the ranks of 10 people walked to the south. There were more than 10 miles around, zooming out of their eyes, also looking at the beginning and ending. In good sets, there is a teenager wearing a velvet man who is controlling the horse carefully. The teenager of Van Werk's appearance, the 16-year-old figure, on the side of the hip was just a 5,000 cavalry, on the opposite of wearing the martial arts costume of the 4 monks. Just looked at the known martial art of Ula. Just approaching the palanquin, soon a female official welcomed the ceremony. The teenager immediately folded his hands to complete the ceremony, saying, "Please immediately serve." The old female mandarin heard that, raised her head. Tu Tai was still respectful, in the sound of anger. "Your Highness, on the road is tired. There is an extremely hot style." The teenager frowned. Tu Dat just wanted to open his mouth. The morning of the Highness did not get up late for half an hour late. The Bodhi was shouted in front of everyone. Was a great reverence. Now 3 times a few times sent people to urge His Highness to change horses to the ultimate moral. As a messenger of Uncle Lin, again despising his lower power, that is, the great disdain for the unified East. A fen is not fast and slow to speak to the end. The tone was a bit serious. The teenager could not hear sighing, nor did he heal himself, saying, "Bodu my lord is heard that this place at night has a pedestal back and forth and borrowed this excuse to get angry. I just asked through the soldier of Tian Min, according to them, saying this area on the mound of the bureaucracy also did not see much. Once the appearance of the hundreds of people, even though it was so fast, it was not so fast. 10. Also have to prepare the most famous ma to run away. Otherwise, the female officials were all terrified. After a while, there was a rather stable person in a hurry from the far away to take out the small medicine, and the red cloak embroidered the dragon entered the curtain. The young man urged the horse to go to the front of the palanquin, waited for a long time. The female officials inside the curtain lifted up, offering a comedy surrounded. There were other female officials surrounded. 3 legs and 4 legs brought the other comedy on horseback, peaceful in front of the teenage. Although the children's eyes were closed, but it was still seen as Dan Phuong Tu Le, the tail of Van Duong's eyes, because he was hot. Even his eyelids were in a coma. The general, is he wanting His Highness to ride with him? Earlier, the female mandarin could not help but ask a question. The boy pulled Kwon one hand hugging the child, startled and reply, "The horse is horse, anyway, is a..." The female mandarin seemed to want to say something, then swallowed it again, not saying anything to retreat. The child slightly opened his eyes, stopped for a while, vaguely called. The teenager bowed his head. "Yes." The child lost his strength, said, If you say a lot of bureaucratic platforms, Tang generals don't need to be too worried about me." The small sound was like a handful of scrap paper, just from the lips broken, immediately being quickly taken away by the sea breeze. It was not clear. "Your Highness, you are the great prince, the god of the god is his entourage. Absolutely no morality to leave himself to flee. The young boy grew up in the army." The graceful words that were so kind to hear it, and said it was also agreed. Wait until the words out of the mouth. The new heart could not help but stress, like a flat silk suddenly taken a thread of silk. Pulling the fabric tightened. This child is cleverly knowing that the temple is carefully paid, as an anxious moment will be angry, to the poor low level. He soon heard that the king was in the prince ranked 4th, as the youngest person. The Nong photographer did not give birth to him immediately disgraced. Huang Fe and Tam Tu Sin Tong Fai were very beautiful in the same tricks. Many years of grace, and the expertise in the palace. Moreover, she gave birth to the Emperor Tu Trong Trong Huk less than 16. Teen Tu Tai, and now Luok tempered Thang Bang Bodie. The rumor that won the Lap Lap was stirred up. Everyone was unable to make a crime. This time, West Luke Cho Chu Lin Kwok sent an envoy to a 13-year-old princess, named Tu Tram, preparing a few years after the marriage of the Prince Trung Tru. For example, Trung Tru was also considered to have a prince who followed the porcelain to go to Lin, the name of the legend of Lo Cho language, in fact the hostage. Prince Chubodier is the prince. Naturally, without having to say. The Emperor Trong Hut next day is the nation's column, indispensable. But Tam Tu urges his physical body to be so weak, called choosing hostages, except for the youngest, not making him think of anyone. I am a prince who cannot do the emperor. Even if you save me, I don't give you a good place. Moreover, your martial arts general. The young prince suddenly panicked and raised his head to look at him. Clearly, there was a layer of water in the eyes, but he was held tightly to let go, reflecting the cloud of fire near the dark sea, on the lower eyelash. Although in the heart of understanding the child did not intend to tease, but the boy's face was still hot. Photographer Phi had besieged in Yukang. The palace and the urban side of the person were just for her to respond through the speaker. Tong Fai did not ignore. In the occasion of the opportunity to be exiled to the country, Tong Fai Sai made the soldiers, from the rookie that year. The first of the forbidden troops took out a martial artist, like having fun, and promoted to the 15-year old teenager Thang Càn Tự from a 5,000-year old position, along with 5 rookies, because Iron Cho and the Western Central Cho are circulating. The company cannot help but change from Tainan to the Western Beat. From Thien Kai, it has passed nearly a month. Thang Can decided to be smart. The soldiers were not old, nothing clever, on the contrary. He also obeyed his arrest, but forbidden the general not to clear martial arts, nor did he become a document of Tiudan. The 15-year old general and the 10-year old prince, just like that, sat in the same horse. Kamcho Kautuan. The way Siamese Wickham Tu coincided with the message of contempt. The boy also felt that the other child on his body rising up the temperature, like a small coal in his heart. That night, the king and the embassy of the Bodhi messenger, who had a row of more than 6,000 people, came to Tien Minthan, was the time when Hon Trung, compared to the original plan, was nearly 2 hours slow. The company in Tien Min rested and recovered for 3 days, then changed from the sea, passing through the Oan coast straight towards Leicho. Half a month after the fleet left Tien Min, the ranking of the army, and Van Lin Van Quan this year was brought by Thien Kai, a bright red row of high. I glued in front of Tien Min. The small merchant rested the burden around the board, raised his face to look at the dense black text board, knew a few words, immediately dragged the tone from top to bottom to read. The first armor. Most Dan. Land the deep. Another person on the side said, why do we look like a ladder? Compared to hundreds of long boats of mulin anchored outside the port. Is small. Tailed boat is indeed nothing more than a spoon. The boat is extremely shallow, besides the danger. The white bubbles are sticky, like a boat stepping on the boat. The young boy was soon used to sit in a small boat like that, bringing himself to the nose of the boat to fill in, and immediately took the blade on the knee. The old boatman at the tail of the boat did not slowly row the boat, arbitrarily stretched out, and could kick the other person into the water. On the surface of the water reflected the streets, the light of the iridescent, and the hot steam of the steam steamed on the face. Even though it was here for more than half a year, every time the small boat passed through the depths of the citadel, the teenager was a bit fascinated. Of all the strongholds of Loicho, the Bat La Sox are the most bizarre court. It occupies a large area. The streets are miraculous. Bold decorations, architecture is high. The winding gaps between the houses, in the sun, are the road of dust flying. The rainy season becomes a dense river like a spider web. Each house forms a small island. People with a little face, all originating from the roof of their house. The vast wooden planks pave the way ahead. Where to go? The bridge temporarily north to that place. Also showing off the mane sitting on the shoulder of the hybrid of the blood of Hon Fong, and the gynecological department everywhere. If the blood power is pure enough, on the shoulder can even sit into more dancers. The other owner is of course the crime of being unable to be big and precious. Leave a little more on the dirty water. Next to the thighs of the thighs like the pillar of athletes, the small and pointed boats carefully back and forth. The daily transport of ordinary people. The people sitting at the top, like the difficult beans filled in dried beans, also thinking of how to stuff into green vegetables, silk lychee, even to children. But if the boat is a bit wider, if the boat will be a little wider. Residents here are tall, dark. In the early morning, the rain temporarily rested. The women heard the sound of selling white lotus flowers, flabby, and pushed the window out, like countless flower buds closed before and after blooming in the color of the colorful. The children who sell flowers sitting in a large wooden pot, drifting in the middle of the street. The legs and feet were all buried by the brooch-like snowfork, the dirty face, laughing out the teeth in the opposite of the whale bay. During the rainy season, all Batla is a swaying citadel on the water like that. But the rainy season in Lei Cho always wants to die. The loud nose rang out. Something pounding on the teenager's shoes, bowed back. Turned out to be a white lotus flower that had not bloomed. The flower stalk was extremely short. Thinking about it was from the side of the female hair. He had just raised his head, inside the window of the house. The tall area rang to all three girls with a soft scream. The corner of the beautiful purple skirt embroidered with iron luong flower through the window, and did not see it anymore. On the lotus also died the sweet aroma on the girl's hair, mixed in the fishy water. Each fluttering ray emerged. He had never picked up, just casually laughed. In this city, there is a fragrant aroma. There is also a very evil sewer. These two are famous in the world, also the same example that the poet 3 Lu Dong Luke often uses. This is Vrong Du of Uncle Lin Kwok, also one of the most prosperous ports in West Lug. The Bat La Citadel is not like that, like the stomach of the beast. Even if the sailors of the tribe and the traditional trader often go back and forth more than half of the vow to stop near the harbour, not daring to penetrate too deeply into the centre of this citadel. Therefore, in the eyes of the young women, the handsome teenager dressed in the martial arts as he, regardless of the colour of the appearance or gesture, were rare, of course, compared to those sailors of the blonde dancer. All the maze of the maze will eventually merge into the river of the mites, and his small boat is following the slow flow of stagnation, swimming towards the river of the mites. From the northeast port onwards, the city faced to the southwest of a circuit showing 12 waterfalls, coming to the front of the Mondari River. The crowded rooms in turn built around and suddenly stopped not moving forward, as a group of leisurely people who took the first to touch the people hurriedly retreated behind a few steps, far away to sea. On the other side of the river, so naturally empty out a large array of spacious flat ground, Vrong Than Chulin Kwok was located on the other side. The Wei River is clearly the two floors of the world. Vrong Than is the city of gold. Although from this side the river looked back, under the gloomy sky, still stretching a dark yellow, because it is on the peak. It does not need to be like the room of poor people who are exhausted to struggle upwards. Only 9 golden buildings in the middle, in the order of the floors surrounding, like the pointed nails of many young women. The tallest court, on the top was a delegation of Chuong Bik Billion, a total of 169 tablets. The largest is always as big as the head. Commercial boat from the north half a day the journey immediately saw the light red light. With the exception of the commercial boat covered by the royal family, there was a medal of long vi then. A folk boat was not allowed to pass the river. The small boat had not turned out of the small alley, immediately staggered against the stone shelf of a household. The teenager went down, paid 4 coins of the boat, gently jumped over the stone steps forward, stood on the stone pedestal in front of the house of the river, towards the other side whistling. A moment later, there was a little needle, following the interior of the needle from the other side separated, crossing the dark red water surface. It was a light boat like a bronze feathers. The bow of the boat rolled up. The tail protruded with a goosen neck, falling down from the bottom to the 7 shimmering wind lights, far away looking like a giant dark yellow feather floating on the water. The feather belly is equipped with a river organs. The speed is not fast, but extremely stable. Just 5 rowing people can start. Can carry 20 person. There were only 7-8 guards on the boat, the leader in the long yawning. In fact, they soon looked familiar with the teenager. The teenager removed the side of his hips down, waved towards them. Was the pearl-shaped pearl with a black stone, tied to dominant field of the King of Lo. Hospital, Vu Lam Quan 5th the thousands of stairs, coming to all 9-month bowls up to now. He relatively learned a few mantras, taking this sentence the most speaking, so it was more mature. Go up and go up. The soldier Uncle Lean helped one hand. Thankin jumped on the feathered boat, on the famous Tandin boat, thinking that he had never met him. Very new. His gaze stared at Boeing Gok on his side. Look at what to look. The soldier led the hilt of the knife to the nape of Tandin. People are the same age as you. Already 5,000 cavalry in the east. There are 5,000 defense. The general. Tandin did not restore his head, whispering, "What is the general?" Angled you. Our princess brought to the east. Everything was like their princess, their prince brought here. Just like our prince. The Eastern Luke teenager just silently sat on one side, his face calm, unlike martial arts, on the contrary. Like a book reader was not. Anyway, a crowded person. Uncle Lean only. At this time, the new leader breathed a sigh of relief. The new feathered boat had just left the shore without a few steps, and the 2 shouts were resounded on the shore until the 3/3 of the men wearing the uniform, forced to contempt, waiting for the boat to turn their heads to the shore, soon jumping disorders. Tandin was why no compatriots went to check those people, but had just eaten twice, learned obediently, did not open their mouths, just pay attention to the eyes stealthily. Is Feng Nomengu District A. The leader pulled his ears. The sound was so light that there was only a sizzling air left. Tandin pulled his shoulder back. The figure was extremely. Thankin leaned on the side of the boat. Those who were new to the boat came. The light armor and the Vuongthan guard were the same. The end of the lumbar scarf was not the dragon's tail scales, but the fangs of the eczema fangs. On the hilt of the sword also wrapped in eczema. The soldiers wearing this badge, only listening to the administration of the great army, in front of Uncle Lin Vuong, except kneeling down to put his head. In reality, it can be said that there is no other obligation. Mr. Ka is the Lord Feng Nomingu, the Northeast District. Uncle Lin, holding almost all the northern seaport except for all Bat La, with wealth equivalent to the whole country, from the bloodstream. It is the road of the reigning Lin Luong Luong. There is a suit in the palace as the Nong, tribute of the Luong army. The power in his hand was so illustrious. Even the Luong army also wanted to see him 3 parts of his face. In the palace, in the court. The mortal was a bit obedient. High key, and the swords of these 5 district soldiers have gold wires, a slightly higher class, estimated to be the body of the great army, naturally guilty. Light feathers silently draw curves on the water, running to the west. Looking in the distance, Vuongthan seems to be a flat area. The riverbanks all use red soil and high blue rock underwater to set up steel corners, prevent strong boats in the wharf. Only the western dam to a small line of low queue for nearly 3 miles, providing boats and leaves in the palace of Vuongthan's body. The boat touched the old copper covered cable column, emitting. The great army's entourage led to the shore, from the hip door to Vuongthan. Thang Càn Tự also did not rush to stand up, waiting for the practice. Even the face is familiar. The most loving Van Diep checks the real damage is also relatively a bit elaborate, at this time. In the kingdom, there was a palace that led him to the residence of the king. 9 months ago, Thang Càn himself he was summoned into Vuongthan, almost unable to distinguish the road ahead, like the ants locked in the golden maze box. Hai Cho Lo Van even a needle seed did not produce. The Uncle Lin had a kind of stubborn beauty and change. The ground on the top of the suburban city of the city, for inside walls, all were covered with golden leaves to buy, on yellow leaves twisted with gold silk. Jelly powder mixed with enamel to fill in, glossy as whenever she wanted to drop. In addition to all kinds of flowers, mosaic, pearls and stone patterns are also unfortunately the cost of mosaic down all around. The palace is leading the way to restore the cumbersome flowers. Walking in the folding corridor, the people and the walls are. He had to stared in front of his eyes. It was the other faces. On the eyelids still flashed a strong yellow streak. The lips stopped pink. Like the girls were also sculptures revealed on the wall of the palace. Now gone a lot. Also be in the city of the city is also the interwoven river. Between the communal house, there are countless short-lived arches. Thang Càn raised his head. Saw the opposite of the 3rd floor. A lower class palace team passing on the suspension. The climate of the warm man. The 4 seasoned women wearing a short coat. The skirt also only wrapped to the short cuff of 7 parts, bringing half of the shoulders, arms and wrists wrapped around the rattles exposed out. One is the young woman, on the head of a large gold-plated wheel in a large plate of melon and fruit. On the contrary, it is like a very different way. Brimmed hat, a stable arm, the other hand against the waist, the gesture of walking. More than 10 delicate waistlines fluctuated left and right, acknowledging the weight of the top of the head. And then it was like a honey jar, carrying a beautiful, strong deck. The curls are going deep in the bird's nest, thinking that at night, they want to be for guests. Going through the palace of the Crown Prince Yetlan is the accommodation of the king. Before the marriage of the prince, he followed his mother. After getting married, the mansion was moved out of the city. Only the prince could choose another beau in Vuongthan. The king is the hostage of another country from the east. The form of residence like the palace of the crown prince, just lower than a floor. The decoration is relatively simple, indicating the slightly different identity, also in the scope of the French ceremony, that allows the ability to express the intention of kinman. Thang Càn herself felt that this did not start being a good thing. The future king would have to return to the solemnity anyway. The Uncle Lin hugged another mind, because in order for the king to be close to the earthquake, the palace and the female mandarins all exchanged use of the manager. East Luke brought 5,000 Vulam Kwon were a new teenager to join the team. In the royal city, it was not possible to prevent them being arranged at the Vicar Harbour to stay. Every day only allowed 20 names to go to Vuongthan to protect himself. He had to be able to defend him. So he had to be able to defend him. At the side of the king, it was impossible to let him neglect the late Quark language. Where is your highness? Thang Càn herself just entered the door and asked. Vulam Kwon stood on both sides and bowed his head. On the room, Phong Dai is the top floor of the Uncle Lin's room, and there are no 4 walls. Only a few pillars support a piece of rain awning. Do not avoid the wind. Where the Uncle Lin Yen guests, smoking cigarettes, bars, night torch lights are bright. Far away looks like a theatre stage. Speaking of the meaning of Dongluk, Phong Dai in Vuongthan was a bit more luxurious if he did not want to be seen by people. So immediately on the 4 sides of the bamboo blinds or the screen down. Of course it was also glitter in the inside, reflecting the yellow pattern pillar. On the empty room like cleaning. The king, who did not have visitors, the small beds on the table have never been presented. Just a layer of fur curtain layer. A west only places a steely. On the surface of the beer has a few arrows. The baby is estimated to be around 10 years old, standing at the top of the east of the station. A solid set. The name has been on the palace. Pulling the bow without shooting. The child wears a simple white silk body, because it is not a military uniform. A bit afraid. So according to the customary custom, the left shoulder and the left sleeve are unloaded, using is an ebony triangle. For the comedy that is really too strong. The force of the arm and the bow struggle for too long, shaking, making his skinny body look like a stretch bow, that he only condensed using energy. His eyes had never left the heart. His small face was covered with silk curtains on a yellow ball like a golden chalk, like a small yellow statue. The pupils were to points full of drung. The young man also did not disturb him, crossed his arms and looked silently. Initially in the East Luke, in the palace, it was not without martial arts. Mandarin and Prince practiced martial arts, just more than half of the very supportive, the weak power of the weak force, naturally not flattering. In the youngest teenage disciple, Huang Tiu Trong Huk and the great prince then Hai Kong Fuong Min Min, in the Forbidden City. The two of them went to where the martial arts always followed as many stars praised the bright moon. Kwai Swang is only half of the age of Jia Min, also started practicing martial arts at the same year. There was no good teacher instructing, nor did he see any progress. After coming to Uncle Lin shortly, the king said he wanted to learn a little bit of a horse riding. Thang Can listened to a bit of astonishing, a shameful corpse like that. How to remember wanting to practice martial arts, that only in this story. The precious part of the permanent attachment. Socks of Bat La is a citadel flowing horizontally vertically. All traffic is based on the Tai. In Vuong, and even the place where the horse can run is not available. Thang Can himself sent people on the four sides of the room to hang a slight but thick curtain, display the bow of the brewer and the straw. Again arrange the 6 soldiers Vu Lam Quan guarded downstairs, not allowing outsiders to go up. Bringing Phong Dai as a place where the kingdom often practiced martial arts. You were still a child anyway, at that time. Seeing his toes were very happy, ran up ahead to look around, turned around and asked. So, Thang Can naturally, as if he did not think that he would ask like that, temporarily did not know how to answer. Had to be ashamed to cough for 2 hours. You looked left and right, on this room, except for Thang Can Tiu and him, no one else. Could it be the general? Kwai Sai opened his eyes wide, and asked. The words just uttered, he himself knew that it was wrong. Even the ears were scorched. Thang Can Tiu also did not naturally, leaning on the bow. The right index finger brought the sophisticated bowstring to wipe for a while. In the direction of the arrow. The 3 arrows, in turn, inserted in the middle of the finger. The 3 arrows in turn wandered, all towards the beer to see outside. Radiation inside has the so-called continuous, so the beginning is roughly so. Notice quickly that the ladder shot is not. The first nose is slightly deviated. The back of the back are gathered on the large pink in the heart. Almost so. Rolling the name of the deck far shocking, knocking out the echo. You all said no words. Does your highness want to try it? The young man smiled and stooped to bring the school. Kwai Sai took it, looked up at him, smiled dryly, and in his eyes shining. You teach me. However, Thang Can laughed on his face gradually, stopping his eyes at the child, saying, he secretly practiced martial arts if he was shooting the arrow. He did not win. Vu Qian came back from this room to fall, so that outsiders know, in general, there is no tongue. You also do not laugh. He thought a little, raised his head again. I'm here, an arrow does not slip. He could do it. Practiced shooting for 2 months. Vu saw him. A total of not over hundreds of no's. Pulling the bow out. It was a moment. The result was just silent and brought down the bow. Rest for a while. Then pulled out the bow. Hit the heart. So repeated 1 or 2. Later, the strength gradually satisfied. Tiu Tai was also righteous, so. However, each hit, even if he tilted, he only 2 months on the right thumb. There was a trace of deep, patient and patiently prolonged patience. In the immediate future, on the beer, there were 3 or 4 arrows. In other words, the king was on the front of the station nearly half an hour. Every time. Thang Can Tiu will think, this precious chance after adulthood will become a male. But he often sighed short, let go of imagination. He was just a 15. The bowstring shook. The arrow's tip penetrated deep into the heart. The corpse loosened both hands. Holding the bow school turned to look at him. He sighed again. Your highness, are you fine using rice again? The child still smiled, but a little shyly nodded. Why? Write the wrong word? Or is it wrong to learn the wrong book? Thang Can squatted himself in front of him, covering him with a coat. The child shook his head, pouting and said, the old man interrogated me, the king of the king, most important. Thang Can Tiu smiled. The so-called old man was the first place in the palace to assign the king every day to the door to teach all kinds of curriculums such as the moral of the nationalist people, the economy and field economy. Since practicing martial arts up to now, Kwai Swang has gradually been a bit wild. The king of the king. The warehouse of the food is the most important. Hungry without salary. What martial arts sport? Hungry. Today the Fung fighting boat has returned to the port. Thang Càn Tự took out a paper bag from the chest. Each foot opened. Kwai swung lid up, sniffed, smelled sweet pepper, shouted, raised the paper package, the whole face like Lang new tiger buried. Old tea cake is a family breakfast in Lancho. The sweet aroma, in the mouth is rough. When Thang Càn himself often buys a large koi, eaten to his mouth dry tongue. The corners of his mouth falls down the cake. The mother of the royal king of Wong, who came from Lancho a few years before falling ill, surely often made him eat. Anyway, the disgraced life of the Grace was mostly not interesting, except to bring the whole mind to trying on the comedy. Life could not be wasted, because it is such a cheap breakfast. Even the value of trading is not available, but the traders of the East loot Ni Yen Lancho, homesick, rather than buying a lady Lancho, so, at Hat Bat Luo Port, to bustling flour in front of her eyes. The prosperous boat market. Just the oil and tea cake is not found. It must be intentionally told the familiar boat traders from Eastern Loop. On the road for 1 or 2 months, the soft breakfast is covered with oil, becoming dry tooth. The child eats to gnaw. I go pour water for your highness. The young man who stood up and wanted to leave. Kwai held out one hand grabbing his corner of his shirt. Hurriedly shook his head and said, don't want to not want to. Drink water immediately. Will not fragrant anymore. After saying that, it was an echo. The weak body jumped up. Thang Càn Tự had to sit down next to him, helping him to pat his back, following his breath. It is not necessary to love him, just if the child is so unfortunate to die. Thang Càn himself, counting the thousands of Vu Lam Quan, afraid that they must go back to the crime. Although this child's Nong, disgraced model was soon. He was the one from the farthest prince of the 4 princes. The young age was thousands of miles to take the hostage role, even by the great messenger who did not dare to argue. Even though such a tin child was such a weak child, after all, the barrier of the emperor was not, so the whole story is just a joke. In those years, Thang Càn Tự always thought. Many years later, on stage, he said, when he was resting in the middle of the half, maybe an artist Holak sang the funny song to tell their old stories or not. Wong 11 years old. General Vu Lam Quan 15 years old. There were under his 5,000 soldiers, even the mustache lips were not yet. These characters alone, once meticulously reported. In fact, many years later, Zizi and Chukwai's model, Yen Langda, asked the younger brother about the situation of the night of the table. The tall young man wore a brocade robe embroidered with a lazy 3-nail dragon and replied, that night the fire burned up. I ate a lot of oil and tea cakes, suffering from returning to the bedroom. A large sip of water poured down. The fiercely coughed up. A gentle female man and his shoulder patted his back, letting him breathe a little comfort. For a long time, the baby realized that the choking powder gradually faded down. Finally, the incision fell into the stomach, like a small fist, suddenly hitting a right, vomiting a little better. Experiencing this torment, it was dark. The sad rain began. Chan's sister. The child breathed a sigh of relief, immediately called Thang Càn Tự name. The general was as if he had the thought of shocking his shoulder. Immediately raised his eyes and answered, Your Highness, are you better? Chan's sister. What are you doing? Thang Càn naturally did not respond, on the contrary, walked quickly, using the voice of the women's direction to ask, Your guests in dance, break the battle, or sword? When the general, in the palace, he had never donated the Luke Fu. Thi New replied. Thang Càn self thought for a while, suddenly ordered. The maid is only 17-18 years old. The reciprocal is also General, if there is no standard NGO Vuomingu, you and your highness will not arbitrarily go out. Please do not make it difficult for her figure and Thang Càn were equal. The lower jaw was arrogant. A pair of thick black eyes of the Uncle Lean glanced at the boy. The king from the bed of wooden chrysanthemum plunged down. Chan. The child looked at his general guard, his eyes obscure. Leng tinker for an hour. The skill of the teenager out of the shell. It did not count as the name. Just the executioner in the form of the military troops, obviously the item of the dating. The black bone was stable, like black soil. Drinking blood, not seeing any new light I practice. The nose was taken care of, under the light like a gloomy moon. Holding the long black hair that was strongly cut by the blade. Dragging Cholak's hair to be slashed down. Falling straight on the foot the pattern that the other maid used iron luong perfume to draw. The new maid shouted a deafening sound that was short, immediately pointed to the throat. Tabo's face seemed to freeze, holding the blade used as unnecessary. His fingers became white. In the eyes, there was a stable. His eyes have never left his blade. Has changed the language of the East. Your Highness, please immediately. The dense rain of nights fell, like a heavy cover covering. The exquisite golden king lost the shape, leaving only a little red light coal bright on the top of Tathap, along with countless arches and awnings, still reflecting light in the night. From the distant dark sea surface, to the torch port like Choing Gok, on the dirty murky puppet road. even in the torn bowl that Lu Dang received leaking water. Each place on the water surface was rippled in the rippling, and the mournful sound of stubbornness. In the vast rain, the sound of Kim Thiet fork gradually resounded. Kwai Swang stimulated the small hand and the button stopped. Chan's sister. What was that sound? After that, he swallowed the last saying. The sound gradually became clear. Even if the comedy growing the palace is not as good as him, he can hear what it is. Not acting. Nor did he have to break the battle or sword dance. It was the sound of sharp killing swords emitted. This place did not come for a mile. In this royal court, 200, no, perhaps 300 swords and swords, including their owners. Thang Can himself quickly swept through the open half window. The corner of the Dong Vuong Than, on the room of a tall floor. The tall and bright torch lamps on the four sides of the curtain had to places that were burning. Following the wind spread out countless sparks, in the dark night like a large branch of shrimp torches, bringing Vuong Than shining like daytime. The silhouette and sharp weapons quickly interwoven on soft silk, like a dream of disorder. The dark blood stain was sparkled again and was reflected by the torch lights into a solid black soy sauce, stubbornly, slowly flowing down. That is the so called Yen Din, where Uncle Lin Vuong Ban Yen for you. Even though the sword nose is steadily adjacent to the flesh on the old lady's neck, Thang Can committed suicide, and felt his hand trembling. They all heard lots of soft but dense whispering, like snakes through the bushes. The bare legs approached the window, his eyes wandering downwards, panicked. A lot of people surrounded Yet Lan's palace. There were people towards us. He tried to stabilize his childhood voice, but hoarseness could not be words. The situation later, nor did he need him to report. Her mournful mem rusted the rain. Without Uncle Lin Vuong Quan Luong at the party, Yen Dian would not be able to use. But now, on the bottom of the electric nest, there were hundreds of boxers who risked their death. And the prince was also bleached. Soking Bat La is such a cramped city. But in Vuong Than, although a little spacious, the defense all year round is not more than 1,000 people. The hundreds of these people fight with weapons. Unexpectedly is a rebellious time. But the swirling swirl and the fire were slowly expanding before their eyes, gradually wanting to swallow the entire king. Just fear is the anti. Your Highness. Your Highness. Thang Can Yu said in a low voice. The child did not wait for him to remind him, crawling up to the bed soon, from the bedside drawer, took out a small, golden silk bag with golden, tangled and puzzled on his neck. The beautiful red lips of Thi Nhu soon had no color. Her hair was cut off on her face, who followed her, constantly trembling. Thang Can bit his lips, the scissors through the neck of the maid. Using such great energy, the blade was almost stuck in the flesh. He pulled hard, pulled the sword back. Fresh blood followed that splashed on his face. Did not care. One hand hugging the budget, carrying. It was at this moment, upstairs and holding the 20 led army, Vu Lam Quan heard the movement outside, also rushed in. Each hand was placed. Thang Can nodded by themselves, briefly saying. The maids were largely scattered. On the way downstairs only touched to people. The blood on the sword nose was not small, new blood infected. Kwai swung wide in his eyes to see the girls fell to the ground. The air directed the throat down and shattered in, and the blood sprayed out, reaching out to him. Fluttering was the tragic intention to plead. But he did not stop, nor crying. The heart of a heavy and cold child falling down. In deep fear, there was nothing hot to rise. Tiu Lao built on the surface of the water. The bottom floor was the green stone built. Only burrowed the wet air to store the new wine. Until the second floor. The third floor had a very different bridge to the floor. Thang Can led 20 sets to lower the bottom floor cellar. In the cellar, there is a low door. When the regular day brought the wine from the small boat to use, they immediately came out from that place. Under the wide narrow green stone floor, the shape of the tea tray, from the water open to the outside. Outside at this time, there was no boat. More than 20 people collected the blade into the shell, into the water, hiding in the darkness of the blue rock, in the air on the top of the head. The hanging corridor was interlaced on the small bridge. More than 100 soldiers' costume uncle lifted the torch holding a stick, from the directions rushing into Tiu Lao. Thang Can himself directed his hand to signal. It did not say a word surrounding him, bringing him and Kwai Swung in the center. The water fits without the chin of Thang Can Yu. Kwai Swung clung to his neck, only revealing his head out. They carefully waded, walking north towards the palace. The surface of the water shone the red sky, and the spark of flames like yellow. A yellow color rushed to the royal city was shining by the fire. Seemingly emerging, the light folded on the water, like the whole of the citadel melted, smoothly flowing into the dense bay. The rain is extremely endless. Moments later, the river branch came to the end, opposite a Thanksgiving court. There was no human sound. The torch did not see. Thang Can realized it was the painting room of the Prince Chulin, not far from the north. Immediately to Truyện bridge connected inside the Chan's sister. In the dark, the child suddenly spoke in a small voice. Yes. He immediately responded. Just now that was you. Murder. Thang Can herself on the railing, on the one hand reply, Your Highness, that's right. Are you scared? Thang Càn Tự was silent for a moment. Never stopped, estimated to go 3 more 50 steps, and reply. Quý Sưởng seemed to have the answer he wanted, immediately silent. Why do your highness ask this? Thang Càn felt himself in the words of Quý Sưởng that seemed to have a heavy mind, vaguely felt unstable. Quý Sưởng leaned on his neck and said in a low voice, I don't know how scary the killer the young man suddenly felt. The new army had just wet in the cold, heavily but heavy water, all collapsed on his body, cold to the bone marrow. Not knowing it was because of a sentence of this child, or because at this moment the hearing caught a little bit of sound, unable to reflect on it, he raised his hand, telling the downwards to stop, into her temporarily quiet as dead. In the sky, the strong wind led to a fierce echo on the room of Yen Din and the sound of killing the sky. The fluttering were extremely far away. Again for a while, everyone heard that small strange noise, right behind a row of 30, to patterns of patterns engraved with golden jelly mosaic. There was a small step in this sigh. The soft bare feet hurriedly patted the cold ground, which also accompanied by heavy rushing sounds like beans. Nor did it know what was fluttering. He let go of the body, leaving alone to avoid behind the screen, rushing a light echo. The blade from the shell left an inch, full of energy. Din Fong is as heavy as the wall, the back is a folding corridor. Opposite the river separating the inner city of the city and suburban, on the face, dotted with the patterns of the thumb, vaguely revealing the flaming light on the river. A little flickering red sometimes will be obscured by something, coming back and forth, seeing that some people are rushing to go. The fire far away brought the shadow of the big person to the screen. They held their breath and waited. By the end of Din Fong, the shadow went around this face, discovering is a hand. Thang Càn herself pulled one hand over the other hand, the thrilling advantage of holding the shoulder of the man. The sword also shot out of the shell, swept across the air, placed on the neck of the other, lowered his voice with a low voice shouting in a low voice. Don't speak up. They all only felt in front of their eyes shining. A sword like a rainbow like electricity, bright as if they wanted to engrave the traces permanently on the bottom of her eyes. But it seems, not because of that sword. The bell, like bell suddenly rang out, like a whole cup of cups. People swept into the ground, chiseled with pearls, rolling collisions, falling into thousands of pieces of fragile alum sugar, and shattered into a transparent powder for a long time, until the other bell finally stopped. Each of them still had a glimpse of no aftertaste, like a silver. The teenagers Vu Lam Quan were terrified. It was just a small female comedy. So small, only a 6-year-old figure, hugging a bag of brocade, onto wrists filled with silver chains, thinking that fear of silver bells rang out while walking, using a shawl tightly on the left and right wrist. Only the base. After Thang Càn pulled himself, the silk strip fell out, the silver bell on one hand, and cried out freely. She had a beautiful black face, brilliant costumes, like the noble comedy in the palace. The head full of black curly hair was fluttering. Wai Sam was also tight. The appearance was frantic. A pair of horrific almonds white. The other pupils, compared to the deepest abyss. By all the light, the eye of faithfulness did not fall into the body of the human body. Blindness. Thang Càn clearly felt that the blind female hugging in her chest around her body was constantly trembling. One hand was pulled by him. Did not resist. Did not cry out loud. Just paying attention to his feet. Wanting to stand firmly. The other hand hugged the bag. Perhaps it was too much to use. Inside the other bag, he squeezed out a sound of a newborn baby's crying and resounding. The small female comedy jumped up. The only free hand was hugging the diaper. She was just clumsy to use her face to stick on the baby's face. On the one hand, whispering, herself was afraid to call. Who are you? Who are you? Little female comedy small sound is weak, breaking the speech of Uncle Lean. Your Highness. Thang Càn himself bit his teeth, turned his head to look at Quý Sưởng. Can't save her life. His face was serious, preparing to have a debate. Quý Sưởng opened his mouth and replied. And they said they were all the language of the East. The female comedian did not understand. Quý Sưởng still turned to the side, like fear of contacting her eyes. In fact, it is also mythical. How can this female comedian have? Our actions cannot be revealed. Even if it is a dangerous part, it is not if we fall into the arms of the army, they will of course take us as an advantage of Uncle Lin Vuong and his father. But wait for them to understand that we are not worth the price. Quý Sưởng said here and immediately stopped. The second half of him was bitten in his lips, his eyes with fragile and stubborn tears. We all have to die. There was a bodyguard Vu Lam in a low voice. Another teenager bit his teeth and said, 5,000 people have to die. Outside the fire still burning, hearing the collapse of stonewood, the castle tilted. The situation was only afraid that it was bad to the level of unable to recover. Little lady also did not know what they were saying, nor did they see their faces. Only they know that these people have not been detrimental to her. Perhaps not evil. She caught the arm of Thang Càn, crying and crying. Go to save my mother and my Kaka. Save. I reward you with a lot of money. There is a land. Thang Càn clenched himself in his hand. This female comedy was indeed an aristocratic background. But until now, how glorious or rich, in front of life, the boy lost his refuge if he lost his life here today. The old age did not even say, as the precious die, the body of the generals, feared that they had to ask. The 5,000 soldiers of this soldier were young. Add a mother, in law, prepared a long day after, perhaps hiding a half position, married to sneaky women in the wall. No one who had calculated, as he brought 5,000 young teenagers leading to a foreign land in this country, also need to bring them to the ability to safely lead such an endangered situation, carrying this female comedy fleeing. It is ungainly for more than one entanglement. If they leave her here, their actions will of course be revealed. They have to live. He bit his teeth, grabbed the small shoulder of the female comedy. The female comedy widened her eyes without light, faintly embracing the baby in her heart. More than half of the weak small neck exposed out. She could not look at things. And for these people, the language was completely unaware. The more unknown, a blade of the blade was hidden on her neck. Just a little bit of pressing, then strongly pulled to the right. Just needs such a scissor. In that blink of an eye, short to the same as a spark from flames, long and long like endless night at the end of the northernmost pole. It was in that blink of an eye, the light of the torch from the corner of Thang Càn's eye suddenly flashed, to thanks to the outside. A hoarse voice loudly. Here, in this place, the sound of the male man in chaos in the back loudly replying. At this place, His Majesty Destiny. Not saving people. The bright candle connected into a row. From the cross, bridge opposite around like a fire snake swimming. The light shone down. Those people dressed in cylinders are clearly Thang Càn you keep the whole business. Bush the female comedy. Fire them rushed towards the Satan. It turned out to stop killing them. It was true that the guard Vuong Thandalin Vuong Quan Luong, rain name like grasshoppers fell into water thangs. While the arrow's head was sharp and sharp in the ear, the arrow glass was horrified, pinned on him, and he also heard the broken bones. Back to the back of the screen. Thang Càn ordered himself. A circuit with 5-6 people hit the names. The teenagers drag each other, avoiding the room behind the back, biting their teeth, helping each other to remove the arrow on. The arrow chased them to the front screen. Only saw the shape stone pattern. Bao Quan was splashed everywhere, flying on a small fog like snowflakes. The tip of the black iron nose from the hole was nearly an inch long. In the grid of the flying name, only the blind female was left outside the screen. Every sound of numbness in the heart of shrill screams. The sound of children crying hoarsely, but still like the animal that was about to die. Hanging a last breath. Thang Càn herself closed his eyes and attentively listened, wanting to evaluate the number of enemies. But the ears were the crying of the female comedy, and the other, like to swords. A quick bar like snow. A blunt bar, whole, rotating him. He only counted to 17, finally could not help it. Suddenly stood up, stooping his back in front of being formed quickly, sir. Everyone looked at him in astonishment, then flapped her face down. And there was no sentence to say. They are all children who have not experienced battle, because their lives and killing are one thing. Staring at others dying in front of them without helping, another thing. Listening to the other female comedy outside, screaming, in the heart of whom not to be content. The female child fell down just now. He pushed her away. On his shoulders thighs were like an arrow that was brushed through, earnestly and bloody red and red. The men rolled into a group, brought the baby wrapped in his body, perhaps not wanting to protect him, but in fear of not having to hug something. Thang Càn tried to swing the blade of 2 or 3 arrows. One hand picked up the female comedy, took a risk to jump on the road, rolled a few rounds, also ignored her scratch throughout her body. By the way, pushing her back to the back of the room, herself also jumped in. Before he could, Thang Càn immediately regret. If the female comedy did not manage, after a while, she would have to die without doubt. Even if he saved her, the result must be made by himself, not lie. Chen, do you clearly see the out? Kwai Swong asked in a low voice. There are about 20 people outside, estimated not to attack arbitrarily. Only outside using the crossbow to shoot arrows. If it was in a moment of reinforcement, Kwai Sorlu suddenly waved to him, the expression of uncertainty. Outside the name of the name as heavy as the rain gradually sparse, gradually back to nowhere. At this time, he heard far away vaguely broken the sound of rough sound, like grinding. Thang Càn frowned by himself, leaning back to look at him. Outside did not see the reinforcement. Throw away the torch full of earth. The 20 guards Vuong then saw the effect of the attack to small, definitely preparing to break into. Why don't you wait for the hospital? There was a teenager hugging the side of the sigh. The voice trembled with pain. Thang Càn himself smiled cold. His father was one of the greedy generals of Hoang Time Quan. He was born in Hoang Time Quan, raised in the dust of sword, straight until last year his father died. Just returned to New Yenlan Chotha Deep. The tricks of this Han army, he saw a lot. They are competing. At first, it was because they did not want to ask for reinforcements, forces and then weak. Did not dare to easily approach, the current risk rushed in. Was afraid to last too long for us to flee, whereas the prey of others. He paused for a moment, his gaze on the face of each person, 20 people before his eyes. The teenagers did not strictly straighten his back. Tenkan tinkled a sword. The sword at the back of the vase of 3 meters in nowhere to draw a straight line, saying, "You all stand here." So he had only 20 soldiers with no sounds against the sword, sagging and fell to the ground and stood up, rotten to the void of nowhere. The water from the back, the golden shape of the tower emerged ripples under the harassment of strong fire. Fantasy is a reflective image on the water surface, like many tall golden candles dissolved in the scorching, hot burning breathing from the surface of the water to the back of each person, just like the horizon transmitted to the vague thunder. About 20 jet decks from the distance rang out, quickly sticking to the ground, in the order of the front line. It is a long black iron sword that the good set often uses when volunteering goes urgent, so that it will not interfere with action, all tilted on the ground. At night, looking away often did not see the body. There was a small spark jumping on the ground, called Demon Pull. The devil's sword is extremely sure. If there is not a man who is horrible, there is no way to raise the top of the head. But if it is a borrowed force to flee, bring the blade of the land slipper, suddenly fluttering, both fast and heavy, the enemy in front of her eyes like a grain of rice falling down. Even if it is a good horse of the north, once she can slash one child. The executioner used by the Eastern Army, although long, was as long as an arm of an adult male. Also in hand was also very much. Compared to the demon, it was just like scrap iron swords used to play. The sound of the earth now is even more obvious, is a straight line that is not curved, as fast as the electricity, are approaching. As the other soldiers who were scared to encounter ambushes, definitely intended to depend on the aggressive forces to overcome this 30 to heavy vase, with them to the comprehensive. The teenager of when was drawn to you. His hair and his eyes condensed blood stains, resolute, in the context of the bright light all over the wall. He was a delicate shadow. Only the old sword that his father passed in his hand reflected the burning flame, like a new steel water from the Harlach forging kiln. Spread out the temperature and the scorching light. Great work. Do not want to go with friends to go back and back. On the battlefield will have any end. He stopped for a moment. The sound was suddenly like a flag in the strong wind raised. Use the sword in your hand to tell them. The teenagers were forced to the end, on the contrary could not control the blood of killing mind in the chest. Like the beast shouted, fitting on the vase of the power to fight. A row of 30 to stone patterns of yellow engraved yellow pomegranate early damage no longer shaped. Under the collision they risked their lives like there, loudly fell forward. Using the sword field, the seriousness is only heavy and fast, not flexible and transferred. Only by the metal. Once the executioner ran, immediately like the arrow left the target to fly away. Unprecedented so far, waiting for them to discover the situation was not right. Din fall was as large as a wall, struck their heads to their faces and eight bodyguards, some of them were broken by their blades. The crowd of the Eastern young people shouted out. The devil pulled that the situation could not accept. The layout inside the water tanks was limited. It was difficult to execute. The first time could not hurt people. If they want to launch much more clumsy. The body of these 20 teenagers is not completely mature. There is also the toughness like childish. In the middle of the gap of the dance whirled like the whirlwind of the demon's sword field pulled around to jump over. Whenever there was the opportunity to swung up a sword, of course, easily responded. Kwai Swang was extremely scared. His arms and legs crawled together as hugging the other female comedy. The small female comedian also fiercely hugged the baby in her heart. Did not cry. One side biting the sleeve. Try not to cry out. The bright red night sky still falls like rain. Under the flames of the sky shining. The rain suddenly flashed and disappeared were all bright. It was like a heavenly heaven and a royal court in the kingdom, also bleak everywhere. The river in the sky could not bear it, and immediately wet to fall into the human world. In the kingdom everywhere are the cries of killing and the creaking cry. The drum shocked the whole family. All the rafters are crying. No other people pay attention to this dark Thanksgiving. There are 2 small teens. Hushly and strong. The uncle Lin Tiu Vuong was more than half. His guardian also lost 5-6 people. To bloody rusty bloody gas without nose filled with weight. The body die collapsed, revealing the broken blood. The teenagers arranged in an arc, supporting the heavy blade of the uncle Lin. Protecting the 2 children in the corner. The sword swirled, like thousands of broken waves on the reef. At this time, to rubble on one side of the screen, there was a bodyguard who stood up from the pile of corpse. His bloody eyes were slimy. The wicked eyes moved on, the white eyes dyed into bright red, eventually finding the target among the people. The other bodyguard whispered. The sword field on the ground of Fu Dung brick sparked a series of steel sparks, rushing into the fighting segment between the 2 sides. Fu Lam Quan was not free to stop himself, and he was rushed to the front of his friends. Lingering a sound, the blade was raised from the ground, in the dark. A killing intent suddenly lit up, sweeping towards the children hugging each other. Such power. If the comedy is a blow. Just afraid of the five organs all want to shatter. Kwai swung in his heart could not avoid it. Had to close his eyes tightly, burying his face into the long hair of the female comedy, while thousands of pounds hanging the hair, stabbing back and forth. There was a shadow suddenly rushed out, blocking in front of them, taking the aggressive position of the demon devil school. His hand stood up and standing in his hand, just a pole with such a car, then did not move anymore. To blood. Red eyes of the sword of the man who leaned out to laugh at the winner. He seemed to be able to see when the two swords were intersects, how the sword will turn around, how the executioner will bleed, how to fall down the dust, based on the frivolous steps of the person to the same average executioner. Wanting to prevent such a devil, it is not possible to do it. However, in predicting the sound of the iron and steel, the crumbling was shattered, and finally never. The lightning flashed, the last moment before the ambush. The owner of the eastern Dao was a bit increasing. His wrists twisted, the spearhead had no nose, did not turn towards the blade of the devil school, welcome towards the wrist of the knife of the man. The spearhead is like a string. The body of flesh and blood surrounded the strong force, touching the delicate blade. In a moment, silk fabric, flesh and bones in the auto of broken, like split bamboo. Just a neat sound of blush, the demon's sword field pulled back to fall to the side. A hand that was broken with blood stains stubbornly clinging to the hilt, followed together. The knife of the mouth covered the mouth of the wound on the wrist. The sound of pain. The executioner lasted about a lot of people, in the air, aggressively patted the shadow of the shadow. The body of the other person tilted. The body fell to the ground, trying to suppress painfully, turning his hand to turn the sword, from the bottom to the side towards the soft place under the chin of the executioner swung a strong swing. The knife fell down. The demon devil school pulled heavily, falling in front of Kwai's eye, and a female comedy, bouncing to on the ground, rolling into the blood of the owner. Your Highness, the air was broken and said. You all trembled. Open my eyes. My face was Tang Càn collapsed on his own shoulders helplessly, carrying the sword standing in front of him, on the face of Tiuna, showing blood, despite being trembling to not being able to speak. Kwai Swang still tried to nod with thank and you. The teenager through the speaker used his fingers to wipe his tears on his face, unexpectedly wiping more blood on his face. A little dumbfounded, stopped his hands free, suddenly frowned and stood up, merged among the Uncle Lin can kill only 5-6 people. His entourage, Vu Lam Quan, is almost seeing the situation turning. The Uncle Lin lost the will to fighting and retreat. Tenkan ordered himself not to pursue. Walking in front of Kwai Swang, reaching out to him, saying, Your Kwai Swang seemed to be terrified to lose his soul, still fell down, panicked and said, Where to go? We have to think of a way to leave Vuong Than and go to the harbour. We can sit and get acquainted with the boat to go to sea. The teenager's hand, because of the exhausted wall that was trembling, but still persistently reached toward. Kwai Swang slowly loosened the female comedy in his heart, took the hand of Tankan to reach out, stand up. His knees were still trembling. So what about she? He asked. Little lady hugged the baby alone sitting on the ground. The bodice of the lotus cloak drooped down, the bright red silver pooled in a pool of blood, soaked. A pitiful blind eyes. Fear of suspicion or staring into the air. Tankan took a deep breath, slowly, and shook his head heavily. Your Highness, unable to save your life. The face of the noble face is white. More than half because of fear. He pursed his lips. The blood on his cheeks was washed away by tears, but just did not say anything, nodded. Buried his head next to Thang Càn Tự. Did not look at it anymore. On the blade's nose hanging down a drop of blood. Not falling, in the blink of an eye. The sword was raised. The drop of blood fell on the face of the female comedy. She was startled. The teenager raised the blade, but could not immediately slash down. Far away from the drums shaking. Along with the drums, on the surface of the water floating small ripples. Through the sparks and the rain filled the sky. Between the radio La Cac, vaguely can see that there are several hundred torches shining on the water. Winding the elbow here. Early. They will be dead. Mother. Ka. The female comedy did not know why the next person left her. Whispering to call. Reaching out one hand to search around. As if he wanted to find Kwai Swang. Searching everywhere, did not see, groping on the ground, touching cold blood full of hands. She was startled, for a long time, like suddenly waking up. In a small body, emitting a sharp scream to be unable to believe. The scream cut through the bright red rain, fluttering a true night of the true rebellion. The fire suddenly chaotic. In Vuong Than, the 4 directions of the 8 directions. All other sounds of scream. Rumbling drums suddenly came up, using the speed of people to approach them. In the small river under the water, thanks to the small wave layer. Hitting the rocky bank, like the ground all vibrated. Thang Càn Tự looked at the fire in astonishment. This feeling seems to be familiar. In the vicinity of the neighboring street. It is often possible to meet. But this time, it is so intense that people do not dare to believe. He unconsciously took a step back, Kwai Swang was surprised to open his eyes. The drums have come close, the mixture with metal sounds hit each other, as if there were many rattles followed. In the middle of the flabby beam, falling down dusty and wooden crumbs, like the whole waterway, were shaken and jumped up. Then the nacre, the head of the nacre, the porch and the wide tile fell down, once again arranged in the original figure. The shock at the feet followed the soft bone marrow straight upwards. The small waves under the water weight became more and more dense. Each person could not control himself, but clenched the sword in his hand. The bridge of the weight of more than half has collapsed or burned. The soldier of the uncle simply brought the torches to the top of the head, flabby, and jumped into the river, wading them to the direction of them. Screaming in the sky connected into a piece. A river flowing down the bright orange light. Shining giant black led the group. The other body seemed to be new from the threat of the Lakdam river, in the middle of the armor revealing the shiny body of the field. The night rain pattered on him, rising yellow steam. On the dense black forehead, every sweat flowed down, hot and bright like a lava boiling. He ran, for mankind that said the river water to his chest. Now just not coming on his knee. Every time I lifted my legs, the river surface immediately agitated a few inches. The bridge was carved with magnificent flowers and stabbed into the robes that broke into small pieces. There was also no drum. His footsteps made the ground trembling. Kukim and his armor followed the footsteps of the jingle, like a few hundred soldiers who used the same school. All his colleagues scattered at Lady Idea. No one could be higher under his armpits. Outside the Hanzhou area, everyone has never seen through such a muscular. He ran, all the prevention in front of his trembling collapse. No one thought about fleeing. Like no one could escape the mountains, the sea or the sky. The executioner of a bar followed the bar. All fell to the ground, on the blade, and the bloodstone stagnated. In front of this 18-meter-tall giant, humanity's weapons seemed following the steps of the gynecology, the water river increasingly high, increasingly urgent. Finally rushing into the water thanks. The ground shook to make people stand unsteadily, like there was a great troop of fighting that. Kwai Swan did not close his eyes, nor crying anymore. He looked at the giant shadow quickly covered, like dark yet like the bright moon. The fire of the whole city in the blink of an eye was separated outside. Into tough fell into the darkness. Suddenly, like the footsteps of Theme Quan Van Ma exploded, the sound of people screaming like a tie. In a moment, all disappeared almost no longer. If not, the flame around him was burning, almost causing people to suspect that they were deaf. The tide gradually stabilized and never regained it. Excess fluttered their army. The gynecological department took a kind of agile people who stopped in the river outside the water thanks. Behind him several hundred military people filled with fear of more than 10 meters outside. The torches of the brilliant light pine were all overcurred by the body of the body. A ray could not penetrate. The teenagers stood in the darkness, could only see his legs rough like the bar. The pants were both rhino skin, sewing. The side hung down keen tin sword higher than one person. The knee covered as big as a shield with a wide base of the belt tied tightly at the knee, vaguely twisted and lighting up the teenager's face. In silence like death, the surface of the water under their feet started again slowly but clearly rising. In the water began to have a small red flow of red lipstick vaguely diffused, very quickly rising to the calf. Kwai Swang rushed out. Bawled the female comedy inanimate and fell to the ground, retreating to the. Tenkan suddenly raised his head, his eyebrows furrowed, and did not take another step back. Kwai Swang and the female comedy were right behind him. Among the 10 alive, only in his hand, he still held. The gynecological department bent, kneeling in the river water in front of the Thanksgiving. The whole body was still as tall as a floor. To thank slightly, in the river water next to the people, the small red water quickly diffused into a bright red round, from the bottom of the water. On the armor, which looks like a reddish brown, gradually washed out blue light. Those black colors turned out, in the extreme. How many people must be forced to clean the blood, enough to dye this red body? The gynecological department bowed and stared at them. His face and his figure seemed to be serious. The pure black pupils were as big as a cup of tea, like pouring dark ink, covering the beast as clear, sharp and except for their colleagues. No one dared to look at each other. It is the blood vessel and the spirit of inheritance from ancient ancestors, like the echo of drums deep in the deserted field. Jalan. In the dark, there was a husky sound that was in a low voice. Jalan. The silver bell on the deck's wrist rang. The female comedian was hugged by the chest in the chest to raise her head, guessing where the sound came from. The teenager looked back, at this time discovered on the left shoulder of Koei turned out to sit in one person. On the contrary, the racing small body sat on a giant armor leaning like the corner of the roof. Calm, not eye-catching, just like a bracelet of is Harlak. In the heart of every teenager, they silently conjectured like, the little girl jumped up, escaped from the hands of Kwai Sai, rushed out the crowd of people in the front running away. Just sharp, mother is about to die, save her, save, your highness. Decide soon. The soldier of the Uncle Lean kicked the water, hugging the female comedy. The small limbs of the exhausted female comedy kicked around. The diaper in her heart almost wanted to fly out. To Lan. Can Hall. The sound was strictly blamed. I now hugging my heart. It was the crown prince of our uncle. The female comedian named Lan suddenly hugged the baby crying. Not struggling and yet Lan Carr. Already dead? To Lan raised his head in nowhere, but did not receive the answer. A moment later, the shadow on the shoulder of the gynecology seemed to sigh. The sound of hoarseness temporarily became more and Cuckoo cannot save his mother. The spirit of the billion. Also, the holder Lan suddenly softly had no vitality. The long, heavy hair was wavy like a collapse of the water. If it was not, Tenkenti, you would almost think the hanging on the arm of the soldiers was just a small, empty outfit, dotted with silver bells, in a dark piece emitting to broken but cold. Through the box. The shadow finished speaking, using his hand to signal. The gynecological boxer answered his hand and threw his hand into the water. Thanks. His fingers were bigger than the army through the army, and hugged the other. The soldiers respectfully delivered the Lan and the baby out. The hand larger than the 2 meters of the gynecology gently closed, afraid of crushing Lan. One hand holding her waist, lifting her up, bringing to her left shoulder. The black shadow hugged Lan by his side, and the direction of the distance said, "This is the high ranking." Kwai Swang stunned his head to look at the gynecologist in front of his eyes, still temporarily saying no words. Nor did he know the ceremony. The husky shadow smiled, saying, "Our country is not fulfilled tonight, so that you will be overbearing." The dirty clothes in wrong then. 2 or 3 days are afraid of being unable to clean. Not from violating his highness. Not equal to find another mansion. To stay. Kwai Swang glared, not knowing how to respond, on his face flush. Even the lips are sculpted like the lava of the gynecological department also showed a smile. Tenkin took a step forward, knelt down in the pale water, used the voice of Lean to raise his voice and reply. The Hmong of the great army of the How Italian army, unable to fear. The entourage of the Royal Highness was stationed near the harbour. The generals are preparing to escort the lower to go to Didone. The shadow on the shoulder of the gynecological science was dumbfounded, unexpectedly. A young man who had never met his identity, in his voice, showed a little bit of laughter. "So, I will save a few people escorting your lowering electricity to the harbour. You come to Uncle Lean. Really lead a good general." He nodded to the 11-year old male comedian standing in the spot, calling the name of the gynecological fighter. The giant stood up, carrying the river water like heavy rain and pouring down the lagoon, turning around and striding, The red-blooded fire was losing blood, suddenly pouring down. The teenagers were dazzled in to hundreds of soldiers, and Uncle Lean followed the gynecology, leaving only about 30 names on the spot, preparing to escort them towards the. At the end of the military scarf, all embroidered the fangs of Feng Nominggu district, on the hilt of the sword. It also wrapped in rough silk, yellow cord mesh. Truly the body depending on the great army of the British Army. In the blink of an eye, the gynecology turned around. The fire continuously surrounded. Fenkin clearly saw the shadow of the shadow. Kia must have been a pretty young man. Today was thin and sick. The appearance of damage, only a deep, intense eyes were only of the Uncle Lean. In the smoke of the fire, the army still had a clear god. Under the tear cloak, the yellow dotted. A pair of soft feet shook down. The sole of the shoe was white snow. It was true that the appearance until now has never been to the ground to travel. It was said that when he was 17 years old, he hunted in Phung Nam, and he had to poison a snake. Panicked and stood up, bringing the great army to fall down from the horse. From then on, he could not walk anymore, as expected. The sky is bright red, falling into all the balls. In the night breeze there is a strong bloody air. The rain patted the wall of the city, stimulating the smell of burning smoke. Looking around, and the body fluttered on the water. The stiffened hand gently collided with the stone column of the palace. The Uncle Lean's company went away. Kwai Sai still stood still in place, silent for a long time. Blush. "Your Highness." Tenkan bowed himself, hugging him to stand up. "What's wrong with you?" Kwai Swang turned his eyes at him. Thankin Tu temporarily was shown by Tu-less face in the eyes of the phoenix, making panic. The pale tea of the 11-year old male comedian turned into black, like a swirling clouds down to the heavy rain. The lightning light was cold. "Chen sister, I don't want to practice martial arts anymore." Kwai Swang hugged his neck in a low voice. "In the past, I always thought that if you want to be a hero, you need to have brave courage, outstanding feats, like Vu Li Vuong in the meaning of the meaning. That Chan, you see the other person. He has no martial arts, has no feet, even walking cannot. Just open his mouth to say a sentence. He can make the auxiliary department like that. Do not dare to bully me anymore. The people of thousands of things are all about my mind." The sound of the sweet and so sweet, buried on his shoulder in a low voice, every word saying, "Someday, everyone of Kucho Ten Cork must know the precious way." The soldiers of the two countries simultaneously moved up beside them. Everyone did not hear the other child say anything. According to history of posterity recorded, that night, a guy depending on the mantra Lin Ruong Quan Luong Koi Ko rebelled. On the occasion of the opportunity of the Luong Vuong army to celebrate the banquet of the great army, at the party who wanted to act against the god of killing the king, the royal Phi Lin Ka and the prince Lan Lan before, the mother hugged each other and died. The guardian of the great army was excited to kill the anti-hackers, but the Luong Vuong then troops were seriously injured, unable to look after the work. The crown prince also died reluctantly, had to be temporarily. The spirit of the Vuong Phi left the prince sister Lan that year less than 6 years old. The Lan Lan was born for 3 months. All of him raised by the great army. Lan was established as another crown prince. The northern palace and guard Vuong Than, involved in no less than 300 offenders. It was a rebellious rebellion. Why the bodyguard Vuong Than and the body of the great army were wicked in the middle of the night under the nest. Why the great body of the great army stormed into the inner city of Vuong Than. These doubts, from there. It was also impossible to ask. Just until the end of the summer. There is also hot air. The blue eagle, winged bird ate corpses day and night flying gathered on Vuong Than, half a month inadequate, thus being named variable Ban Q. This wound of Luong Vuong troops, lasting for more than 30 years, straight to one day he was dead. Faithfulness has never been completely. The region of the great army also lasted for more than 30 years. The way the smoke and the vast rain were dim. The fuzzy Thankan saw the young princess on the shoulders of the gynecological faculty turned to their heads, eyes without light. Blind, empty, moving. In this chaotic night, seemingly looking for someone, the cheeks condensed to beautiful crimson point, which was a drop of his nose and nose swung out. Meeting the other lady. It was the story of 2 or 3 years later. The old red paint table. The hot dishes placed on so many white circles overlapping, permanently clinging to a thin layer of oil, softly touching the hand or print a fingerprint. The golden enemy on the dirty table was rotated into a small shadow. Iced wine, and the yellow to blonde sailors and black hair highly discussed, like the scandal of a certain friend, who was thrown from the window by Tu Ko Ki Kang from the 2nd floor window. Talking about the fun, laughing and smiling. The crude ceramic dish over. The teenager sat alone in the dark corner of the boring interesting yellow enemy spinning in front of his eyes. The wine in his hand was soon cold. A large and light grey tan covered his face, stretched straight to the waist. The outsiders could only see half of the handsome chin, with half of the cold lips. This way of dressing is inherently mediocre. Violent sandstorms on Honshu Street. Lulu is mostly such a way of dressing. And in this for warm seasons, it is a bit eye-catching. This is a small pub that cannot be more normal next to Bat Lot Port, filled with vulgar words, vomiting. The gay aroma of the nose of the wine is poor, and the salt oil taste of the wine dish. The sailors went to the boat and went to the place to drink a few glasses. Wait until the face turned red. The body was also flexible, and shoulder to go out to find another joy. Of course, it was not lacking drunk to the end, falling asleep under the pub table. Traders also like this place to meet. The local dark is nosy, suitable for hiding all the exchange of small trading cap. The teenager suddenly raised his head. There was a dwarf fat body jumping on the chair opposite the teenager. Not saying a word to bring a torn oil block open in front of him, revealing the object inside. 3 years of dry, light blue, half transparent. The boy, do you want to dream? The female harlak was hoarse-assed. Seeing that he did not respond, he continued to continue. Good things. Take from the mountain Manjung. Hold a drink soaked in drinking wine. Can make a beautiful day and night. Make the emperor. Marry the beauty, the mountain of gold and silver. Clear as the day. You are. Take out a dried flower. Want to throw it into the teenager's glass of wine. The other hand with the golden enemy is spinning on the table. Tabou's hand was faster than her. The right hand brought the wooden cup to cover. The long index finger pressed down to the bottom. The golden enemy was placed on the dirty table. A billion. Don't come. The teenager sounds like a smile. This is not a flower. Dried with drinking alcohol. A dream that can dream a day is not bad, but can only dream of the situation of his old days. Holding to sell to the sailor to remember home is not bad. Harlak woman also has no wires. Her face does not seem to be ashamed. Still agile to clean out the furniture. Use all cloth to wrap. Jump down the chair to leave. The boy who had just recovered his hands covered the cup of wine. Immediately felt the room gradually shocked, on the ceiling falling to the red ground, pouring on the clear wine surface, thinking that there was a gynecological faculty on the road. The teenager in the darkness frowned. His right hand looked like he was indifferent to cover the fold on his head. The steps of the gynecology stopped outside. After a while, only saw a finger as big as the bamboo stick reached out, replaced the owner to push the black curtains to the side. His hired owner is a middle-aged man who dressed in a trader, blocked the door, looked in around, went straight to the teenage table. The teenager brought his head a little bit. Did not say anything. His gaze hidden under SA Max soon assessed him for a while from top to bottom. The merchant himself also felt offended. His tall, thin body became even more straight. Prince, this time he did very unwell. The boy gently laughed and said. He pondered the confusion thanks to the person who passed the word. Made an appointment to see me in this place, perhaps because of what or what. The face of the merchant of the Uncle Lean was pale, waiting to be about to play, reluctantly restrained. Pulled down the seat, brought his face close to the teenager, lowered his voice. The night before, the warehouse in the store we burned, being robbed of a batch of upper class brocade of the swung hone. So are you going through losses? The left hand repeated the golden estimates. The Jew is recently not buying money. The prince he also knows. This group comes from the famous craftsman. The superior quality, estimated to cost 8,000 yellow. The Uncle Lean was exhausted and pressed his voice, his breathing straight into the boy's face. The teenager leaned back on the chair, slowly said. So it is equal to 500 then loan Dao Hulak. With half a boat. The face of the Uncle Lean, at this time, was pale. Last month, Fong Vien Hao's merchant met the pirate in the own cost strait. 500 then loan Dao Hulak that people ordered high prices were taken away. The boat was also cloudy, lacking a little bit more. Under the grey fish, the funny laughter of the teenager. Since the arrogance of Ban Q, Thuong Don Dong Luk Tru Truet Tap at La Port, we all look after. Although not on the banquet table, more than 2 years of accompanying are also respect. The story at sea, we do not hold it. Reclaim it as possible. The table began to tremble. The Uncle Lean glared at the boy. His forehead was sweaty with transparent beans, the blue veins protruding, like using great strength. The boy raised his hand to call the table. How was the table of small pubs, seeing the two people talking with clues, soon hanging a heart waiting next to him. Seeing the boy raised his hand, Harity laughed and the teenager did not say much. Took the golden enemy in his hand, saying. The Bam Bam was shocked, jokingly pushed back. His mouth said. Objective. This one is enough. He only drinks 2 cups. Does not need so much. The teenager shook his hands again, stuffed into the golden enemy, instead of his fingers folded, patted and said. No. Most of the table understood, so urgently that he just wanted to cry. The teenager stood up again, covering his head towels and wrapped his head, going out on his own. The Uncle Lean opposite the table at this time. The opposite was like a postponement. Also jumped up, pulled his voice in the direction of the air. You come here. The people in the room were panicked and jumped, looking around the 4 sides. Nor did anyone see him in return. In the Kong quietly, the bustling was completely bustling. Rock, paper, scissors and rock, paper, scissors. But a mouthful of wine has not poured into the throat. They understood. So the person named a bomb was waiting outside the door. Of all the ports on the beach, there is always such an open place to build a tall buffalo skin, in which one side has no screen, can let the cart of horses drive in and out. When the festival is the place of acting, singing, the day is the place where gynecological gathering to drink alcohol. As for the normal pub in the city, just did not prepare a large tables and chairs. There was no cupboard. Plate was like a large shield. The room was also small, so far did not do business with the gynecological department. Naturally open the door was low. This house was no However, at this time, the brick beside this door began to wiggle and dust, drop like water flowing each. The teenager stopped. The Uncle Lean in the back laughed coldly. The thin lips under the darkness immediately pursed into a more cold laziness, shaking his head like many words. The shucking room was getting more and more intense. The cup moved on the table, full of brick walls as if they wanted to scramble. Seeing each block of loose pushing in the blinding gap through the sky on the outside, the teenager did not retreat back, just standing. In the end, the wall close to the pub rode with more than half of the rumbling. Originally, the door position. Suddenly the rest of the remaining hole. Wooden bricks were still sporadic. The sun suddenly threw it into the dust, separated into rays of each strand like countless sharp swords. The teenager stood in the middle of the dust and the sun. The old soft brocade fabric was flipped up by the air, revealing a gentle face inside. The teenager raised his head, immediately facing the tall gynecological department. He was 17 years old, among the children of the same age, as tall and thin, but compared to the body like a giant rock, still delicate like grass. Abon, what are you waiting for? Squeeze him. The Uncle Lean raised his leg. Do you still want wages? The gynecology scratched the back of the neck and replied loudly. Immediately raised his hand as big as the bronze gong to grab the teenager. The teenager avoided it. The brocade fabric to the side was. The cold smile on the face of the Uncle Liu had not even raised, stiffened in the middle. Death brilliant hair. The new sailors on one side drinking talks also fluttered to go. Temporarily regretted everything in the small water. The person who intentionally went to the Trade True Dynasty. Big expansion, nurturing the beauty of beauty. Inside, the gynecological shop took a basin that looks like this tall and evil. The large amount of money invited. And before the person who came to the shop inside to search, arrogant thought that it was prepared to be fulfilled. Such outcome. Hewer. But his gynecology also fell into. Like the city, there is only this port. A battle of red dust. The young man reached his right arm into the air. His footsteps were constantly. The birds flying. He collected the bird's wings. Directed him straight down. A circuit fell down no more than 10 meters from the ground. Just deploying the wings around a round. Parked on his right arm. It turned out to be a standard bluebird. The teenager of the shining bird's tail suddenly reached out to the wings. Took off a small leather bag. He had just gone. His wrist shook and took his wings and jumped on his right shoulder, leaving him with his hands to take off his leather bag, and took out his 2 fingers from the inside. Gentle steps suddenly stopped. The standard triangle is hoarse and loudly operating. The sea breeze screamed through the street. The fragile silk paper rolled in the wind, rustling, trembling. The fishy fabric covered the face. The loud nosy stream. The long wind blowing through the ears. Only teenage. Gradually, the paper rolls were grasped into small and hard blocks. The evil bird shouted for a long time. The self-control on the shoulder flapped his wings, because its owner began to run fast. Quiet, risky, and fluttering as if to bring the entire. He left the big road, jumped through the filthy canal, through the narrow alley, a fierce faithful hand holding the head. In the maze winding in the alley everywhere, pile of rubbish and unclean objects. 3 steps to turn, 5 steps turning, permanently looking at the front, waiting is what is. Permanently with a turning without thinking of the same dead end. But the teenager is pleased. After turning over more than 100 small bends, he went to the end of a narrow alley. Spleen disappeared behind a household. Outside is still daytime. In the room is dark and chaotic, a lower corner than the small lamps. Serving the dragon's tail of the dragon tail that the uncle of the worship is the only weak light. In the chest arbitrarily stacked flavoring, the smell of rotting and the smell of silk spread out. The teenager never stopped, continuing to run like he jumped over every large bundle using raw skin to wrap tightly on the floor. Unintentionally kicked a roll in, it opened. Immediately there were about 10 steel blades of the shallot leaves rushing out, illuminating an unknown. Instead of picking up, the teenager hurriedly went to the 3rd floor, pushed the narrow window, launched a person jumping into the window of the opposite person from 3 meters. It was a long, lasting small building, which looked like no people, but also filled with knives. He went down to the wine cellar, pushed 2 large empty barrels on the wall, pulled the sword out of the waist to pry stone on the ground, shocked on a wide but thin stone slab, revealed the stairs below, and finally had a vague fire. The teenager continued to run like flying forward. One side pulled down the fish on his shoulder. He had never run so fast, so long. Sweat flowing into his eyes. On the cliffs on both sides of the tunnel hanging a small yellow wine light turned into a 7-color pink light, Vega, running straight nearly half the time. The staircase was the opposite upward. The tunnel to the end. The teenager used the hilt of the sword to knock on the door of the head. Very quickly someone from outside opened the lock, lifting the door to let him go up. Bring the clothes here. He was exhausted and suppressed, telling the young people in the young man. The other person performed. This is a shady room. The garment material of Kim Big Fight then piled up a wall, in the middle on the small table with tea cake. On the opposite wall to build an expensive silver glass. The static of the guests in the garment store. The teenager wiped out sweat, threw it on the ground, in the room impatiently. A few steps like animals would besiege before studying the other. He went in, holding a hat with his army shoe. He was fluent, just installed the button and went out. Lowly with his voice. Declare in the business. We go on the palace. Studying things behind him. Hearing that, he did not say anything to make his hands on the ceremony. Took him to the front of the store. Instead of his curtains, raised his voice loudly. To General. You go leisurely. Recently, the straight line was just over 2 miles of underground, blocking through half of the long narrow port area. To the northwest of the port of Tatla, 5,000 people approached the army of Vu Lam troops. Thang Càn raised his hand to wipe away the sweat on his forehead. Experiencing a fast run, the heart beats hard into the eardrum. The immediate eyes slightly. He put his hand in his chest, took out the other silk paper roll, sweat-soaked. A row of ink was dissolved. But, still, on 30 July, on the 3rd day of August, Ki Vuong Kam surrounded Thien Kai. The night of the year, Hak Vuong destroyed the siege to escape. Tam was broken. Tan that was completely. It was the end of the summer of the 7 year. Old's unicorns on the east of Luke, away from Hon Hai. In these 8 years, tens of thousands of people and soldiers were about to be taken to death. At this time they were still busy living the day of crying day and day, completely did not know the dim road ahead. Out patents are brocade red pomegranate embroidered dragon patterns that have just been covered on the right shoulder. The bedroom door is loudly pushed out. The maids are loosened with both hands. The cloak rushes to the ground. She realized that the person came in there was the general of the shogun, the Thang family, the young age, the usual attitude of peace. Absolutely no. But now she suddenly felt the instinct of fear. He was no longer a teenager that she realized. He scanned her eyes. The female cowed a bit. Even the cell fell to the ground, did not pick it up. Immediately hurriedly retreated out. The lawyer I dropped. Did not dare to touch this teenager at all. Chan. Kwai Swang wildly frowned at him, just stooping to pick up the extracellular to wear. Thang Càn herself with dry tongue to the sound of no sound, just quiet from the chest to take out a small object. It was a 2-finger, wide silk paper roll, arbitrarily. The paper rolls seemed to be half open. The 13-year-old male comedian suddenly closed his eyes tightly, seemed to be burned by the other words for a long time. In the bedroom filled with serious silence. Is this news authentic? After a long time, Kwai Swang finally asked. His sound was spoiled but sparse. Thang Càn Tự said hardly. This is the news that the commercial boat entered the port this afternoon. They just came back from Tran Van Mac. Kwai Sai once again looked down at the paper in his hand. The father was dead. The city was completely destroyed. That was completely destroyed, as if it meant. Kwai Swang whispered to the end. The sound is more husky and shrill. Trong Huk broke through. How many? He suddenly launched cruelly, using all the body's energy to bring the paper to throw it down. Thang Càn Tự was also not unexpectedly about the reaction of Kwai Swang, but it was still unable to respond. Had to take a step forward, strictly pressing the weak shoulder of the male comedian. Photographer Phi was sick for many years. Kwai Sai was young. He knew how to avoid obedience. Looked at his face. And in the palace was not I. Catching more than billions of the same model. Yen Lang Deco. Peony is still a bit respected by his father. Also fortunate to have her. Kwai Swang to avoid many awkward bullies. He came from Thien Kai to West Luke. All arranged through the hasty speaker. Yen Lang Emperor Ko married Lancho. Before walking, he could not run to the emperor to meet him once. This is only to people who mourn him to protect his relatives. The waves of flooding flooded. Trong Huk pulled out the battle. Daequan supported Beanfoot Cork, even if he was a 13-year-old teenager who was poor. Would take his mother and however, he was not. He was even 5,000 soldiers in their hands could not mobilize. Could only be in this hateful remote place. Stared at the mother and billions of blood, screaming. Kwai Swang. His bravery just stopped here. Kwai Swang quietly. His eyes stared at the paper he had just thrown. The paper was soft. Just left the hand without strength. Like the wings of the tick slowly in the air, half carved. Just silently fell to the ground. The resentment and the language suddenly burst into the other. All of which were all swallowed by this room. Not saving a bit of ashes and echo. Your Highness. Thang Càn considers every word. Comforting. Yen Lang Co married Trong An Inin. At this time, he must be in the land of the La Palace to avoid heat. Not in Thien Kai City. You did not answer him. Again for a long time to raise his head. On the door. There was a soft tap. The female Uncle Lin did not dare to go to the room. Only the door was said. Your Highness, today is 15. At this time you should go to the Majesty. What do you mean? Father Huang Bang Ha. Dai Trung Quoc Vuong. Maybe you still want me to wear a red body. Go to worship the king of the Uncle Lin, have to live half dead. We go back and forth. Maybe let the Uncle Lin know. Could it be telling them? His Vulam Quan from the folk to buy a secret. We go back and forth. Can we let the Uncle Lin know? You look at his entourage. The corners of his eyes want to crack. As if he was suspicious in the heart of this person without the heart of waste. All were iron and ice as ice. Of course, laughing coldly. The sound of all is hoarsely. Write a letter to Trong Huk. What to say? In the heart of the more fierce, the other is clearly pitying him. As if he was saying, you are miserable. I understood. Dead is not your mother. It is not our own will to give birth in the royal family. Nor the will of this devilish locality. These people are free. Want to do whatever you want. How can I understand? The face of Thang Càn Tự immediately changed. Immediately calmed down, saying, Your Highness is... You were surprised to look at him for a while. The two rights to be bored to let go. The whole person was low. You lead me to flee. After that, the harbour emerged and the soldiers who went out to protect the great trade union came, saying that the next day they would recover us. It is you calling those who blessed at night to patrol the defence of the group. In exchange for property news. Business contribution. You are always right. Today, Chu Fungi started the rebellion. If it was done. Dong Luke quiet about him. These fishing uncles, because he could continue with Dong Luke to trade, naturally would not hesitate to hand over to Chu Fungi to handle. If we want to survive, we can only rely on Trong Huk. If Trong Huk defeated, we could only die. You went to the front of the table. Opened a new roll of paper. Marked the pen head on the ink. How to bend the arrogance and arbitrary of children. Oppressed under the smiling face that could not be broken like iron. Drops. Staring his eyes into a clean paper. The male child in his eyes was intense. But he was still a written circuit. The letter was written immediately. Always not more or less 12 rows. The style of writing. Prince Trung True. Each person had such a brain. The buddy on the white ink lured the Sister Chu essay, sophisticatedly observed, then folded it. Gave it to the fierce. the innocent face of the silver. Well, I go to Nguyen Luong. Kwai Sai repaired him and pushed the door out. Thinking a little bit. You take me away. He was a 13-year-old child. The smile was still bright, then tired. His face was heavy. Quietly followed. Your mother is alone in the deep. The news is absolutely not available. I only know that I am pitifully commissioned. I am too useless. That night I asked you. You are not without martial arts. Why the Forbidden's martial arts army fell to the last position. You said. Your father when you were still alive as the deputy general. My mother hoped that you would also go to the army. But you have a heart to follow the craftsman of Halak to go to school. So in Votrong intentionally show off a lot of loopholes, hope to drop the board, to be able to talk to the mother. No one voluntarily comes here. We are not the same freedom. Invite the vines of flowers, burning atmosphere, on the gold, plated railing leaning, as a small garden. Observing half of that refreshing breeze, looking at the distance, you can see. Is it again lost again? The precious face offered to disgusted redness, turning his head. Nor did he pay attention to him. Under the wall of the micro swing, between the grass and flower beds scattered the carpets, or sitting or lying, both teenage self. Ages approximately, the body is tall, wearing a thin. On the left side of the bow's hair, there is a black hair braided into the golden chain, and the exquisite jewels. In front of the chest hanging the golden god of the royal god heavy. The scales on the tail of the dragon are big as a precious sea of mosaic high lamb. Obviously one of the pretty high backs. People like his milk, if he was saved by his black hand. What should he do? Returning to the east. Even his father did not recognize. At this time, the gate of the army of the Luong Vor army opened. A fleet of the palace went out. In front of them respectfully kneeling down, offering the large naked dishes on the head. A child is less than 3 years old. Due to the rags, then heard the name of the Satan. For corners, normal burning unfortunately the cost of one. But still could not drown out the rotten. Straight to roll on the bed. Limbs twitching, throat emitting wheezing. Strongly lifted up nearly 2 meters. Holding out a cold sweat. Lightly curly, wavering fibers, like it is adventurous in the invisible. The back of the idol of transparent flowers. More than 10 fragile curtains. The smell of glaze seemed to be unlike hundreds of thousands of poisonous beans sticking out his tongue, crawling out, strictly clenching his throat. The scent, making him reminiscent of the chaotic summer night last year. The body of people everywhere was burned by the flame of burning black paint. The appearance of nails and coal melted in one place. Still vague can distinguish. Today Thien Kai Band in the city. Just afraid is also the scene of seeing so startled. Brothers and sisters in one place, the billionaire of the life and death still unknown, the mother. In law, Di Dung is the situation like. He did not. The exhaustion of his eyes shook his eyes and rolled his eyes in his eyes, stamping his head with the statue of Long Vi then. Standing up and wrapped the flower chain around the neck of the god. You see, Tutalak's face is very unsightly, very similar to his father who has just lost. The sound of a young woman like a silver bell. Although intentionally suppressed, it was still clear to the ear. The low laughter of the teenager fluttered back and forth, like every wavy starting to start, pushing you to shake. Kwai Swong felt something exploded in his body, then burned down. In the blink of an eye, tears in the eyes evaporated dry. Smashed into the eyes can see. All things are awkward, not knowing where the energy came from. He suddenly turned around, like a rough horse stood up. Towards the vague face of the. This is the most fierce appearance in the 13-year life of Chu Kwai Swong. Although in the immediate future, there was no mirror, he also knew that his face was definitely a threatening. He saw that the noble queens of the nobility, the handsome appearance of the beauty was fluttering backwards. He was no longer physically. No more spirit, only a fierce idea in his mind. He wanted to beat these people to death. All the people dared to stop. Also, the 13-year-old male comedian clenched his hands, the energy all over his body put all his strength into it. In the blink of an eye, he wanted to. A long blink of an eye like the heavenly heaven. He heard Thankin screaming for a shrill screaming girl. He even heard himself to twisted fingers when he emitted a sound of echo, and was unclear. From the bottom of the water to eavesdrop on the shore. Far away vaguely like a generation. Resentment accumulated deep in the coverage. Fluttering hot lava suddenly destroyed the ground. The eyes were about to turn into screaming eruption. But in the end, there was no. Heavy objects fell to the ground rumbling and exploded each person. The half-talented Long Vi, half-old, fell on the ground. The vague dragon scales were still beautiful. Reaching out to the air. His hands are broken to the elbow. Kwai Swong held hands. Crushed jasmine. The other end of the flower chain was still fiercely wrapped on the sophisticated neck of the god. He gasped, like a small beast. His eyes were still full of faintness. The Uncle Lean was surprised to look at the pearl pieces of pearls everywhere, all forgetting his words. Oh my god. Do not know how long. Only a maid crying, rushing to the feet of Kwai Swong, wasting to bring the statue of God once again. The noble young girls at this time were also startled to wake up, slowly gathering closer to Quý Sưởng. Thang Càn tilted himself forward, stopped the buds behind his back. The leader of the teenager bent down to look at Quý Sưởng, smiling coldly, and said, "Crushing the god of God, you need to be a slave for a month of atoned. This month, there is this servant of you. All are slaves." The shoulder of Thang Càn Tự. Quý Sưởng raised his head to look at the other boy's face. Concealing the blood in his eyes began to gradually retreat. He clearly distinguished the cruelty on the other face, and little by little carved into the memory, so that he could not forget forever. Not. A long time later, he opened his mouth to answer. The sound was trembling. The teenager never thought in the world there was such an answer. He glared at his eyes and said, "What did you say?" "I am not a slave." "You are clear. Low voice. Crazy. The unexpected person must burn the god of God. Even the king will not be exempted. Long vi then, if angry at the crime, will lift white waves at the sea. You know what kind of white waves are." Quý Sưởng stared at him. His eyes recovered pure initially. "You guys," he casually laughed. The idea of disdain. Hiệt and Ngạo said not to speak. The uncle of the whole country wholeheartedly believed in long vi then. Naturally could not hear such language. The angrily teenager grabbed the bodice of precious clothes. Raised his. Thang Càn quickly reached his eyes quickly. One hand caught the teenager's wrist, saying, "Slave, you also want to be burned to death." The teenager became more and more arrogant, resentful, and thrown on the arms. Pulling out a precious shawl, Thang Càn furrowed his eyebrows tightly. One hand pressed on the hilt of his hip on his hips, heard behind a clear, crispy silver bell sound. There are people from under the curtains that came out. The sweet sound was determined to shout, "Ythi Than, it is my slave. You must not." Outside the curtain, everyone, "You hear that in my heart there is a sound, is her." Later in 22 years, he recalled this stage. The female body looked around. Why Trang dressed? All were vague. Just the sweet sentence that cut the language and was in the ears if echoing, like the day and night of the early sunshine of the first land. Clearly piercing through the stir, the crown prince Lan Lan from his side ran out, grabbed the skirt of the female comedian, constantly calling, "Billy." The female comedian squatted down, groping and hugging Lan into her chest. Under her forehead tied a pure white ribbon. Behind her head tied, covering a pair of blind eyes. In front of the $2 billion, hanging a pattern of the same long vi then. Thang Càn Tự also remembered. This 8-9-year-old mistress. It was true that the little princess almost died under his blade. The next day, Ban Ki was rebellious. The 2 orphans of the Lin Ka Vuong fight were brought to Phung Nomingu district, waiting for the winter of the winter to be repaired. Welcoming the crown prince Lan Lan, Prince Sister Lan was faithful to staying at Phung Non to nurture, thinking that he had just returned to Vuong Than. Ythi Than Ni laughed softly. "I missed a little more. Tutalak was a benefactor to save your life. It was hard to blame you hurriedly rob people from the hands of such kaka. Right not Lan? I wanted these to slaves. Ythi that Ni Ka also wanted. Immediately went to the bridge to the great army." To Lan Lan was calm. The arrogant attitude was even more than Ythi that. The muscles on his cheeks are tense. Their father's father was still Uncle Lin Vuong, actually soon became a waste. The new brother was truly the head of a country. He pursed his lips. To Lan also did not pay attention to him anymore. Calling a palace. Immediately there was a small girl who was approximately she spoke up. To Lan brought Lan Lan into the heart of the slave, said, "You and the nipples bring Lan to the palace to have dinner. I want to go out a bit." Kang Deep panicked, kneeling down, saying, "Your Highness, if no one supports people above the crime, Kang, fear of what? This place is not a new slave available. Hey, you come here to lead me." To Lan also squatted on the ground. A small hand did not say morality to rise into the air. So waiting for the person to lead her to stand up. Quý Sưởng face was immediately hot, humiliating, and it seemed like he was mixed with something. He could not distinguish himself. "I'm not slavery," he said. "If you don't make a slave, you must die. Maybe you're not afraid to die." To Lan tilted his head, like very bewildered. Quý Sưởng bit his teeth and said, "I'm not afraid." To Lan was shocked, suddenly smiled again, saying, "That day, the whole person was so scared that he trembled, talking and trembled. On her eyes, she was stopped by a broadband ribbon. Everyone could not see how her eyebrows were circulating. Everyone could see just half of her. But in this blink of an eye, Quý Sưởng felt something broke down his cage. "Hey, what are you? Pull me up, hey." To Lan stomped his legs. The silver bell on the wrist of their ankles was wild. "I want to go out." It was Quý Sưởng also surprised. He would naturally reach out like that, let her away. "There is another person? Where is that tool?" To Lan on the other hand in the air was obscured. Thang Càn grabbed her, reply. To Lan smiled again, raised his head and said, "It is you, I remember. Your liver is greater than him, then in your hand also trembling. But when talking, It is like nothing. What do you do? She took a breath of cold air, and the mind furrowed. Your Highness, careful stares under your Thang Càn self. Sternly fluctuated, slowly relaxing his hands without self. The fire of the fire burned out of the stronghold, lively once again to live before his eyes. Not only once, he was murdered with such a comedy. Remember that night, the mournful rain, seeing her blurry appearance on the shoulder of the gynecology, the cheeks were a bit crimson, a drop of blood when he raised the sword slash from the nose. However, up to now, she thought that Kwai Sai and he once, how funny, fearing to kill her, is a clear, simple thing without thinking like that. Now even the courage to look straight at the face of the blind girl, he suddenly no longer exists. Jalan innocently did not know what he was concerned about. Just noticed one hand pulling one person, agitating to run towards Hyundai go. Discovering them walked hesitating. She smiled again. It's stupid, you see. Outdoors dark. The rainy season has just passed. From the northeast of the Atrial River more than 10 miles. The endlessness is the torch. Sometimes there is a piece of light down the mobile stream. The trembling lantern falling on the small boat bow. During the day, the bustle followed the silence. On the fragrant majesty of the flower, they waved the shoulders and sat beside a Coutron Cat waterfall. Their feet slipped outside the railing. The rowing boat for sale of melodious malt candy emerged. The lights on the boat deeply travelled in the sky. What do the stars you see? Where is the moon? Is the moon bright or dark moon? The night breeze swirled from the sea to overflow. The land crowded between them, long hair to the waist and white silk fluttering everywhere. Each strand carried the incense, itching through the two cheeks of the teenagers. Thang Càn Tự was a bit awkward and able to bear many times to ask. So he had to say the truth. Your Highness, today it is full of clouds. Delan overly quiet. His face lost interest. After a while, I honestly hurt my feet. Put my chin on my knees, Sudley said. The other people are afraid of me angry, no matter how cloudy. Can widen the eyes of lying. How does then Hutin like? How to keep the planet light? Thang Càn Tự was just laughing. Lan Lam was like a bird who leaned up. That's right, where's your country? The teenager said softly. At the direction of the wind blows. The other side of the sea. The female comedian raised her hand. Towards the wind on the other side. In the middle of the sea except there is an island. Have you ever gone? Mount Man? Talan asked again. How? Thang Càn self recalls for a while. Saying. The wind is going to push the boat away. It takes 10. The female comedy did not say a word. Her small face bent down for a long time to look up. I have never gone through the locality until now. There is no guy, wherever we can't go. She sighed, suddenly remembering the male and female beside him for a long time. So he grabbed his elbow to poke him. Hey. Heard the story of the old hearing from being stunned. The dumb slave I didn't need. Kwai Swan did not pay attention to her. Silently observing more than half of the citadel of all Batla at his feet. It was when cooking dinner. Every small window was faint, all hiding a household, old and small gathered in one place. Bustling gathered inside, outside. His face was gradually gloomy, in his eyes. There was light. Delan felt that on the tremor of trembling very small, surprised, said. What are you doing? On the one hand, he put his hand out. Did not say a word to find his face. The small fingers plucked down. Touched the cold. She frantically raised his face. Hurriedly said. I also don't really want you to be a slave. You saved me. I will not let you be trampled by YY. Run. But he was wrong. Unable to bear the other fingers. Gently touched. Self. Knowing. Waiting for salty tears to flow. His cocoon will be closed again. Compared to the original more thick. About the mouth of the wound patch. Again. Separating all the ability to be looked at and hurt. It will be involved in the whole of the whole business. Always white night. The stronger the wind broke the thick clouds. From the high tower in the middle of the air. The star was as dense as the silver sand, which wanted to fall into the eyes of the boy. Sea was also awakened, still sitting up. According to, nothing will. She shook her hand, so don't return her. Kwai Sai reluctantly laughed. But we righted. How do you know how to fall into the sea as me? You have never seen my surpass. The little lady did not know why indignant. Pushed his hand away. Raised his voice shouting. Thang Càn Tự and Kwai Swang temporarily were terrified. Kwai Sai reached out to pull her. She struggled again. Staggered. The movement of the clumsy death. Fiercely intense. Was stumbled by something. Rushed to the bottom of the. Thang Càn jumped up to support her. Delan hugged the swing by herself. Stood up once again. Not knowing how much energy, the full lips were all pursed into a line. Between the wrist. The pile of silver bracelets and the walls of the walls are slender in one place. The liberation does not release. Immediately use the other hand to snatch out. The teeth of the flower stabbing to bite into the flesh. She still better breath, using force to tear. Suddenly, she shouted a short voice, feeling her. It was warm hands, nor especially robust. but had the energy of an adult. The other hands and Delan sat down somewhere. The night breeze was slightly cold in her face. Her whole body gently shook. She thought a little, understanding she was sitting on the swing. Her roundabout was a delicate silver thread longer than 2 meters. Above the delicate dotted with silver bells, softly wrapped around her wrist and then circled, returning around. The terminal installed in. The other knelt down in front of her, lifted her hand over. Her fingertips in the roundabout pattern slowly walked over. Loyalty to the psycho not letting the branches wrapped around her pain. It is a kind of meticulous tolerance, making people unable to breathe a sigh of relief and peace of mind. Pain? He asked in his voice. He was familiar with children. Delan shook his head. She missed his voice. The night of Banqiu chaos, it was this stable clear sound, making her startled to feel. As long as he was alive, she could still survive. When he took the rein, the name pulled her into Bin Fong. She felt that his ice-cold hand trembled very small and could not stop. He was also not the courageous life. Just a few dozen people still listened to his command. But he was like him. If he had made a support for others, there would be no fear. This morality many years later she understood. She did not understand their language, but she did not forget the short-lived sentences that winded in the ear. In the world of Nong, light of her was the only solid support. Finally, Tankan herself found a lock, replaced her to remove each round of the roundabout, meticulously withdrawing the micro-wall branch, and wanted to once again. Delan pulled his hand back, hid behind his back, reached out and said, "This also helps me take off." He followed. She brought the small, soft legs surfing up, making herself saying. He seemed to smile, asking her, although the low bass sound suppressed in the cage. Yes. She puffed her cheeks and said, "I don't like it. The girls are afraid of me walking around, tying the bells on the left and right of me, telling Deep to follow me all day. This one is not. The other is not. But I am not the cat and dog, very obnoxious." So he set foot on her knees, removed the bell on the ankle. The 4 sophisticated complex wrapped bracelets were delivered into her hand, heavy on her hand like a silver shackle. She swung her wrists smoothly, laughed, her hands grabbed the swing. Her legs pulled forward, her small body stood up on the swing table. Almost the tool, you avoided, she said. Tang Càn had just avoided in front of her. Suddenly heard a shaking silver bell, like a rushing orchestra, fluttering through his ear. Delan bit his lip, used all his body strength, threw a handful of the other roundabout outdoors. Her whole body, the whole swing, swayed according to the throwing force. Swayed first. The energy of the female comedy was too small. The roundabout had not flew out of the radio. Immediately fell to the foot of the buell. Really no need. Do not regret it tomorrow. Call people to go instead of you looking. Kwai Swung picked up the roundabout in his hand, estimated, also refrained from smiling. No. Delan was on the swirling swing, her sleeves flying, 2 long silk strips behind her head in the dark night shining like a new snow. Following the wind fluttering, you laughed and said, "Very good." Immediately stood up, aggressively threw all the rounds out, using such great strength, as if throwing all the weight suppressed in him. Tomorrow, the news of the late death can be brought to the palace, which is also the day when he started to start fighting. Until the scores of Engin Kwan rolled down on the long sea of lights, Ingok's clear bell was still vaguely. The swing flew up to the night sky, swaying back and forth between the vast South Sea and the lights. The sweet voice of the blind female comedy. The tall man, supporting me. Tang Càn was surprised to turn his head. The swing was moving to the highest. The female comedy, with the white body of his hands loosen. Both from the swing jumped out, like a blinding clear stream of water from amidst the vibrant stars flying straight down, falling in his heart. The white shirt in the intense wine battered. The female comedy like a white bird from upstairs opposite the water soaring up, touching the right chest in the chest. He could not support, retreated a few steps behind. His eyes were about to fall down from the bridge. Fortunately, Kwai Swung tilted the user to support them. The last 3 people fell into a pile, almost all falling into the water. Fortunately, this small bridge lies on one side impregnated with the crown prince. This is the end of the spring, germinating plants. In the kingdom everywhere is the splendid makeup of the 5 gathering. The breeze of the fragrant gathering out of the people go out. The tool, you are useless. Delan jumped up. Stone. The young man smiled and stood up. One side of the precious side pulled up. It's not a tall man. His highness will soon be higher than me. Really? Who, really, eh? Delan on the ice was still the same as the silk bandage, reaching out and touching their shoulders. The expression of her face was extremely like a small lady playing hide and seeking, but her lips became so beautiful, laughing like a wildflower bud. The warm weather was warm, everything was blooming early. So the 14-year old female comedian, the smiling, you widen her to just on why Sam. This outfit is still medium. Is the Palace of Deep? She did not stop you. Delan laughed and said, the ladies are all for rest, happy to run out to see the classic, leaving only Deep Maxi and Y in the fake room sleeping. I have never seen you not so sympathetic. Kwai Swang also laughed. Most people have people in the heart. Cannot go out to see the dictionary. Afraid of resentment will die. Can deep is people buying. When you come to the session, you will be heartbroken. Delan rejected. He also knew that he made himself doing it. So on the blushing face, changing the cast said, "What are you?" Shen's sister is a normal body. I wear a troops of Vu Lam Quan. Disguised his defense. On the contrary, he also appeared. Kwai Swang replied. Suddenly he narrowed his handsome eyes, listened to the vague drums outside Vuong Plan, then took the hand of Delan, saying, "Slowly, there will be no boats, go quick." Delan refused to move half a step, laughing at his hand. "Now you are not your highness prince from East Luke. I am not the most arrogant princess of the whole king. We are just a guard and a slave." After saying that, he changed his direction, laughing cleverly and said, "Thank General." Tang shook his head, had to go in front. Delan and Kwai Swang at the back bowed obediently to follow. Always laughing and stealing his elbows pushed back and forth. After 2 steps, Tang suddenly stopped, turned around to observe Delan for a while, moving forward to take off her blindfolded ribbon, saying, "In the whole Wongfan, only you force this thing." He folded the pure white ribbon, collected into his chest, turned his head to go. Delan did not even know how to stand in place. His eyelashes were tight, like a wet butterfly winged on the early morning of his face. "Stupid, open your..." You rubbed her hair. Someone closed his eyes on the road. Delan's eyebrows furrowed, his whole body seemed to suppress his strength. Heavy eyelashes slightly move, over a long time. They knew for nearly 9 years. This is the second time he saw her eyes. Of the lotus. Chan's sister. Delan called Dankan Tu's name, grabbing the fringe wire on his executioner. You bowed my eyes low. No one realized that the god of light moved inside. Guardians of the guard of the hit door of the low status, almost never seen through the appearance of the same Delan, did not carefully check competition with the ladder. Then all the people went out every day, like the hands and feet of the king. In the past, it made it difficult for his other guards. Some of them had tons of their heads. Seeing him very respectfully, Hang dangerous white tie continuously emerge. Hi, Uncle Lin and Trung Tru have a wish. The only royal family of Hak Vuong is the Sut of the army of Luong Vuong Tu Tram. Once Hak Vuong Danko, Tu Tram will be the queen of Dongluk. Lin immediately took the excuse of the heir, extended not to make an appointment, implicitly made Thuong Lu bring Luong their weapon to transport to North Luke, the high price of the Vuong to sell. In the 2-3 years, the Luong thou of the Vuong master was half from the port of Tat Bat La to the Swong Ho Hon Luke. Later, Tian Vuong continuously flee. Chu Trong Hut naturally revealed the hegemony meteorism. The eye saw the right behind the young Vu Lam Quan's name. Trung Tru's young army stood solemnly performing the ceremony with the guards. The corners of his lips slightly lifted up a cold smile that was almost impossible to recognize. Seeing the richness of wealth, even if you are invincible, you have to scramble around. If once it is not satisfactory, the people can put the rock into the well. He lowered his voice, speaking in the language of the East. Here, on the river of the ear, only the special boat of Vuong that can be passed away, in the sight can be seen, crowded with small boats decorated colors. The water on the floating side of the floating is the petals of the stamens, the phenomenon, the jelly, the moss, the red sunset, like a brave brocade suddenly spread out. The imaginative pattern of the world has the whole place, the lights are imagined in the whole place, each other, the great prayer. Thence woven, according to the year of the East. This is the spring of the year of the 30. Free solicitor. Thanken Tu was a 23 year old young man. Shu Kwai Swang was 19. After a few months, Shu Trong Huk established Swang Hon in the north of Luke Honshu as the second capital. The resistance for nearly 6 years. But from the beginning to the end, he had never crowned the throne. The reign of the unicorn that Emperor Tu used was like that. So the department of course had just seen the bright light. But it was the light mournful blood. Many villagers in Trung Quoc soon did not find an adult Nom Din. The great army passed through the pile of grave, soon to be hungry. But the body was so thin, even the wild dog was not full enough. For people at the port of Bat La, this is a wonderful year. Last fall of the rich rice beans, until the end of spring. The new wine experienced a winter reserve. Brewing the wine was proficient. The new rainy season will not be on time. This is the rainy ceremony, also the most bustling day of the year of the Bat La. Starting early in the morning, all the small boats in the city are completely renewed. Through the waterway along the web, trading incense, fresh flowers, lipstick. After that, Van Bat La immediately started decorating. From the young woman to the old lady, every poor woman uses a huge fake treasure with a beautiful silk fabric for her as a princess and the queen of the kingdom. On the beard of the men, the male fragrance of orange flowers, incense and high air pine. groomed into the shape of the curved spirit. The traders show off the talent will even be inside the car into the glitter. Artisan Dulang from Tam Luke that converges he has turned the river and the building into a stage. Dance, circus, acting, bustling music and coils of tinkering into the tin bowl interwoven together. The blooming but cheap reflection on the water is narrow. Bustling, everyone knows it is fake. But they are happy to first enter this fascinating day. 2. Daydream. Go quickly. For a moment more and more, we will not find the boat. Kwai Swong raised his voice towards the surface of the river, raising his hand. A small boat did not immediately direct them to turn. The boat crowded in the flow of a long time of elaborate, arduous and stretching to their feet. The small boat in the outside covered with rough flower fabric, spent a morning. The color under the water has completely changed. The body of the boat remains the same as the old, except the boatman, only allowing one to sit. It's dangerous, we come out too late. Now claiming not to find 3 boats. Kwai Swong gently directed the blanks in the boat jumping in. After turning Ban Q, he had half a year of residence in the army of Vu Lam near the port area. Watching the rain festival was not a first. Take this boat and talk later. Thang Càn Tự from the surface of the river looked a little far away, smiling slightly. He let go of his hands spread out, bowed his head to the boatman. You come up here. Give way to me. Ah. 3 or 4 golden fells fell on the wooden board at his feet. My boat bought it. So what should Lan do now? When Thang Càn jumped down the Chinese bridge, Kwai Swong asked in surprise. Thang Càn himself did not answer. Stooped back to his hand, casual from the dazzling boat to grab something, used a force to pull one. The other object hit the collision, inching closer. Amidst the many colors of confusion, it is a pure white color, brilliant to blind. The 2 army, buying flowers, giving to the ladies. It turned out that the large wooden pots that children sold flowers are often used, filled with pure white lotus, small female comedy from the pile of snow flowers exposed to shoulder edge, dragging the sound of children. How much is a branch? Young people asked. A silver co. And little female comedy saw them as a crowded person, widening her eyes wide, and the price. Seeing that young man laughed and shook his head, knew that he could not deceive. Hurriedly continued. Still twice as expensive than usual. The young man reached his hand into his chest, as if he wanted to become a friend. The little girl happily stood up and accepted, and stuffed in his hand and jumped. It was a sophisticated wall of the soybean grain, holding in the cold hand to the bone, like the melted ice block. The treasure has a witty item. Only the sophisticated wall cannot be fake. Not only red like a strong bone, even the light in the sun is also beautiful rainbow. The great skit looks like that. The market price must be nearly 100 golden and even the flower pots buy. Do you sell it? The young man smiled and asked. The little lady looked at himself for a while, suddenly brought the crystal stuffed into his mouth, jumping out of the wooden pot, from the boat slot crowded out to swim, thinking that he was only afraid of this generous people to change his mind. Kwai Swong looked, laughing to the mouth. Your Highness. Thang Càn stood firmly on the boat, holding her waist, lifting her down. Kwai Swong held the large wooden pot. The other hand led Lan through. To Lan had a ride on a flower more thicker than a meter. About AI for an hour. Immediately smiled. It was the last warm sunshine before the rainy season came. The sun dried up to the bones of the body soft. The fragrant wind carried each of the warm velvet hairs rushed on the face. Her white dress was blown by the wind, hundreds of thousands of folds immediately fluttering. Like a new on the head of her wearing a flower as big as the hand, made from golden gold. It looked very lively. In the heart of the flower growing smoothly as the butterfly beard. The small piece of jelly like the tip of the needle stitched down, trembling down. The wind blew through, the tinkling sound. Thang Càn realized that the flower, it was always a person who offered at the harbor, called Hiet La. Lan lifted the skirt. The huge flowers were clean in the wooden pot buried on her knees. She raised her head, letting the sunshine on her small and sophisticated face. The pot was rolled around by the waves, gently hitting around each hype of the boat. Even in the hearts of everyone on the boat, Thang Càn Tự and Kwai Swong, who took one hand, did not need a paddle. Small boats and wooden pots together in a slow stream of water to stop flowing downstream. Where are we going? Don't we see the dragon boat march? Lan asked. The dragon boat must go out at night. At this time we follow the water to go down, to the place of going to the sea. It is the port area. Just in the world something. The port area has nothing to buy. What you want, I buy for you. The charisma said excitedly. Lan pretended to think for a bit, laughing and saying, Do not know if the port area sells to you to La. Kwai Swong blushed and turned away without paying attention to her. Ah. What? Quickly take it out for me. Lan shouted in horror, wandering around in the air, holding a soft white bridge according to her movements gently. It turned out that the child on the stubborn boat, holding a dandelion branch blowing hard at Lan. All the flowers rushed in her body. Kwai Swong could not laugh. Had to replace her, and How Engon said, Do not be afraid. The poor area cells holds the meticulous bamboo paper bag to cover each branch. Open one, blowing one. Or just the cello, this is not much. We can find it later. Thang Càn herself silently looked at them. The child was a childhood, but the death was upset and unhappy. After 13 years old, the weak personality was timidly gradually changed the skin. Now a beautiful young man, advancing to respond is lazy, leisurely, every time laughing up makes people like mock. But the respect of the god of the entire dynasty of the kingdom respectfully respected him. Just because his father was the emperor of the Lu. But his singer was about to become the emperor of the East like that. They did not have anyone to see. Even if they were laughing, the spirit sparkled deep in the eyes of this Phuong Vuong, who was still coldly mocked. He knew. Only the time with Dalan with him. Quý Sưởng had such a childish spirit. The black hair of Dalan recently stirred up his face, leaving his emotions in a blink of an eye. Thang Càn touched himself. The three people ashore at the port area, walking in the crowd in the afternoon, and has not found a dandelion seller. Although there were no friends and ladder left on the left and right, the action was still the blind figure. Only one hand pulled them back. Lady tu. The sailor always smelled of alcohol, and he wanted to put on Dalan's shoulder, and she immediately expressionlessly slipped, hiding behind the two tall friends. They all consider you a blind fake. You laughed and said, how can you believe that the blind person can predict the destiny of the human? Dalan temporarily had a deep face, on his arm aggressively pinching one, saying, you're down. Hurry up. Quý Sưởng laughed apologetically, rolled his eyes again by the play along the sole, grabbing the lan immediately into the tent of the buffalo skin 12 horns. The tarpaulin is the place where the gynecology is gathered, extremely spacious, today in front of the door to lower the thick buffalo blinds. In a dark piece still squeezing shoulders like the wings are full of people, the hot sweat smells of the clothes, sticking straight on him. Inside the walls set up a drama stage. Both sides had a large coal pot, burning the stage. Whoever. Quý Sưởng from the slot crawled straight forward, one hand raised a paper bag full of snacks. Ladders covered the lan. Almost wanted to follow him. Behind the stage is a black and mouldy black cloth. The play is performing to the climax. In the heart of a beautiful Quý Sưởng, not knowing what to hug, bewildered, ran back and forth in front of the stage. Behind 3 years, the male man dressed into a soldier chasing, on his lips a cruel, colored draw a roll. The female harlak is a small figure, walking very quickly. The fidelity soldiers showed off a few steps behind, made a protest behind the killing intent, glided a few more rounds, and the bottom had a happy person, estimated to enjoy them acting hard. To lend you here, besides the stage there are a few people singing the school, singing old stories. Quý Sưởng excitedly said. Dalan did not see the situation on the stage. The sound of the trong, her singing was cheered like the tide of hundreds of people in the whole stage overwhelming. Only blurred and opened a pair of strong eyes. Thang Càn held her hand. Suddenly she felt mournful. Such a wonderful female comedy. The whole life is not complete. The Harlak woman ran and turned her head to look at the army. The gaze of the Harlak tribe was large and shining, and also used a dense color, very similar to her uncle. Suddenly, she fell down to the ground. The object in her heart rolled out. In the tent was completely quiet. Only hearing the sound of wooden furniture rang out echoing. The way in this dual peach female role was the wooden statue, through the speaker wrapped in a raw fishy layer as diapers. The maximum wooden head knocked on the stage of theater stage, a way of leaving it. The female harlak cow corded forward, made all kinds of arduous protests to the other wooden statue. The soldiers in the back held up the iron, covered wooden blade. The other woman harlak was agile, turned around, holding a statue in the backstage. The soldiers also beside the stage. The aggressive Tronco did not miss the sharp opportunity to sing. The slender shoulder of Dalan, like winning a whip suddenly shrinking. Thang Càn felt that the small hand he grabbed in the blink of an eye was dead. Cold like a heavy ice fall, coldly soaked in Thang Càn heart. Quý Sưởng turned his head with him to glance at each other, seeing a surprised spirit in his eyes. Because the child was not up to a few years, the training changed to difficult. The comedy character in the play often used harlak to play the role, so the double female dog was acting as a female copper. The statue of the person hugging was children. They had not yet reacted. The dirty black curtain rolled up the jam, revealing half of the dark stage hidden behind. The inner curtain has reclining dry yellow, not knowing it is because of the old, or because of the smoke of fire for many years. On the thin fabric drawing the elaborate bar walls that are sophisticated, like the idea of the palace, in the hot fire. The wall is not shaky. On the stage after the case of sitting a couple of men and women dressed in the royal family, left and right to set up the case. One side is a serious harlak border, the other side is a young flower. The scene of lifting the moist bird's nest. On the face of the upper elderly, he applied a thick white chalk, saying the sound of the mountain of the southern village, not considering anyone to speak loudly. I'm the head of a country. How can you bear the arrangement of such a paralyzed person? On the one hand, the face was smiling. The direction of harlak on the left lifted the cup, raising his voice to visit. The brother of the sincere brother, I wish you healthy and long-term health. The viewer loudly smiled. The person on the radio was extremely calm. Just did not hear the last evil words of the king. The man Halak was probably fake, laughing coldly and draining the golden paper in his hand. The king again directed the teenager to raise the cup, saying, the elder of my son, the precious corpse like the pupils, the kingdom of the future only belongs to you alone. My brothers and sisters have to submit to you. The teenager is quite handsome. Just a lipstick on the face is a bit dark, roughly indicating the intention of drunkenness. Then the king turned to the girl next to her, one hand hugging her shoulder, shaking the huge fake gemstone necklace on her neck, gently saying, the fond of my heart, tuum vi in the heart. Today is a good reunion day. I am preparing good. The girl brought in to look back at him, drank alcohol in her hand. No matter what, he immediately changed his face, in front of her singing. How hateful. Her family is gradually invading my royal womb. She was still happy to rest her head on his neck. The innocent appearance. Under the radio at this time, people gradually understood this drama referring to who? Whispering and whispering with each other, and there were people who started to rush out. The crowd began to start. Thang Càn Tự and the land were surrounded far away. Quý Sưởng was separated from the front of 5-6 rows. Your Highness, Your Highness. Thang Càn Tự in the ears of Lan's ears called in a low voice, one hand whole lifting her chin. The Lan strangely followed his head, carrying heavy tears, hitting his hand a little pain. Let's go, Your Highness, stop. Thang Càn held her shoulder. Only felt that they were rushing into an extremely brutal dream. A thought of having to quickly leave this tent, returning to the world as clear as the day. The Lan's face was white. Sophisticated lower lip was constantly trembling. The appearance at any time must be soulful to the clouds. But extremely slowly, the crowd pushed them, like the dense forest in the dark night. No appearance, only in the blink of an eye, the fire of the pink love on both sides of the stage shone, appearing the 5 abnormal officials. At this time, Thang Càn started to feel lucky Lan was blind. She did not see such a scary scene. She trembled in his arms like a newly blooming pigeon. The gap between them and Quý Sưởng became bigger and bigger, the way countless people started to show. Quý Sưởng tried to reach out, but faithfulness could not reach them. The sharp throat of the king was on the radio. Where are you? You. Bring my gifts up here. Still the 3 soldiers in the previous screen ran up. It was the idea of the 4th army of Van Ma, still carrying the iron wrapped wooden sword in the hand, rushing towards the South Halak, flabby and fluttering on his neck. The appearance of the woman now woke up from the dream, rushed to struggle with the soldiers, crying and said, Your Majesty, why do we lose your faith? A soldier in it brought the female fell to the ground, shining at her. The woman fell back before the king's sentence, holding the king's hand. What did I have to commit to? Couldn't give birth to 3 lovely children because of your lovely children. The right-handed boy withdrew his sword and stood up. The king was trembling in a tangled way, but finally sighed, pushing a woman towards the soldier. The male Halak was besieged and shouted, Your Majesty, maybe you forgot that ye have not our family because of your hard work. How can you win the king? The king jumped on the case, the fierce face. You never do not remind this. So you deserve to die. The young man holding the sword in his hand to fight the soldiers attacked the other woman. The soldiers were slightly hesitant. The king stomped his feet on the project. Kill! 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 The school beside the stage resounded again. This time sang was, Ah! The mind of the king was determined. All the children of the royal fire deserved to die, even though their blood vessels were half of the king's blood. Another soldier let go of Halak male, directed the teenager to swung the wooden blade. The female softly fell to the ground like a beast jumped up, blocking between teenagers and soldiers. The boy was mournful again. Mother. The soldiers brought the blade close to the armpits of the 2 of them stretched out, revealing a knife. The idea was to bring the teenager and the girl together as shy through. But behind the fierce eye, the mother fell together. At this time, under the radio battle, half because of this killing repertoire, half was because in the backstage suddenly rushed out to a Hongai. Although compared to the smaller auxiliary department, in the humanity, it seemed to be muscular. On the stage of fake gynecology was a Master, I come to save you. The Han dynasty handed out to soldiers, in front of the male Halak wandering down and kneeling, the person who carries the name on his back. He is not the rebellion. The horizontal destiny is teasing him. The melody of the troncar emerged and steep. The sound of the fake song was torn. The audience stirred up. The forte of the play is this kind of repertoire Minquam recorded by the history book. In fact, every day must drink fresh blood of a comedy. The prisoner was sentenced to death by his jurisdiction, and his long-standing child was born. Kak Ho, determined not to get married, his mistress waited for many years to finally return from the sea. Transferred to anecdotes. In fact, sailors Vu Non and Tuan soon died in the whirlwind. Returning was just a demon born on his. So, Cool play. All the scenes of the empty flat strokes on the curtain. Everyone all held their breaths waiting for the beautiful and very heavy curtain to lift out. The deepest place to hide the outcome is real or fake. They do not In the nosy sound, Delan screamed weakly, could not hear. She softened back, fell into the chest of Thang Càn Tự. The crazy black gaze stared at the roof of the tent, the burning fire of the charcoal pot dancing on her cheek. Your Highness, Your Highness. The young general grabbed the slender princess to break his shoulder, shouting. Quý Sưởng was still stuck in the depth of the tent that could not escape. Thang Càn herself, from the distant gap to see his young man's face. Under the light, the clear bridge of the nose brought the precious face cut into red and black. He nodded slightly at Thang Càn Tự, so Thang Càn protects Delan in front of his chest, withdrawing his back and shoulder, pushing the people out. The exit of the theatre was right behind them. A ray of light, clear and unable to look straight, like the morning sun ray from Kame shone down. Quý Sưởng watched them go out. Curtains covered again, so there was no light. The clear blue sky turned into a gloomy blue. Gloomy night breeze through the tunnel swept to the sound of the vague outside. The city was happy one day in the weird sunset. Your Highness, Your Highness. Thang Càn herself supporting the two rolls of lan, bringing her like a nailed field on the wall, gentle to no weight, also absolutely without a fulcrum. It seems that as long as he let go, her whole body will fall to the ground, arranged in a pile of clothes. Delan also did not faint. She was faithful to awake. Her eyes were like to deep, deep wells, dark to the sky. Your Highness, did you hear me? He grabbed Lan's arm, gently moved. He heard me say. It was all acting. All. No. The girl dropped down with a blind eyes looking at him, curly hair covering her face. That day, I saw the tea-colored eyes of the general suddenly shrinked. He saw. Delan could not hear. See. The three words soft as a sigh, suitable for the bad drums transmitted from deep in the streets, from deep in the bottom of the Càn Tự churn. The female comedian stood at a nowhere in the dark, but she was not afraid. From the moment she was born, all she could see was a world without light and color. Sometimes, while sleeping, there will be a little chaotic light from the eyes flowing through. They have the temperature and the same taste, she guessed. That is the so-called color. But the dream that day made her scared. There was a piece of color from deep in the darkness flowing towards her, intensely strong, carrying the smell of hot iron, like an unintentional, but flowing to half the road. It gradually cold, withered. Only a dead tentacle touched her skirt, so the color was quickly. Each ray of rays. She retreated back, but faithfulness did not escape the melon of the other color. She saw a beautiful woman, falling in the thick color. Her hair danced like the most superior silk, wasting the public to the air. Wong, my king, why is the spirit anger like that? Even if he gave him 3 lovely children, could not redeem the spirit of the spirit. So the female comedy while sleeping feared. She realized that the beautiful woman was her mother. She wanted to wake up, but this dream locked her, refused to release. There was a man walking towards her mother, so that color also crawled on his lap. The female comedy has never seen anyone's face, but she knows it is her father. The other arm often hugged her with her mother. This time was just fiercely hugging himself, like the figure could not stand cold. The angry words of Ka Ku and Prince Ka, mixed with the moves of a steel fighting, echoed in the dark. The father looked down at his mother. His face was cold and scared. He could not even answer her question. Just turned his head, told the person who did not know in the nowhere. Go out to Delan and Lan. Don't leave a living person. The head of the reward. Prince Kakam's sword stood in a more distant darkness. A new piece of a nuance diffused at his feet. Kaku grabbed a pearl lamp and threw it into the space, so the vibrant color from the foot of his mother and the everywhere even swallowed the chaotic darkness. It is the color of the pain when the finger is cut, also the color of the flame. Later someone told her, that color was the so. After that, I cried and begged my mother not to go. Do not go to the father. The mother sighed, saying that I was the stupidest comedy in the world. West Luke has more than 400 years who never appeared to true blind, and said I heard so many women who coax people will dream of such a strange dream. Kang, Delan said continuously. His eyes widened and threatened to scare people. I hugged Lan. Chan, was you the same? Then I asked him Kaku. What happened that night? He stood. A last sunset hidden on the surface of the sea. In the sunset, 3 drums suddenly shocked, transmitted awakening, like the air. The dust hovered in the sky into a whole bowl of bowls suddenly down. The whole city was quiet. From the distance, there was a mournful male voice in wine. It was the priest at the top of the tower to sing the New Year scene, pleading with abundant rainwater, stable high quang. Long vi then protects the entire boat. Because of the spirit. They vow to take 100,000 people a day and one night as a sacrifice. Singing gradually resting, the drum rhythm emerged. This time this was also the wind of rain, in the fresh air dancing the raw rhythm of the world, urging people to burn all the lights next to them. Thousands of black iron coal pots lined up on the banks of Mac River to burn. The whole citadel immediately lit. The giant dragon boat moved on the river surface. At night as day, all the wrestling and architecture of the two river banks were printed in black shadow dancing loudly on the river surface. Two tall female gynecological faculties, a shiny flesh like a breasts wearing short leather shirts, sticking to each other beautifully dancing elbows and ankles. Both have the owner of the knife and face. The thin fastness is always close to the opponent's throat. Not in the same 20. Like dressers sat at the side of the boat, singing in unison to sing flexible tunes on the small legs drooping into the water, using iron hoe perfume to draw a wall dragon pattern. The mother and Prince Karkar are dead. How the king's appearance is, though we don't see it. But his smell is clearly the dead. Diali, every night I close my eyes. I'm afraid of having to dream that I don't dare to tell others, even if he is cuckoo. She clung to the hem of the general, like a person who was about to drown to catch the straw to save his life. Completely unknown between his face and Thang Càn. Only 1 inch of dangerous narrow. You guys have to go back to the east sooner or later. You will go. Is king. I'm not able to stay. Shan, I want to go with you. After saying that, the white face emerged red like a high fever. Thang Càn Tự slowly took a breath. The atmosphere of the spring night filled with the white lotus scent, as if it would affect his thoughts. Your Highness, I am really... The young woman heard him claiming to be the god. Suddenly let go of his hands, leaning against the wall of the people behind. My hair brooched the flower brooch shook the clear sam. The hung bough thatch touched the yellow petals. She raised her eyelids. Her black pupils were tragic and disintegrated at him. When it was you to save me. Now the person who can save me is only you alone. But it turns out that you don't know. He sternly fear, could only turn his head away, unable to respond. On the river exploded fireworks, yellow flowing in the night sky, drawing traces falling down forever without disappearing. The fleeting also immediately flirted. The window on their heads was fluttering. The sound of the bustling and the aroma of the hearty food flirting into the murky alley. Then only heard a sound, something straight into the face to irrigate. Lan stood dumbfounded and did not know how to dodge. The person was half wet. Thang Càn hugged her shoulder, tough, and pulled a circuit from the small alley to the river, and was faithful to the waterfall like a Shah inside. He suddenly realized that it was not rain. From the 4 sides of the 8 directions of the street, they were all the sweet and fragrant amber liquids, thrown into the fire pot, and the light went up and down a meter high, dispersing the air that made people fascinated. Until now, the rainy sacrifice was Normalin's family. Brewing wine absolutely refused to store through each year in the rainy sacrifice on the occasion of the summer delivery. Last year's wine had to bring it to drink without all immediately thrown out the window, which is the meaning of eliminating the old new establishment. This city has never had a joy that is not expensive, but just need enough money, nor have any joy not to buy. Only this rainy day, this clever cold citadel will be like a drunken man, bringing each wave of crazy welcome and passionate when the drought met with rain and fluttering on his head. Among all people happy, only Lan, on her dark face, all of them were like honey, raced and were washed down by tears, all condensed on the pointed chin. The accumulation of fallen. Shen sister, I know I make you difficult. In the world, all are so harsh and organized. Although you and I are generals and noble princesses, there are many things that cannot be done. The tip of the nose, as if she wanted to escape the body. One day, I took you away, on the front of the stage, using a cup of alcohol. Each cup is facing the flute. And then there is no coming. Can only be in the air to create every 7. Color rosy, tears finally salty. Tu Lao, in the nursing city. Finally definitely enter the trip. How to bring? Kwai Sai shook his wrist. The standard term map flew towards the air of the flame of red. Let's go. Atin responded for an hour, turned and carefully walked out of the crowd. Kwai Sai, sitting on the shoulder of the gynecology, slowly opened the huge bamboo paper bag on the knee, pulled out more than 10 dense dandelion branches, nor wasted blowing the last night breeze, flabby as snow, like battle. After the sacrifice ceremony at the end of the spring of the 30. 3 Lan in the 30. 3. De Lan repeatedly dreamed of the same dream. It was a young female. 2 long arrows of the tip of the chaotic steel through the heart, from the long time of high slope to drop down, dragging along the silk of sil, straight until falling to the ground, faithfully like a fire that did not extinguish. De Lan always suddenly awakened in the night, repeatedly recalling the other face. His face was clear. Those chaotic dreams in the black time on the fabric screens, draws the cracks, let her look at a corner of the future. But see who it is, or what the situation is, nor the choice she chooses. Time passed quickly. The troops of the king rebelled the last land show citadel, could not help but take a risk passing by the east. The tragedy of tragic losses. Fleeing to the northwest of central Chou based on the dangerous place stubborn against. The people of Chu Trong Huk almost became a set-out. In January of the 34th Thailand. The cruelty of Vuong Chu Fungi crossed the Bac Tien beach. Many years ago, he married $1 billion of Hong Duok Duok to the north and the army and the southern army. The breakthrough of Huang Tian was concerned about the seeing Chu Fungi was about to flee into the boundary of the clan. Hak Vuong Chu Trong Huk and then Hai Kong Vuong Jiam led Vuong to pursue. For 8 years, swallowing all tens of thousands of people, east. No matter how bloodthirsty, is about to be full in. Western countries are a scene of anti, based on the trading of Luongma executioner. All of which are luxurious harvests, of which Uncle Lean is much better than holding more than half of the maritime road. In the period in the February, only remember all kinds of long-running incidents for the 8-year old birthday of the Crown Prince Lan in March. A pair of Kam Ho Dong Loot newspapers that Princess Lan nurtured to give birth to a nest. On the contrary, it was the most bustling thing. De Lan had nothing after the horse, told the palace to support her to the place where the king chatted. Who expected that Kwai Swong took a step, an early call to the person beside him to go. Thang Càn naturally followed. De Lan thought a little, saying, I don't know how the newspaper of the other children. The servant outside of the royal court saw Lan coming, kneeling in a row on the ground. De Lan's status is inherently precious, and the granddaughter of the great army, the billion and the only mother of the crown prince. The palace extremely Oh. Why did you move out today? Your highness is careful. All of them are at his feet. Kang Deep said. De Lan laughed and bent down and touched. Then on the grass spreading the blanket, the animal rolled into a lump of limit dim. The big tail fluttering containing the young velvet inside, only revealing 5-6 small-nosed chalk. This Cam Ho newspaper is familiar with her, so that she will be Vu. Suddenly De Lan doubted. Why is this young child lacking to children? The palace reply. The two are particularly weak and not dare to see the sun. To stay in the room. De Lan said. It's pitiful. Kang Deep support me to see a bit. Kang Deep responded to an ah. The palace led his arms and legs, stamping his head and said. Really do not dare to hide your highness. The other two are not very good. The figure is scary. Maybe the superiority will be. De Lan raised an eyebrow. I said it was a bit looking. In fact, I couldn't see. In short. What kind of thing you said? That's that. The palace knew she went up. Did not dare to say much, just put one head. De Lan lifted his legs forward. Kang Deep hurriedly ran to support her hand. To one who entered the door, there was a gentle sentence throwing out outside. I hate others to lie to me. The leading palace lying on the ground did not dare to stand up. His head was sweaty. Just entering the room, immediately heard the sound of the child crying, and the sound of the rushing water. Kang Deep was like stammering, taking a very fast language and shouting something. It was a bubbling. A small mournful cry of the new young child was calculated. De Lan did not understand. His face still contained a smile, asking. Kang Deep angrily said. This Luke wants to drown me in the drowning barrel. Thanks to your highness, if we come one step slowly, it will not be saved. Why is ungainly so cruel? De Lan said resentment. The newspaper is pampered, in the palace distribution for 8 experienced people. Before giving birth, they intentionally invited Eastern women to take care. The language was not clear. Normally when the Lan came, with a palace, the woman looked at the face, knew how to cause disaster, did not wait for Kang Deep to ask. Herself stamping his head on the ground, using the language of Eastern Loop many times to chant something, such as asking for forgiveness. De Lan finished listening in his heart suddenly stressed, clenched his hand. The tone of talk was also unstable, constantly asking. What did she say? Kang Deep reply. This lady said. These two eyes saw that they could not help, and wanted to spread the disease to other children, really could not save. Please give me your highness. De Lan hissed. The first 8 words, just the first 8 words. You said clearly each one for me. Kang Deep suffered the pain in his hand. Hurriedly said. Her first 8 words said, Your highness, unable to save its life. The energy gripped the palace, as if she wanted to squeeze her into the water, slowly let go. The whole body of Lan's body rushed to the temples, in front of the darkness, in the heart of their empty moment like a snow cave. This Eastern saying, she did not understand, remembered nearly 10 years, the melodious tone. At night the fire burned into the fire, the 6-year old girl hugged Lan in the royal city to flee. No, 30. To patterns engraved with golden stone. She on one side, the teenager on the other side, because of her. By the end of Bin Fong, suddenly he grabbed his hand to unimaginable silk threads. So he became a dead button, unable to. When she heard the sound of the general, he said it was these words. Later, pursuing all the troops, the male comedian hugged her trembling, and finally, the 4 sides were so quiet, the troops all over the body surrounded the next to them, bringing the punishment to shake the outside of the outside, making her feel safe before. He said, still these words. The clear sound was determined, thinking that it was possible to signal Van Quan. Even the foreign female comedian was not as clear as her. Whenever he heard his words, raised his small courage, by his teeth to be touched and want to panic once again. The person all said that year he saved her. She still believed the same. It turned out that he said, Your Highness, unable to save her life. The Luke Lutz's woman was lying on the ground for a long time. Did not hear the movement, violently peeking. Only seeing the white shirt princess stood stunned on the spot. On the eyes covered with ribbons did not see the expression. The slave did not dare to speak up. It was estimated that nearly half of the time, the princess opened her mouth and said, So you have to kill. After saying that, the wind was like turning his head, a white skirt like a big sail. The person who is allowed to approach the great brother is not much. Kwai Swung is one of them. One country has to king troops, who is nominally, all year round after the tent of tears spread out the rotting gas. The real person, the body withered with a macadamia, buried in the middle of the coincidence of the message of the blanket, like a monstrous child threatening people. Every time he saw the great army, Kwai Swung always refrained from wanting to want malicious thoughts. Squeezing the dead of this country. Just use one hand away. Kwai Sai continued. The palace immediately carried some feather cushions, serving down in front. 2 months did not meet. The Highness again a little higher. The great army glanced at him, smiled and said. The shape of the Uncle Lean was profound. Dark skin. More than half of the big black eyes. But the long-term great army did not see the sun. Had a kind of white, flattering his bright eye. You have to hate this kind of eye, naturally not showing on the face, also laughing and saying. White physique, no mine, no bad. The army was still laughing, himself from the bed, supporting him, according to the other strength, bringing the body to fall on the soft pillow piled up like a mountain, fitting to face Kwai Swung, gasping and gasping. From the age of 17 years old, the horse fell back. This is the whole energy and the flexibility of him. Kwai Sai smiled. If there may be a percentage of the great army, it is good. He seemed like he had thought to look at him, saying, This child is very clever. His minor generals are also smart, but a kind of stupid, even though the elegance is polite. It is truly a martial personality of Vonon. How can it be as clever as me? These two products are extremely rare, just placed on one person. And Your Highness value him like that. The face of Kwai Swung was a little serious, Shem briefly. Like you. Without the great army with him, Kwai Swung 10 years ago will not have a life. Mr. Ka glanced at him, laughing softly. If Your Highness in our country happened, he also had to die. His bureaucracy was related, waiting for returning to the east. The sky was white, the more wealthy as the bird flew into the forest. All went to His Highness. Even though the general was not with him, there were also people who could provide wrong history. In the blink of an eye, the breath stopped, very quickly laughed. So far away, talking far. Not far. The great army nodded. That's right. Today inviting Your Highness is something seriously want to ask. Your Highness feels how this Lan is. In the beginning of the friend, he resounded, suppressing in his ripples, saying, the high-ranking princess of the virtue. Saying so, the Highness is really not criticizing Lan. So I am much more secure. Great army, this is. Your Majesty has a younger sister. When he came to Western Luke, she went to the east. Later, he married the second brother Hak Vuong as Chin Fai. This month Hak Vuong pursued Chu Fungi to Huang Time Quan. Tu Tram nursed in the second capital of the capital into Swang Hon. Recently, I received the news who. She was like a flower like a pearl, was poisoned by the head. As precious, if there is no emperor's emperor as the second brother, there is no one worthy here. Saying that is also impermanent. Last summer, I heard that Hak Vuong under the citadel was seriously injured. Almost no longer. At that time we thought, if Hak Vuong really sacrificed for the fatherland, it is indispensable for us to prepare a bit of preparation. Bringing His Highness to the East Luke, to land daily close to the highest power. Immediately got married. Followed the servant of His Highness could not be. Do not think of Hak Vuong heavenly sandy. Seeing that Bogit was about to become a successful, Tu Tram was lost without blessing. Your Highness, if there is a princess who likes, just follow us. Because just a female of the court, never communicated to the nations. Thinking of the great army, saying so embarrassing, in the country. The died of life and death, not looking for her. I did not have any heart to marry others. Thus, the day after His Highness, the east of the Luke, also took the spread of Lula. My envoy was all the grass, telling them to give some gifts to the message, to give to my other granddaughter that made people uneasy. You bowed and said, I definitely do not help. Escort the peace princess to the So I am assured. Later, the opportunity to talk to the pillow like that. Hak Vuong Danko, lowering Jiao Jiao to return home, only afraid of this 1 or 2 months. Before the Highness and congratulations, Prince 20. Year. Old Prince looked intently deep into the eye. That year. This was the weak man taught him to know. wanted to turn the body to squeeze the throat. Except for the sword. There was another path. The other, in the bottom of his heart. There was another door opened. The inside. Wake up cautiously. It is possible that His Highness will answer. Naturally know what to say. Reality? The buddy nodded steadily. The actual situation. The fake disability slowly collected a smile. Softly said. I am a waste, unable to launch a horde. Naturally, based on his background, just praying silently lying on the bed waiting to die, can also over decades of untie. But in the hand there is no right. We immediately feel unsafe, that the power of the world is so much. We take one step more. There will be people who want to retreat one step. The natural Sari wants to suspect us. But we are not letting go. Power is to be captivating people. Even if we lie here, it can cause storms. Just because in our hands, we grasp what others want. They immediately make a dog to make the dog go, because we rob them all. This right like the snowballs the bigger the roller. I am a waste of a museum. These thieves, the division of permanent irregularly. If there's a person who wants to kill me, there is also a bunch of people who want to protect me. See, they use the objects they have won nurtures, and have to ask for my grace. Name useless. Which monarch can escape a death? One day we are still alive, not one day without power, but the eyes closed and all things are resting. I am like that. Even not to mention the righteousness. All the last is still land. Those rumors placed in the middle of the street. The future for land is also good. Magic transfer. That day, we immediately wrote down to the defense, destined to bring Luong Mao's father to His Highness, transported to the second capital into the Du of Hone Luke Dai Trung. It is also not a highly threatened by the Highness. That day we just returned from Phung Nom. Even the prince in the palace did not necessarily know. The palace, the guard, the spirit, we do not know who he bribes. This is a small trick. The layout is not a 1 or 2 days, or nearly 100 silver enemies. So, we know that the Highness has a long time vision, also has thoughts. According to the reason, the world was immediately criticized by Bortin Gia. More than half of the right. Strangely, he finished speaking. Not only could he not wear anything, but he felt that this child was truly sympathetic to understand the story. His thoughts could not meet others in my stomach. He all knew each of them to give people who conjecture bad people's minds are difficult. Only bad people understand how bad people are. We know. Your Highness is plotting. At that time, the insurgents and the Convuong army beside Hak Vuong were growing stronger. Luong Ma naturally could not be maintained. Even if there was a support of the assistance, anyway was limited, inferior to the force of a country. He is also the same way. Can do this, enough to see His Highness clearly clear the time. There is a wise brave. His Highness at that time was young. Thinking was probably not very discreet, of which half of the intention. We saw that the other minor general of his general, being a king. Not sure everything is possible. Just need to know what to listen to whose interpretation. It is considered as half of the army. The king in the city of Dadu. We do not know what the person is like. But the Highness everything is enough. I can't help but think. The emperor of this life. Perhaps in my eyes. Neen was startled, hurriedly smiled and said, great army not mocking the buddy. Getting ridiculous to the second brother. Why are we mischievously tolerated by the second? This time, Mr. Ka really happily laughed. The sound was like a night owl. In contrast to the Highness. One day to stretch out. It is necessary not to forget the new lean. Kwai Sai retreated, just went to the living room downstairs. Tang Càn Tự immediately welcomed. Your Highness, the harbour has just passed the news. Kwai Sai rubbed his eyebrows. Tired, he said. Delan returned to the palace. The palace of the newspaper was waiting for a long time. Together with Thang Càn himself from the chair standing up. You see only in the palace. Saying, where is your bowl of tea? I always remember. It is you stingy. Nor take out to serve the guests. Kung Deep looked at Delan's face, smiled and said, now go to work. Just the other toe wasted elaborate. The Highness sat for a while. Going to the east, mixed with my brother. Stopped her head and nodded. I just went to see the newspaper. On the way back to the army to send people to me. Saying it was this. I responded. No. Delan arbitrarily grasped, long after lifting his head and said, do not be angry. Kwai Sai said. Delan was rigid and rippled. His voice was also soft and weak. Like a serious injured, saying, I have normally, the internal slave wears me to make torment on the person arbitrarily picking item down. Enough for normal people for half a year of spending. Is it ungainly for no reason? It is waiting for such use. Moreover, the story of Ka Ku Din. Hearing the name of Mr. Ka, the face of Thang Càn Tự and Kwai Swong were also white. In the quiet room for a long time, Kwai Swong stagnated saying, you do not be in a hurry. This is a measure. Just extremely dangerous, not knowing whether it may be successful or not. The two are cold, from the golden window to engrave the story of the 12th dynasty in a room, on the face of Lan De Lam printed on the delicate black shadow, like covering the tone. Onions, probably through the sea except. Go to Thai. Coming to Tyne Min, immediately there was a female officer, and the car of Lean came to welcome. "Dear Uncle Lean, you brought the end of the black layers of blacks. Did not come in front of the bridegroom. Not lifted, not equal. Not equal." She still did not turn around. "People, this will not be. Chen So is the main line in your main line. Naturally as an official in the Thai, or the general border." I lulled in the house. Honey said that the Lady Fang General married in West Luke. If it was a night meeting, the newspaper naturally inform you. The owner of your servant won heart. A polarist, a person who often won unbeaten. Everyone peaceful, on the now it has been delayed. Tenkan looked at her slender back, her organs like fire, holding the blade silently blue. Delan nodded, so he still remembered. The throat, the sound is still clear, the god of defense. And the words to leave, the army's shirt floating a small swirling battle. Like more than a moment cannot stop. Ripple in the middle of the sea poured into the ground, to endless ribbons interspersed, white to see and startled. Palace! The battle of the shirt rang in the room. Only Lan and her morning face hurriedly knelt down on her knee. "The life of Kundip is all of His Highness." Delan shook his head and said, "This is not you can respond. I pray for you. If not your highness, the 7-year old palace lost his life. How could he be not afraid of the highness who wants the palace of the palace?" In the eyes of Lan's eyes, it is also full of bitterness. Bent down to hack her slave, tears falling on the thin silk of the palace, are a big trace in money. But, still wavering and saying, "You grab my shirt corner not letting go. Telling you to tell the old story. I just bought it. Buying you all your life. It only costs half of gold. Really doing a business capital." Kundip cried more intense, saying, "No." The highness heard that the slave soul did not have to take away sacrifice. Even the price did not ask, immediately wanted to buy Kundip. Talan patted her hair, shed tears and said, "Kundip, it's just there, the hope is far away. I finally want to try once, you know. I waited for so many years." In March, Dong Luke transmitted the news. In for days and days of Hong Duok, the original combat in the north of Huang Tai and Quan, the monk ended a battle, destroying more than 50,000 enemy troops. The anti-army of the whole army, the army of heavy losses, in Luke Duk, the great general was able to slash Chu Fungi's head. Hundada was caked and killed in the rebellion. 17 April, Shutrong Hukat Thin Kai Emperor Dong Duke Danko proclaimed the emperor, changed the reign of Thin Huang. On the 9th of May, the great messenger came to Tat La, submitted a letter, informed the new emperor to the throne. The late Vuong Phai Tu Tram was created as the queen and other political dynasties, and showed the summoning letter to the king. The king of the king and a lamb princess went together, planning on 20 May, out of the port of Bat La, responding to the southwest wind in the middle of the summer to go to the sea, except day and night 15 days. Far away, seeing mountain man from outside the journey for half a day, immediately saw a vague dust area on the horizon, gradually running near. Knew from the grey fog. The sailors gently swayed in the middle of the sail. The right sails took the exquisite angles to cover the wind. The long-sleeved Mulan boats and the beauty gradually drew out the curve fluently to the left. Everyone admired to the right. This is the largest island of the 3 Central Sea. Also a mountain floating in the sea. In the Bay of Tri-Infection south of the island, stabbing straight into the face is a few dozen stuff, like a crimson waterfall from the air. The steep slope, the great place with the birds screaming around. It is said that this is a monument due to a mountain battle that saved a few hundred years ago. But thousands of crumpled rocks collapsed piled up at the foot of the cliff, into a fluttered red rock. The peak of the tide rushed up, again from countless gaps flowing backwards. The wine and small waves screamed through the gap, blowing out the mournful. The body of the boat went a large bend, almost the bow of the boat facing the sea, leaning slowly to the west. Thus, the rocky beach next to the deserted man. There were a row of pier. Each one had 20 horses. Back and forth. There was only a boat. More than half of the afternoon was only at noon to anchor the port for one night. The owner of the boat and the merchant to the shore. From a small road around climbing to the god of Long Vi then temple on the top of the cliff to pray. A night of a dream. Early in the morning anchor down to the sea. Thus, deep water with wide diameter has little natural port. There is no commercial town. Even pirates do not want to camp here. Of course, the commercial boat from the immense beaches gossip. Heard that in the past 100 years of faithfulness with fake Hyengu chasing sharks often frequented. There is also rumor to say, if possible to find a mysterious sea between the sea fun and Dai High Beach, use a basket of drop down goods, below prison snails, immediately have the transaction on the surface of the trading sea. If they are satisfied with the goods, they will use the sunshine to use the sunshine. But the uncle of these rumors always left. They were careful with the divine tribe in the legend to maintain the respectful distance. Her could not be close. They listened to the singing of the seafloor, taking the instructions of the merchant ships full of secular happiness, peacefully returning to the harbour. Dalan alone stood at the bow of the boat. The simple white shirt was clean according to the habit. It had changed into a thin silk robe spreading yellow spots. The back of the bird's tail dragged 3 meters on the floor, floating to fly. The white silk strip on her eyes was also removed on the sea of strong winds. Wearing a blue, clad silk shawl, all body embroidered, except for the golden royal necklace on the neck, and a royal flower as big as the hands of Mai's hair. An old item did not see. Dalan. She heard the turn of her head, laughing at the call behind her. 3 parts of bland smile, beautiful lipstick on lips dyed, like 7. When they approached, they always called her name, in case she was scared. Gradually, to male children from a young age led her to play stubbornly. Also a young man weapon dancing. The old habit of faithfulness did not change. Quý Sưởng went, with her waves to catch the cool breeze on the sea. She did not see, but also knew that Thang Càn was definitely dropping behind 2 steps, standing by the side. Long time no see you come. Almost don't realize. Quý Sưởng laughed. Dalan also laughed. It is just replacing. Before you go, always busy. Choose sewing materials. Cut clothes. Learn according to the rules in the palace of you. Silence for a moment. Dalan said. What? The talk is always a lazy, cheerful tone. Just like a normal playboy boy. Her covered blind eyes looked at the sea of the sky. The day you crashed the god. I had a nightmare. Dreamed that you died on the sea, remember? Quý Sưởng laughed loudly. Why don't you remember? And you cried not to let me return to the east. Dalan gently shook his head, the most realistic. The young king laughed and said, So disturbing, your highness, dreaming of a dream. Dreaming that I can find a way to live in a dead place is not okay. Dalan frowned and said, I have to do what I want to do, otherwise, I am all lost. Tired, she said. Deep in the island of Manjung was a lake, on the shore filled with a flowering tree like fire. Deep in the lake was even more bright than silver buried the palace. Its walls are pieces of pieces. The steps are monolithic agate. Huang Kim, coral, pearls and Long Tian Huang. Long Vi them bring their endless talent, along with all the treasures from the shipwrecks for thousands of years, piled up there. Even with the 10 largest gynecological departments, one person trampled on one, in order to let her tell the story of this thousands of years. Long Vi's tears like the pearl of the star in the early morning, whenever falling to the ground, echoing a sigh in the palace. The echo emerged small ripples, transmitted from the bottom of the lake to the bottom of the ocean. Along the vibrating path turned into ripples, ripples turned into waves. The waves stood up like a mountain, like the mountain fell. So in the sky floating the whirlwind. It was the white tide. All pirates at sea except know how attractive that treasure is. Like they know how terrible white tide. Countless people carrying the mind and dreams, starting to look for the palace. But they were not successful. The jungle and the lake in Manjung will eat people. Many people simply go to picking flowers on the lake. Immediately lost their lives. The small road to Thongmen Temple only contains enough people. The god of the guard is all walking around. Only 2 horses are good at climbing small climbing. Providing Dalan and Quý Sưởng. This small road once. Quý Sưởng bowed his head to look down at the cliff. Still not from the shock dizziness. The waves were half tall as a small white border. The dark beach was interwoven. The sea was not seen. On the south is the clear sea surface. The Bay Boat Wharf is anchoring inside with a fleet of the royal boat, leaving only a vague white line. The temple also left only half. It is not like the complex, sophisticated architecture of the Uncle Lean. Some people say that creating it is an ancient people who soon die. And some people said, creating it was Long Vi then. The architecture is extremely simple and tall. White and white, piled up. On the background of Van thatch pillar, hugging the dragon scales, there is a standing upright, with a tilt on the ground. The half of the half has been buried by red sandy soil, like the remains of the ancient beast. The rest of the temple is empty, standing there, welcoming the intense wine, showing an empty, but solemn cage. 12 ceremony singing to praise, expressing the commitment to volunteering to subdue the power of the god. The melody lasted strange language. Heard that the sailors picked up a life in the storm. Regardless of how quiet the midday weather is, just far away to the vague singing, the dark night will cover the human world. In the rainy wind, in the wind, on the mast light up the deep light. It was the song of Long Vi than true to the wind. Quý Sưởng put his hand to lead Dalan, went into the shade of the ruined dome of the temple. Thang Càn Tự and Deep defended the 2 sides. Thi then followed each other. On the ground, he was more than half broken hexagonal tiles, revealing the patchy rock below. The sun was scattered in this place and there, leaving the bright spot. At the end of the temple's great palace, from the grey rocks suddenly erected on the sea of plasterboard, more than to white people to dazzling. They are sophisticatedly shaped to honest, curled up, bawling, bellowing, like the beast chasing the poor prey, chasing after each. In the center of the giant vortex, and like the thorny laurel wreath, where the owner of the ocean was sitting there, The statue of Long Vi than that the western countries of the soon worshipped, were all a shrinking statue of this shrinking. The great lady's appearance lifted her head and sang. On the back as a person, under the delivered, fragile ears, a delicate curly hair, like being adventurous in the invisible wave of water. But there is no one part that can be comparable to her. She was tall, magnificent, spiritual as born, fluttering in the stillness forever recollected the echo of the wind of thousands. The statue of Long Vi than 10 people in front of him presented countless sorrowful flowers and fruits, a little withered, a little new. Among these worshippers mixed with small ceramic jars, strong wines blowing through the dust, the ashes of the person that the pirate offered to Long Vi then. At the inside of the Long Vi temple, the people of the sea could not get up to fight. So the pirate and Buong Lu of course also prayed, peaceful peace. Just those aspirations that contradict each other. Long Vi then would ruled how. Everyone did not know. Thi then like water flowing onto fruit, fresh flowers and new wine, praising flexibly flying, like a green smoke flying into the 110 people kneeled at the statue of God, lowly praying for the two countries of Antai. Hai Quang peacefully, eternal Vin Hao. No soldier. Kwai Swan headed in front of the crowd, glanced at the idol, 10 years apart. The first time he was shy. Even though the father of the father, when he left, was not the 11-year old. He silently smirked, revealing a rebellion. There is no relationship. Everyone follows in the back. Everyone does not see his expression, but the female beside him is clearly. The stone statue in front of them is the god of these stupid people. Not his. No one can control him. The melody of the deep chanting suddenly recovered. The singing was like smoke dissipated with. The leader of the ceremony immediately renovated the cell, came to Dalan and Kwai Swong knelt down. Reporting, Kwai Swong nodded up and stood up, raised his hand to support Lan. In the blink of an eye, he heard Lan whispering, "Card, please." The female servant also tried to stoop from Dalan. Kwai Swong saw, in the darkness, in the eyes of the slave, a slave fell down a drop of tears without nose. Thang Càn stood behind them, like a weak shadow. Everyone served Lan and Kwai Swong on the horse. Good scholars rectified the team, preparing before it was dark to the Bebe wharf. Dalan removed the silk scarf on his shoulder and gave it to Kun Deep. The sea breeze suddenly blowed into the thin silk costume, spreading her red spot, as if she wanted to turn around the wind. Kun Deep was surprised to look at the blue dew gauge in his hand, suddenly crying, bringing the silk cloak to throw in the bushes. His hands pulled the outline of Dalan, refused to let go, saying, "Your Highness, I go with you." Everyone was afraid of being blank, not knowing what event. The face of the female corpse on the horse's back compared to Kun Deep was even more pale, smiled and shook his head and said, "Kun Deep, did you once lie to me?" Kun Deep choked his head. "So have I tricked you?" Dalan asked again. Kun Deep did not say a word, just shook his head. His face was full of tears. "So, you go?" "Let go." Dalan laughed bitterly. Kun Deep fiercely clenched his horse's outline, refusing to let go. Dalan reached out. Vu, the cicada's slender hands of Pallas, extremely mildly gripped, suddenly held up the thin yellow whip to decorate in his hand, aiming at Kun Deep's hand. Kwai Swong indeed predicted that Dalan would have such a great energy. Kun Deep was estimated to have never predicted. Intensely ate pain once, not voluntarily loosened to hold Dalan, so that his hand behind his back was a whip on the horse's buttocks. A flexible horse's escape from the crowd, in the direction of the sea breeze blowing straight towards the forest of Tung Tung after the power of the palace ran away. The soldiers all turned their hands in time, Fabi chasing and being left behind by Nam Lin horses. Kwai Swong was trying to push the horse to chase. Thang Càn stopped himself. Harady shouted. Kwai Swong looked at the spirit of anxiety in his eyes. Had to get down from the horse, bring the whip into his hand. Before he could say a word, Thang Càn Tu soon fell away. Deep in the jungle, in the darkness, the red sleeves and yellow are flying. The cold wind rushed through the ear, causing Dalan to recall the reign of the strong name of their arrogant table. She bit her teeth to endure the pain of tearing her skin, along with blindly fear, definitely bringing the erect in her arms, bent around hugging the horse's neck, running the horse and running. Lin Zhuong is an intelligent and loyal creature. Just going deep into the forest, it will lead her to find water sources, find the lake in the legend. She heard the wood leaves shook, the animals screamed, but the horses were as fast as the wind. The eyes were stirring, the scary sound stirring away, far away, jumping through the short push, continuing to release the nail. "Spirit, if you still pity me." Dalan gripped the long Vi necklace in front of his chest. His cheeks leaned on the warm horse's neck, whispering. The lava horses are lightning through the bush, breaking the blockade of vines. Under the nails of the clogs, sometimes floating with bubbles, sometimes spitting out the fire on the roof. Since leaving the temple, it has always been downhill, like without hesitation to run down the broken road. Dalan felt that the cold and humid atmosphere continued to be cold, gradually condensing early mist. Perhaps it was at night. Maybe, the way the lake in the middle of the island was closer. She heard the far away from the distance who called her name. He almost could not find her. The deeper you go into this forest, the thicker the trees. The conifer was soon disappeared. Instead of fierce plants, the leaves of the floral stimulating the moss, and the leaves wrapped around in one place, distinguishing the number of quantities, like a lot of sounds of expansion. Spreading out. Talan immediately stood still at the end of the road, on the horse's back calmly like a drop of water. Even buried in the blue miasma, even a new blood-stained body and a slightly torn flower were dyed into grey. Hearing the sound of the horse coming in front of her, she lifted her face and smiled casually. He is here. After saying that, there was nothing to turn the horse's head, lightly kicked the horse's belly, and chased the horses of the lava to continue walking forward. Thang Càn urged her horse to chase her, leaning around, catching her cavalry rope, said, "Your Highness, no longer in time." Talan smiled and said, "It's dark. We have been out for 2 hours. If we go home, groping naturally, the more time the beast goes back and forth. Going forward is also the dead. Currently, they probably have come into the forest to find us. Not equal to turning their head." Talan shook his head and said, "The front is not far away is the lake. At night the beast does not dare to approach the lake." "Why?" He frowned suspiciously. On the banks of the lake, she was like a fire. With her, faithfulness could not revealing light, like there are countless small lamps. The back of the leaves is dense. Lin led, along the sloping terrain, standing down and down a road down. The sound of the horses' hooves banged on the ground echoing more and more dense. Finally definitely like a strong breeze. In the middle of the air, the 2 horses of lava flee before and after, soaring to the sky to jump over the bushy bushes higher than one person. In the jungle of the night suddenly, there was a big light to hit the face. In the blink of an eye, the darkness in front of his eyes. Water. He hurriedly passed by, just hugged her shoulder. His hand was fixed in the middle of the air, not moving a bit. On the sky flew up, under the vast light of the lake, flooded with a rich ink pond, burying the deep secret. The dawn did not worrying about it. Relying on the fire just now, he discovered a vaguely rippled wave to break the surface of the lake, directing them to go. It was a person, from the bottom of the lake to the lake, gradually revealing the head, neck and body on. The long, purple hair glued to the handsome cheeks. The complex diverse patterns on the forehead still wrapped around in front of the eyes. The other person at first glance is a bit young. The veins of the flesh are fluent with slippery flesh, the grey blue of the deep sea fish. The slender figure was straight, every step, like the back of the purple pattern. The purple pattern was slightly curved. Tank himself. Consumption of body energy, newly suppressed in the throat of horror, is about to burst. The pirates risked their lives from the East Loop to not buy the books of Long Vi then. They would rush into this dense forest, bite the fish airbag to jump into the lake, dive down to start the dream treasure. Why some of them never return? Why do some people get drunk on the sea so quickly will be discovered by people to fall to the top of the road on a certain morning? Why there are some people who return to their homeland, but from then on, they did not say a full sentence. Now he fully understands. The lake is gentle. The gloomy waves separate in front of the other person, following him step by step approaching, revealing the crossbow of the fish in his hand, and shiny scales like steel armor under the waist. Also, without legs, under the body of a long tail of a long and slender, curled up on the ground, like descendants of the dragon god in the ancient mythology. East Luke has never worshipped the Greeks, but very few people see their shape. The beauty of the world like that. Thousands of years ago the Western elves struggled to bridge in the storm. What is that? Talan frowned and listened to the sound of the water. The type of type looks like a semi-human god, now with them is not about 20 steps away. 10 continue in the consideration of the range of the crossbow of the fish crossbow is quite far. The force of the religion is heavy, arbitrary, causing difficulty without winning. Although he responded to the person in front of his eyes, Talan was blind, and escaped alone was extremely dangerous, while at the same time, he had to give up all the way, had to hug her a few steps back. A lava horse seemed to be full, leisurely slowly biting the grass, gradually approaching them. Innocently, seeing that Thang Càn Tự intended to avoid retreat, the other son did not move forward anymore, towards the crossbow's side in his hand, only heard the sharp sound of tearing the wind. Another lava horse was still in the lake to drink painful water, fell to the ground, lost his life. Thinking of the arrow tip was poisoned, he brought his fingers to the blue skin in front of him to show one, indifferent and subtle, to divide the ground into a boundary. The idea could not be violated. Then the tail of the body turned around. The whole body went into the lake. Moments later, it was a quiet mirror lake. The mountains and squid, if not the body of the horse, still fell into the water. Thankan almost thought that it was a dream. On the other side of the fire gradually turned off. But it was speckled around. There was a fire in turn. Perhaps far away, there were people who transmitted news to each other. Fluttering, the sound of burning firewood behind his heart was cold. Talan was also afraid of being blankly In the blink of an eye, he understood, happy as crazy to escape his arm, following the sound of running. A fire flower in the wind flickering. Each wing of each pistil looks very clear, lighting dry branches next to withered like arms. The other trees have no leaves, straight branches. Each branch pointed to the sky. In the middle scattered dotted with white flower buds as big as the fist, the fire shone out of the cold, flickering, delicately looking back, covering a thin layer of ice shell. Talan bowed his head to admire, reaching out to the warm fire, immediately burned, took a mouthful of cold air, pulled his fingers to Talan. Thang Càn took her hand, not giving her closer. Sham, what does it look like? Talan was not angry, smiling and turned his head towards him. His face was, he just wanted to answer. She tied up her legs and a childish hand stopped his mouth, laughing and saying, "No." At this moment, the scorching of the fire flower was even more intense, so brilliant that it could not be seen straight. A mountain breeze glided quickly and passed, dive again. In the white smoke flying in the original appearance, the pale blue flower was extremely large, the petals closed into a dish of dishes, separated with slippery chalk-like butterfly. Thang Càn Tự glimpsed decorative flowers made of blonde with Talan's hair, woke up in the blink of an eye. It was Hiệt, dried and soaked in wine. A weird flower could have a dream. Not captured is still not captured, not able to keep nor can it be kept. This flower gives people 3 short hours, so that people in the dream to review those fire and lightning happiness. Along with this face, it is difficult to meet again. However, there are many people who are willing to pay for it. This poisonous flower makes people addicted, along with pure alcohol, every day, every night. Do not know how to compliment the deep space does not see the bottom of the mind of many people. Chan's sister. He said he would lead me. Talan raised his blind eyes, as if he was looking at him, like his eyes piercing him. In the night breeze, the sound of flames fluttered far away. I said, someday I will lead her. He reassured her shoulder. The deeper her laughter, the greater the gloomy intonation. It was me urging him. Perhaps he did not volunteer. What crime must say so? He sighed. She still laughed. I can't imagine one day. Between him and I will turn into... Thang Càn Tự temporarily choked. The memory river also broke the shore. From the faraway years of screaming and screaming. They were so young that year. He was the oldest, 16 years old, who carried the dead life of the budget and 5,000 soldiers, except for the executioner in his hand. No more objects could rely on. The bright red night sky fell to the rain. The fire of the sky, even the raindrops were bright red. Fresh flesh shot on his face, gradually fascinated. But he had no way. Behind is the 11-year old lady with Lan 6 years old. To corpses. Everyone said that he saved Lan that year. But he himself understood, saving her life was not him. Just a little bit of pity was not inferior to him. There has never been a heart to leave himself. At night blood flowing into the other river, everywhere is killing and conspiracy, because preserving himself, and the precious. Even if there is 100 orchids, he will not need to think of the sword/town. In such a violent vortex, they're just as stinking ants flowing, small and weak even themselves cannot be preserved, can only he and Kwai Swung, just by being defeated by the destiny, said that the middle position in his heart was as smart as snow. If not like that, he could not survive. Is that or not, Chan? At that time, I was criticized. Talan raised his face to him, stubbornly laughing. He was startled awake, saying definitely. Talan was like being horrified by this answer. The smile on his face gradually pulled away, showing a kind of mournful expression. He was just about to take her hand. She turned and left. Besides, the flower was turned off. There was a floral bud slightly inflated. The pattern was as small as a snake crawling on the thin ice layer to condense the outside. The teeth sprinkled the vibration, bringing the black tree branch. Struggling for a moment, the peak of white flower bud suddenly cracked out a line. The fire from the inside spewed out, followed by intense bandage broken for sides, all restrained to take the bright petals overflowing. Burning. Talan reached over, stroked the flower stalk, did not notice the pain of the other flower in his hand, said, Chan, you know, the eye does not see. He himself felt around the cold body. I know that he was only 16 years old, also afraid of death, not knowing who's comedians, not wanting to be involved, and feared that I revealed his actions. In her heart locked a fire, but still brought his back to him, refused to return. What the god is, he did not see. Tenkan opened his mouth, only said a word to her, saw her silently shaking her head, and finally, when I was from Phang Nom back to Wangdu, he did not dare to tell me his morality. At that time, I was arrogant. The suffering of the men was completely unknown, under the unavoidable anger that made up such a long time. Don't need to be lifted again. All the reasons, we instead of him thinking, Chen Sao, the morality we all understand, but still, in her voice, she contained bitter tears. Lan's clear night dew, Lan dipped in the tip of the other tears. The morning dew became a molten silver. The white light was more prosperous, from the fire penetrated. The fire was slowly going down, ultimately extinguishing, leaving only flowers like a cup of glass, gently lifting a coal on the sigh, like the blind snow. Almost want to vaguely look at her. Dare not to believe. Looking around the four sides, the nostalgic eyes are greedy, like wanting to use the eyes of the forest. The aura of adventure in front of the eyes are occupied. His figure. She guessed countless times, also countless. Sigh buried deep. Imagine more than 10 types of situations. I should not be. The night accumulated in the heart of the flower was washing the eyes, which could make the blind eyes restore, turning back to ordinary people. But if Hiat La was still burning, he would not take out the morning dew. Wait until it naturally turned off. The morning mist was also evaporated. If the water is turned off the flame, the night dew follow the flowing water. If using ice to bury Hiat La, this arrogant flower immediately withered into a black fire. There is only one measure in the world that can extinguish the fire of the fork, save the night dew. To say funny, just a liar for many years. The same tear of the lie. Also fear. Even though the person in the world deceived her to comfort her, he only had the true words to her she consistently thought to be. She held her hand and hugged her shoulder, using such strength. If not so immediately could not hold the body. Let go, the whole person would be stirring to fall into ashes. Hearing her voice, she was also surprised, like another outside. It was mythical. In the world, there were rare people with true blind people, which can be said to be 100 years once. The resounding reputation. The royal courtesy was very happy. Naturally did not want to return to ordinary people. Those who did not know quietly lived the rest of their lives in their homeland. Fear that even this way of speech has never heard. Now, this legend has never had a verification. Indeed, she had never had such a few words, never thought of exposing her old scars was so bloody. For 10 years, although the men planning, but good ideas for me is not sure that it is not true, but the guys do not think, this first time, even if they do not know anything. He smiled bitterly nodded. Now I understand. If I know she is a blind fake, naturally will not deceive the precious. Taking the character and the malice of Kwai Swong, he needs thousands of hundreds of successors to bring her back to the east. Because he used, on the way back to the east to stop the god of God. This is probably the only opportunity for her righteousness to go to the island. But she does not know the mind. Talena every word says, I will never dream again. Brief. From now on, I don't work as a princess. Nor a blind fake, it's just me. Can you go with me? He did not expect that she suddenly asked like that, startled reply. Well, the word just out of his mouth. He knew it was wrong. The female comedian was more than 10 years old. He did not know his own silly. Soon exposed his camouflage. He had to look at her eyes gradually gloomy. Finally cold, unable to recover. You should still go back to your mistress. She refused to glance at him. In words that were sarcasm. I absolutely do not listen to the bows. The closer it is in the night. It is the time when Chue La is prosperous. The light is flickering, illuminating the lake of the lamp of the torch brilliantly, glittering on him. Talan turned around and went deep into the shadow of the tree. She quietly counted her footsteps, took a step out, immediately like a deep director that did not see the bottom. Heavy, bringing funny jokes away from. But she heard him call her name. Dalan. Not confided nor explain. The gentle tone that was so tragic. 2 words, thousands of hearts. She stepped down. And did not care, but ran up. And there was a beast chasing behind. Leaf leaves are dense kumquat on the body. Gently born pain. A moment later, hearing the foot of her back like the wine approaching, her eyes turned to her side. She only felt a step on the space. The whole person was pulled up, placed in front of the saddle. She avoided the escape. On the contrary, it was agile, twisting her body and pulling out the blade on the side of the continue, the direction of his throat, swunging up, almost grazing the lower half of the lower jaw. In his heart terrified, reaching out to take the sword. The 2 men were close to one place. The body of the tongue was long, while dragging aggressively slipping off the hand, gilling an eye on his right knee to slit down the deep wound. Fresh blood in the blink of an eye filled, overflowing. He bit his teeth without saying a word. She was scared by herself. On the occasion of her stunned, he took the blade back into the shell, nor did he distinguish the control of Kwong, just a fierce string holding her tightly, unable to struggle. The lava horses could not stand the weight of the 2 of them, went extremely slowly, through the forest without direction. In the darkness infinite boundless, the forest of green trees emits a strange light. A long time later, finally heard him say. She looked up at him. No more tears. Her expression was a skeptical scene. His spirit was calm and hard to detect. Slowly said. If you go missing, even if they go to the forest to search for her, of course, it is necessary to block the port of Bay. The same is not finished. If she is determined to go, she can only follow me back. Wait for the fleet to come to time in to think about how to leave. Everywhere is okay, just unable to stay in the east. Okay. So, what about? I can't leave the surge right now. What a person is like. He won't be sure. In front of others, he passed through how gentle he was. But he did not hide him. Even a blind person like me could guess his heart. Even if I was pleased to let Kung deep buried my whole life. Until that time he returned to Tian Ming could not welcome me. What would you do? The sound of spreading gradually boiling. He lost a lot of obstacles. Just wanted a blind, robust fake wings. Even though he did not capture, could not let me marry the emperor. He wanted to hide his talent, just afraid I would expose his face. Thang Càn said coldly. In the immediate future, except for me. He has no other martial generals to respect. Will do. Lan smiled coldly. In the immediate future, returning to the east. The flattering he could still be less. At this moment he released me. It was for him. He knew his 10-year situation. He naturally tried to collaborate with the new emperor. How to know he would not cross the plank bridge? He was silent for a while to say. This story she doesn't need to worrying anymore. Lan angrily laughed backwards. What did he promise to him? It is worth not to pay attention to such life. Is the position of Wuong Hao? Or is the 5 parts of the world? Soon knowing that year, when Vo Thi Ha had to do those noble people, he looked at her. In the eyes of a strange tragedy, I still have a mother in the east. If I enter the crime, you will be involved. Lan could not object. The mind was cold, fine, regardless of his mother, because of his friends, or for himself. This life was soon unable to separate the east. No matter what he has to go on the path of evil competition. He does not see the end point. If he cannot return to his whole body, that is everything. He has no longer hope. But she was the most important wage in this coincidental agency. If she broke out, the whole table was chaotic. The race ended with only one word: dead. He naturally, but no matter how, she decided not to look at him to death. This he knew. His priesthood was so concealed. Just a firm grasp of this point. No matter how he struggled, he could not escape his. This road is Kwaisai, and he chose, wanting to bind her to continue. Even though she ignored the wealth of wealth, he still refused to release her freely. Lan's face was white. Almost wanted to raise his hand in his face, but, still holding the right to his side, saying, Thank to you. The low voices hoarse, almost lost, he turned his head away, not to look at her anymore. Thinking pain, but also coldly understood as in the end, she would still be subduing. After the NGOR the next day, the troops promoted the search in the jungle to encounter the princess and the princess. The 2 horses were only one left, the princess sitting on it. The corner of the skirt was slightly torn, on the contrary, it could be worn. On the right thigh of the young man, the young troops had a fierce wound, because the horse walked for too long. Both the pants and fabrics were soaked with blood. Strangely, the princess's eyes from birth were blind again. Sainda fell down on horseback. Just touched the back of the neck, fainted, and when awakened, although the story was strange, always a sign of auspicious, the female servant of the princess rushed to, hugging the princess's knees and crying Nong. Stop. The palace of the spirit of the servant heard, also wiped tears. Said the miracle of Long Vi then gave. At night, the royal fleet raised anchoring sail, choosing the own Costrate Road, a northwestern road. On 23 June, the first year of heaven, 50 giant boats followed each other into Tian Min Trunk. The boat was just near the shore, immediately saw near the flat wharf obscuring the sun. The glorious flower, the 2,000 soldiers of the Emperor Hut sent to in front of the crowd, there were 500 female officials, surrounded by covered palanquin. Kwai Swang stood at the side of the ship, on the top of the head of the army, wearing a normal needle. Wearing a lipstick stature. On his left shoulder embroidered a dragon with yellow horns that looked very vivid. Noble meteorology. He was far away to see on the top of the palanquin, Kim Don Long, the background of the lipstick color, could not help but laugh softly to Thang Càn Tự next to him. Everything changes. This toe has not changed. Away from 10 years. Thang Càn Tự was also very sympathetic, but still could not resist thought in his heart. The other palanquin used the color of the shape to be extremely precious, close to Kim Ban Long. The black background, the same color as 10 years ago Kwai Sai when he came to Tian Min to sit. Because Lan has not officially established. Her peak is only turquoise, weaving the fresh. In the palace of the palace, the princess will go out. The giant pink needle. Around the head of the 18 layers of black essay. From the hair to the ankles, expressing a quiet virginity. Besides the thick black color, the black and magical stone is as big as the beans. Although it is very small, under the sun. Each 2-sided beads have a bright and colorful round, like the beauty of the eyes. The rainbow eyes. On the boat, down the long stairs, there was a spirit that spread out a colored carpet. Looking up, only seeing the first step down the stairs, a young man, a person who was a frail young girl, on the body of the black layer like olive in the wine flying. The bottom showed the red and blue skirt. The man was so blessed, the princess of the body, the man, the princess. Thang Càn followed himself closely behind Kwai Sai, and he could not control his head to look at the boat. On the deck of the ship, there was a grey, Grey female slave, covered with face, saw him turned around, as if he did not want. Is that Lan? Kwai Swang also turned his head to look, asking in a low voice. Thang Càn Tự said nothing, nodded. He was inherently powerful in Liu Dong Luke. Soon asked to invite the owner of a familiar team to rent a small building in Tien Minh for Lan, just waiting for her to go to the boat and pick them up. The servants in the hospital are also relatively arranged with a few people. Each one is of very good background, trustworthy. All other relationships in the past in all the bowls of Lockett. Enough bravery to shield the eyes of outsiders. Outsiders do not see Delan. Delan also could not see the outsiders. Kwai Swang smiled, his eyes turned through the black. Fitting girl with him. Deep. The 18 floors of the curtain covered her face. The young woman looked like water. Just a little nodded, a little unprecedented. The female officials moved forward to support the princess, surrounded like showing gok. La Wai overlapping, and her eyes were very far. Thang Càn Tự on the horse's back turned to look. The boat did not see the silhouette of Lan Ho dressed up as a slave. This trip, thousands of miles, the wealth of Princess Lin was rich and rare, and this was now raised from under the boat like a flowing water. It is calculated that there are 6 valuable flavors such as Khao blood keet, tram tu, hang chan, frankincense, cat hop, musk matlap, each type 20 boxes. Jiao Cho Biao Car, golden cat eye stone, rose quartz stone, bao that Thailand, big Thai thatch. Diamonds of all kinds of strength are also 20 boxes. Cow bop bop bang 10 base tree, 100 dan dia dyad. Bed stall and engoose up Lulu majesty table, 20, for husbands. Battery wine, 20. Barring wall, 10. Only the princess's palace of the princess has more than 300 people. But one person does not bring into the forbidden city the responsibility to bring the marriage by the king. The female mother is also not needed, saying that the old man from the previous year of the queen used to use. There are many people who stay in the east. Can all go wrong. The attitude that can be called humble as obedient. Only the list of 7-8 meters long meticulously counted. With the ceremony 10 years ago, Tu Tran princess was not wrong at all. It was also the queen's stick. On the road for a few dozen days from Tien Minh to Thien Khai, the price of the princess Forbidden's world, except for nearly 100 of the original palace of the god of servant, and a few female royal court officials. The outside, even the face, could not be seen. In the first year of Thien enjoyed the 19th day of July, the forbidden citadel of the electricity, the king of the king and the princess of Lin. In the mid-summertime, in addition to the electric sky, one earth is the bright sunlight. Kwai Swang let go of his eyes, looking at the lipstick at his feet. The beautiful red color so fierce, fluttering in the heat, revolving around the movement, preparing to choose the person who bite. The wine scorched loudly, swinging on the shoulders of the red silk pattern of the yellow dragon pattern on him. The strong sleeve of the sleeve was fluttering. The vast electronic door deeply breaks in the glare. An unpredictable, that is the position of their ancestors' life forest. In the spacious palace burial of his small years. His light is not light. He cannot be. Kwai Swang evoked half a frugal smile, slightly patted his shirt, stepped into the darkness. In the blink of an eye, in front of his eyes was just a dim black, like someone with a hand covering his eyes. Gradually, the eyes were postponed. Countless faces from the darkness emerged, each one familiar. At this point, the martial artist was divided into 2 sides. A red and silver red carpet with Van Tu Van connected straight to the highest place at the end of the palace. Kwai Swang took a step forward. Thang Càn himself listed into the final position of the martial generals. At first, the officer's outfit was a bit low. From dark to light, more than 10 rows to see the higher level of taste. Going forward, the ranks were shut up. The front should be Tun at Vuong Hao and Prince Ju Wai, in the past, residing in Kindu, and the surrounding area always had more than 10, at this time empty. Not seeing a person, only a bright red carpet continued a way forward. Large waves swept away the dust. Spent 8 years of war. The royal family in the past. The branches and leaves were lush. It was like not many survived. Topping the ranks of blue shirts, one side is the 5 strange martial generals of noble color, all of which are strong and healthy, including a girl. On the other side, there was only an individual standing alone. At first, the Vandam was shielded. At this time, he tilted his body to gently greet him. A body of the thin layer of silk. Kwai Swang in his heart was tense. His face lazily nodded and replied. The extracellular for floors are extremely light blue. Inside is extremely pale blue brocade. The shirt below embroidered with unicorn patterns. Beautiful horns as beautiful as blood. Vague extracellular way to reveal dark red heart. 10 Hai Kong Phuong Thi inherited 50. 3 generations. Ancestors Phuong Can Phuong, and king of the great kingdom of Trung Chu Kin built the country from the wild grass. It was the other king of the only family of the dynasty. The great prince then Hai Kong all put them in the palace, with the prince of reorganization, and could say highly respectful rights. In the summer of the 32-year old Thai unicorn, The previous life of Than Hai Kong Phuong Chi Duk surrounded the anti-army of Lam Trung Cho district. The great prince Phuong Jia Min followed the Huk Huk Phuong back Luke into Swang Hon, then was only 20 years old. The most extremely respectful. In July, Phuong Chi Duk died, Lu Phuong, and then two districts were occupied before, and the blood vessels of Phuong Thi Ho had known Phuong Jia Min before the battle of the father of his father, becoming the Lord Lu Phuong district. Then Hai Kong fifth. Third of this, Kwai Swang remembered that Phuong Jia Min's age was approximately himself. His face was still Don Tu Na Na in his childhood, just the corner of his lips with an old blade gently lifting up half an inch, as if he also contained a real smile that was not true, suddenly made people dare not look straight. Focusing on looking back, the other eyes looked mild, deep in the peaceful hybrid awake, the spirit of experience in the spratly. Kwai Swang shone in a few steps again. Beyond the ranks of the gods, just stopped, bowed his head to bow. To you that knee, there has returned. The person from the end of the representative to the high place still sat neatly, calling the noble nominal. 10 years away. A slightly powerful sound, still cool and refreshing like a bell. The appearance of your face is not seen. Buried deep in the darkness of the unknown darkness. A pure black body, only showing Gokon the emperor, and pure pattern of pure band long on the body. Under the body, always they extracted the light but cold, dazzling with pain. Thanks to the blessing of the brother. Kwai Swang raised his head, smiling. It was all like the esteemousness. Emperor Huk brought Nin Vuong to the Spanish to reward him to stay. Real fortune 300,000 jelly. Servants 700. All things were soon due to the long list of long and long lists. Thang Càn himself has merit and promoted as Deputy Marshal Wang Time Quan. During the 8 years of Bin Din rebelled, the victory of Luke Duk was resounding, except for Phuong Jia Min was still the status of Vuong Kong. The other 5 people were assigned to be Huang Tian, Than, Mac Mac, Nierki Don Don and Vu Lam Monan Marshal. All of the gods holding the crucial place. The natural marshal was also outstanding in talent. Tenkan Ti Yuinggu, thanking him with Kwai Swan to shoulder, could not help but glance at each other. They all predicted that Thang Càn would be dispatched from the Vu Lam army, arranged as a position away from the capital and surrounding areas, and did not think of such a high position. Thang Càn Tu's death was once Tham Huang Time Quan. Disappointed. The model was in the deep thinking of the joy. At this time, there was a spirit on the newspaper. Princess Lin was completed, requesting the audience. In the pants, there were many people. Kwai Swan casually laughed and said, "The rules of the female children of the west of the Luke are like this. To dang try. Just let the bridegroom see the face. Then throw away the black. Direct the guests to show off the beauty of the new price." De Huk nodded. That year when the queen and I married, that's the same. Though Bukwon heard that all was silent, looking at the shadow like a butterfly under the lipstick slowly went up. The wind was like a fire. Each of the dense pomegranate flowers in the air rushed in, blowing in the 18 floors of black and covered her face, flushing. 7 years Chutrong Huk and Princess Lin Tiutra married there. It was the 7 years he was the most arduous. The next day, he kissed him to lead the army, from then on all year round the battle. Tiutra once mocked him and said, "Likes guests are much more hard." But just mocking, nor resentment. Earlier, because she liked the bossy guests, she was born prematurely. She did not become a female shouting 3 troops, hugging the courageous courage so widely. All the people all deposited expectations on Chutrong Huk, called him Kwang Phek Vuong. She refused to invite. Determination of the battle was coming. Tiutram in the royal palace was chosen by the Lur person, when he was suffering for 2 days and 3 nights. When he died was less than 20. For years old, he had a 6-month-old fetus. Before Lam June did not recognize the servant next day. While the fever was high, whispering, the female mandarin bowed, to know that it was called Trong Huk, small and soft. When the news came, Trong Huk was in the northernmost wild area, in the sky. The clouds were intense without sound. Areas thousands of states of horses swallowed the toothpick. At the end of the vast eyes of the snow cat. It was the Hauni Yen Duok battlefield, the narrative of blood flowing into the river. 8 years of chaos was almost narrowly outdated. Tu Trum waited again. His tears could not flow. All poured back into his thought. For many years, he tried to save the time, fighting there. Nothing could not stop. Under the horses' hooves were crushed through so many flesh and blood. The person who brought him to worship was Steen Shiku Tu. But in front of the unusual destiny, he was just a blurry dust. Hatred, anyway, must impose on him. Lover, he posted. Su Huk Vuong turned into emperor. Next to the coordinates is the taste of the queen. Wrapped in the Phuong Van Wai costume is only a spiritual face. All kinds of needles and pearls surrounded. Because of him, a woman suffered. Z-Tram swallowed it all, eventually even her life. And the baby could not be. He has the ability to give her just a few permanent queen seals without a user. A long pry, and hundreds of iron. Like cold words in the history books. Throughout the night, approving the newspaper chapter, there were always people crept up, giving him a warm set of Ysam. But that could not be her. The emperor of the girl looked at the other girl into the electricity, step by step coming. Although she covered the message of black SA, did not see her face, her figure gently wanted to fly away. The black and luxurious clothes are the same, startled is the 17-year old tram to Mary. Through the 5 months of the romantic walk towards him, the red lips under the mastery also contain a warm smile. Young women also did not look around, nor shocked, went straight to the end of the red carpet, walked gently without nose, only black. Kwai swung in his eyes suppressed the silent smile, nor did he sharp. Kandip was the same age as Talan. His figure was absolutely similar, his appearance was also beautiful. Instead of the royal costume, it was indeed the second brother, from a young age, was illustrated, famous, posted as an emperor that everyone was aiming for. Trong Huk asserted his unforeseen disciples who would be in front of him with a mass, bringing a slave in exchange for his new lady. All of these, just in the eyes of the streets of Jeongho Ward, Vuong Lu Vuong rewarded. The young people were timid, in the world was afraid of nothing unfavorable, but standing in the ranks of for princes playing the year. Kwai Swang was not bleak, he was just 21 years old, since he was young. In the world, the most miserable situation was not on the same road. Nor did they be alienated, but the one who had it. Only he did not want to put his hand in the past, because he knew more than half did not seize it. Even if he had it. He was consistent, cruelty, vengeance to rise, is rich and happy never. This activity immediately spoiled him. From now on, there is nothing else. Kwai Swang looked at the other girl who sincerely came. Looking at all her aspirations were honest. Clues fell on her fragile shoulder. The girl who held her hands in front of her chest closed black, slowly relaxed. Those pale ink, colored pepper were smooth as smoke. Each of them was exposed by the air, in turn falling to the ground, like a countless transparent cicadas falling in the middle of the quiet palace. That her appearance also partially. She is not Kandip. Kwai so suddenly felt that he was like a new death from the outside of the electricity outside. Before his eyes dark. All the situation was unclear. To terrify, the faces still calm without ripples. In this blink of an eye, the young woman passed beside him. She slowly walked away, fluttering skirt, like water waves swirling on the river of Makmang Tel on the dictionary of the rain. The soft tone heard for many years, following a light breeze fluttering in the ear, saying is still the voice of Lean, extremely low in voice, saying, I have met Ku. She glanced over him, continued walking forward. The body arrived at the legs of the sitting, just lifted up on the last to black floors. Huk looked at the young woman's face. A clear spirit of wavering, almost wanted to utter a death. The pupils were shining as heavy as bough thatch. Curly hair were all beautiful. The neck also hanged on the intersection of the uncle's uncle. The same appearance as the spirit. But just panic in the blink of an eye. He understood himself. Tiu Tram died. The child in front of this beautiful eyes came almost to fibrousness. Looking around absolutely did not feel gentle of Tiu Tram. Even though there was a similar place, it is also very beautiful. Just in the world without people like Ztram anymore. Absolutely. The girl tilted her head, and was looking for something. Vaguely a small face on the shoulder of the gynecological department that year. Thang Càn Tự finally felt a sharp red sword rushing through his heart, fresh blood rising in the heart of the circuit hole bowling. Burning dry. A drop did not save. Burned a line through the empty cover. The wind blew, the ashes inside immediately disappeared. He opened his mouth, and did not call her name. Her name. The crimson hilt of crimson pierced into his heart, hindered the bleeding. Each time the beating was a severe dull pain. Jalan. She was like a stubbornness. He only considered her a child. She hated him. Maybe it was just angry with children. But he did not expect. In her heart was deserted, like thousands of empty land without nose cracked. Dying every inch, and she refused to do dependence beside him anymore. Despite the sadly, even if he hated him, she still could not feel cruel to leave, bringing him in. Therefore, she lied to Kwai Swang, pouring all sin on the head of the army, preserving his life. She would rather be in front of him, bring his whole life to trample, let him see. He saw, all for him. She was just 15 years old. It was he used the dust to tie the bird's wings, and he urged her to step on this pearl road. He brought her to others. The girl performed the ceremony with the huk, turned around, and the pants of the bai merged on all four sides, like a sailor who went away in a mast. The memory of his lover when the teenager met fleeting. His face was engraved in the mind that year was vague. But every time he remembered, he was still the most beautiful girl in the world. It is such a great face. She looked at him with quite sigh. A pair of deep eyes like a well, only he saw the cold smile hidden in it. In July year, taking the female uncle Lin Kalak Thi, or the concubine name Lan, after the female Kalak Thi, like lavish, every day. Take yellow leaves cut each 4 and disguise flowers. In a god scramble to sweep, so that someone solicitation how Phifak Dung Vika Kalak Thi. The first year of Thien Enjoy capital should not be a periodic year of replacement of Tam Quan army. But the war was constantly rebellious. The mandarins were tied, moreover because in the Luk-Duk, there were 3 men who wanted to leave the Suta as the marshal of the marshal. After the great dictionary posted the new emperor, the troops went to the chapter to break the army. Naturally, at the end of the summer of August, 9-10,000 soldiers replaced troops to gather outside Chutuokmon, strict ranks. A few days of Sagittarius gathered. The pub in Thinkai was still very bustling. Under the bustling nose of the city did not hide the heart of the panic. That year, when the rebellion floated, it was the opportunity to gap the Bingkon Huang Tian. Than, Makham, of which 6,000 Sagittarius went to Fuquan and Makmakquan to resolve the anti-troops. Turning his head to everyone had just arranged from the beginning of the street. The wound was still new, even if it was a peaceful day. The situation of troops kept like that in the ice, still scared inside. On that day, Lantrong when the sky was dim. The sky was still black as ink, only a faint trail of dawn on the horizon. Grey and white cold. Under the city surrounding the shadow of the flag, black and black spreading a few miles, quiet without sound. Randomly there were a few hours of horses, also immediately reassured. In the palace, the news said that the price was on the way to Chutuokmon. Thut Dung Philan followed. Among the people the stars lighting the torch, continuing firewood and transmission, constantly like the sea, the light of lighting, the 3 business armor divided into 3 red-yellow eczema, the 3 gloomy colors. A moment later, on Jojo Moan, the torch lamp was disturbed. The 2 sides of the city suddenly dropped to a 5-meter-long flag. The 12-long length command of the Black Brigade. It was true that the price came. The drum is the name. 9,000 soldiers kneeling and kneeling. Hovan Tuesday Mountain, large, under the top of Huang Tian Quan. Thankan herself looked away from his head. Besides Tri Y Emperor, a slender shadow wrapped in Kong Tuok Lin cloak. The figure could not stand the cold of the morning dew. The internal spirit beside the voice of the holy chanting, the long and monotonous sentence of the nationalist. She heard it unclear. At a stand still in front of the deep, lowering her head, as if looking at him from afar. She was on the city. He was under the city. His face was veiled. The censorship was finished. On the firecrackers as a signboard, General Si Tam Don Zine Lu Duong Duong. Voi Don took Hate Duong to Daquan. Ten Don went to Mak Kung Quan and Huang Tian Don to go around the northwest to Huang Tian Quan. All changed his troops. Tengkan himself on the horse, to turn the direction, following the martial flag to the west. Behind the 3, the color of the sky was grey. The clouds were like a cotton, not knowing when to light up. The last day still did not have clear. Early in the morning, I did not see the sun. Still felt hot. The inner gods brought a large bowl of glass. Brought the ice band to bring to the palace. By the time of the horse, the sky was as obscure as the night. In the clouds of the trend, there was a blue radiation through light and jack. The wind blowing suddenly emerged. The wine under the Viet and porches also wild. The windows around the collision. Soon, heavy raindrops. Land stood in front of the north window. The black sky. The thick and white curtains of the wave were sliding, flying like a waterfall to mountains or far into the immense dark clouds, not seeing the path of the other person. From now on, the horizon is far away, away from Hon Hai, not seeing again. Nor she retreated a few steps, sat back on the low bed with a brocade of Tafuong, watching the rain under the porch gradually pour down gradually, involuntarily falling. Lan slept very soundly. There were no bad dreams, only endless darkness hugged. Her heart was empty, just vowing to fall like that. While sleeping, she suddenly felt something cold and tough without the sound of sticking, touching her face, dispersing the cold smell of. She widened her eyes. The heavy emotion remained. The bubbles flowed down, crawled into the hem of her shirt. She shivered and it was a hand. Buffalo bra under the armor of steel, all wet. Perhaps afraid of waking her. Just stopping for a long time on her cheek. It was late at night. The candlelight did not know when the wind was extinguished from time. Outside the rain was still flowing. The person in front of her eyes knelt in front of her low bed, the whole body of Vevu Lam disdain in the small water. The appearance of her body covered more than half, that she realized. She sat up, panicked in the dream, just called his name. He lowered his voice. In the darkness, there was only a pair of transparent tea pupils, flashing the light extremely. Lan Lan's face was white, saying, I don't listen to. I dive all night to the business, running 70 miles to see her. There would be no intention of returning. His hands raised her face, not allowing her to turn away. On his body spread out the welding of the night rain. Every ray of rays absorbed into her flesh, causing her around her body to rise, indignant, painful, or happy. She did not distinguish it. Follow me, he hurriedly repeated. What about his mother? She asked with bewilderment. Tenkan you did not hesitate. I arranged the person who escorted her to Tran Van Mac. Immediately went to the sea. I went to Third Deep to welcome my mother. Immediately went to Huo Back Port. Took a boat down the south to meet her. Go to the sea. There will be no one to stop us anymore. Where are you? He shook his head. He is an adult. So what about his official? No more. All don't need it anymore. He suddenly smiled. I take you away. We go to the pirate. She looked at him dumbfounded. Lasted for a long time. Gradually understood. Shook her head. It's too late. She finished speaking. Her thick curly hair fell, covering her face. Jalan. He, almost frightened, grabbed her shoulder, bowed his head and stared at her. Huang Fai and the general fled in the night. For the two countries. They said they were all scary humiliation if the emperor and Kakangku refused to stop. Why started the war? Jalan suddenly looked up. The heavy gaze was hot and hot, like a blunt that pulled to the end of the fire to the end of the blink of an eye could not look straight. All can think of a way. His voice was husky. The spirit also wavered. Chan's sister. He could not pay this price. If these things come true, he will definitely regret. She smiled, his eyes shining brightly. But he was the one who understood the story. He would not blame me, just hate himself. Hate his whole... He looked at her. Ho wanted to crush her, crushing it with fine powder, and her blood was shaped into a new orchid. Ash. The rainfall is constantly scrubbing. In the darkness of the spark. Falling into the deeper base without... Sword of noble royal prince. Tearing. The person fell down. The face was still clear in front of her eyes. It turned out that the female prince said softly, and laughed in the immediate future. The last yard, wastefully destroyed the peaceful life before the eyes of the second year to the next year. Because of the horse, it was difficult to give birth and rebelled. In Luke Duk, the general had half an unjust death. The general followed the Huk people in the past. Vi is Duk Duk. Non to try it in Duk Ruong Balanga deposen to Huk. Not fleeing. According to Fungi rebelled, the defeat of the clan. This she depends on the appearance of the pepper. Fake the emperor in the palace. The opportunity, as laughed and treated. This king of the king was romantic. Although in the folk is also famous. On the 4th April of the following year, the Vien envoy to Min went to Thuongcho ambassador. In the middle of June, there was a newspaper. The delegation of the Union has not been exported abroad. He encountered Golden Sun and Sand. Lost the whereabouts in the map between QTU and Muklan. The news of Min missing came. That night. To Huk slept at night in Viet and Kung. In the blink of an eye, he grabbed Delan's waist, whispered. Den fast asleep. Delan gently stood up and glanced over him, moving the silk mosquito net to blow off the lamp, in the blink of an eye under the warm red candle. Vaguely seen in the eyelashes with wet light. From the year of the Lantai 27 until now. Not even 12 years, Shutrong Huk and Luke Duk were chaotic in the end. The music was over. The 5 months of launching the horse like the wind was Bieth and Din Gia. At the pub market for many years, Hein Kate gathered, prosperously ended. On the book of Din Gia, the name was clearly written. Self. Delan always thought that the years in the Long Palace. But for seasons of rotation, many days back and forth. Also went back and forth. She rarely met Phuong Din General Phuong Chu. This person is in a spirit, in deep in the house, except for Kim Then Kung of the Emperor Huk. Nor go anywhere. It is also difficult to blame. He originally the other part of the history of the book Dai. Din to Hao. The spirit of servant at Tong Tu. He changed again through a body of Siamese. In the quiet darkness that through the second half of the next life, looking at the familiar calm face, and the blade of the corners of her lips as if she smiled, she always had to think. This man was extremely hugging his mind, to ignore the position of Vuong Hao, to support him. Emperor Huk first posted the appointment of Huang Tian. Then Than, Mac. Nearly the for great businesses, martial work on, Thien enjoy for years. The original marshals instead of the responsibility were all declared to report on the work, promotion of marshal, which thought that the next year of the 3 business instead of the army was also soon. Huang Tian Quan Shisoi Thang Continue Temple 7 years old, is the youngest of the life in Viet and Kung is rippled without fear. Back and forth are familiar faces. The story is simply for renovated seasons. Teng Continue sometimes had a year in the suitor twice. Sometimes many years did not come. When Delan entered the young age, he gradually grew up to a beautiful girl. The language of the East Luke was also fluent. Daily always she raised a bird cutting the 316, very old, unable to the random Mandarin caught her. The gloomy spirit of the bird was cut. The old-fashioned face was completely unable to see. Changing the on that day, the Tang dynasty Huk had seen Thuk Thung Phai Lan's time, so amazed, after the colour of the union less than half a month, when the demobilization was brought with her with him. This was the status of the queen. Everyone said, later Thuk Thung Phai Phai Chine was certain, will be ordained to her, but no one expected. Thien enjoyed 9 years, 14 years of Chutuok Moan. The Huk had never come personally. Thuk Dung Phai was also faithful. Thien Huang in the 13 took the goods in the year, showing the national warehouse treasure not enough. All the silver to buy gold. The price of gold on the market continued to rise frantically. The Western Luke Sulo guests came. The golden parts also flowing into the east. The golden god of 7 8 tents comes from Trungcho. but Lei Van Haichou has no minerals. Until the 14th summer, the great treasures inside, even the gold bars, have no place to pile. To Western United Kingdoms of the gold valley circulate. The supervisor of the upper chapter requested to expand more rooms. Emperor Hak glanced at Engu, criticized with a red pen. Later 10 years of tax exempted, destined to bring half of the national property used to build the dike and the warehouse of salaries. The supervisor of the dike, Hak laughed and said, in the history book mention the Hak in the last years of unreasonable, nor indispensable this story. The western countries of Lukchenko bought large quantities of gold, who expected it in the second half of July. The gold flowing from the national treasury accounted for a third of the circulation to the east. The price of gold quickly fell to the average price of 50 silver changes in the past gold, still the same as a violent road. Golden countries of the western continent have just eaten in the valuable island warehouse suddenly dropped, losing nearly half of the property, the heart of the people bewildered. The golden guests stayed in the east and Hongzhou for power to repay the debt. The people killed a lot. After hunting in the winter in the 13th, the Emperor Hak recruited a pure tycoon, the Lady, the legendary female officials were the female nursing of Fuongdin General Fuongshu, from martial arts generals, still considered as a nursing male child. Also regularly met Talan met Fu and Fai several times. In Quine Le Tu, he had a rare beauty. Before the spring of the following year, the envoy of the western countries gathered in Hongzhou, collecting the remains of western customers who killed themselves. The religious allowance then was escorted by Huang Tianquan to the emperor. 14 January of that year, La Zhuan Dai Yen, Tran Vi Tap Tran, Nak, Ni Hola, Num Bai, Uncle Lin, Teach Fu, Cat Fap, Lo Holo, Old Man 7 warning of the spirit all accepted the invitation to come. Che gathered. The leader of the mission was the Linlan Prince Lan. De Lan specially attended the party. The billionaire was far away from 15 years, Lan was a 24 year. 14 January of the 15 and 15, the locality, Emperor Hak presented in front of the porcelain. DD or exhibited. Therefore, the Spring Alliance, the Ethio Vin Hao, did not send. Solicitor Kia Emperor Hak worked impatiently to go back and forth, like in prison. Among the small Viet and Kung, all layouts are the type of uncle, comfortable and lazy. To Lan chased the palace away, bringing a plate of golden peaches on its own. Lan suddenly turned around, saying, Wangzi, knowing that the billion will want to marry a crazy emperor, I will not let me come. To Lan smiled slightly, saying, when I arrived in the east, I was only 9 years old. After saying that, he brought the peach lake to Tak Lan's hands. For this, the most liked it. The angered Lan also laughed, gently stopped the plate, saying, Wangzi, She raised her eyelashes to look at Lan. That's right, I was so tall. The face is gentle. It is like a blind princess that year. Lan suddenly felt bitterly, took his hand to take the plate to the side. Catching her thin hand, clumsy said, Fuong Tai, that year was a sister hugging me to run to death. Today it was my turn to save the billion. To Lan was dumbfounded. Lan said, this crazy emperor lived for a few years. The countries of the west were all clean, we went to the east. Was calculating, meeting. Previously, we sent the secret to him. He responded, after posting from the reign of the golden rain. Chasing, using Ki Don to prevent Vu Lam Quan. Thin Kai immediately took Mak Kam Don. De Lan silently heard this paragraph, shook his head and cut him off and said, the horse of Huang Time Quan will not come. De Lan smiled softly. Thanken Tiu is not the heart of Tiu Nu. Do not say that Chikwai Swong ordered him would not follow. Just needed the billionaire and in Thin Kai. He would not come. On the long black hair like the raven wings, there is a lantern, so quiet, like ripples engraved from olive wood. Putting in the long term, she finally opened her mouth and said, if he is the one who falls like that, I will not need to torment these 15 years. Lan sighed and said, Wangzi, billion do not need to worrying about the. By that time, the disciple wanted to take the precious person to send people to the guardian guard. Absolutely no. When, on the first day of February, Chu Kwai Swong brought Long Vi then to the sea of Hao Hon Hai. Recently Vuong Tai also heard. In the rebellion, he wanted to avoid this spearhead. Going to the beach was the best. Due to no Hak, Chu Kwai Swong did not necessarily do a good emperor. Many years ago, in the palace of the king, she could not swing the other right. This time once again accumulated force. Wanted to bring the chain of the mighty man. This, instead of all losers, not equal to letting go of the bet once. Because he wanted to rob him for a young desire. Even though he soon knew how to ruin, he would continue to go on this road. Cannot go. It is the crown prince. Nor is it the head of the sun. How many people are waiting on one side? Just need to have the death of his brother. Immediately jump out to win this king. If even the person next to him feels that he is thin and weak. Has anyone willing to follow the disciple? Lan said, bushy eyebrows closed in a. Shu Kwai Swong was definitely dead at sea. Not knowing when the boat was deadly, Perhaps he wanted to take the risk with him, soon knowing that. I should not save that year. Tiat Thien Kai perfectly waiting for us to return. Besides, there is no need to worrying. In the heart. Deep in the heart is not melting. Did this disciple. In front of the window. The surrounding Viet and Kung has been defended by hundreds of soldiers. Conspirant is satisfactory. The strange is his Yam Lam Lam. It is true that the beauty of Huang Tien Quan may thuk dung fi peace of mind, anti. Troops this place decided not to attack. Short words, a habit for many years to go to the army after saying it hurriedly left. To lan in the cold. This person turned out not to be the close army of the quarter of the government to protect her, and Vu Lam troops were forbidden to be a guise. As drums like thousands of water. Geography. The troops hit the harem. Oh rap. Just falling onto the land does not care but burn. At the most dangerous time, the anti-troops of Kidon rushed into the eastern electricity flank. In other words, the people of Kwai Sai were only a few steps. Citizens. Also, fresh blood like streams from the murmuring lipstick. The body stagnates. The situation is no less than a situation of suspicion of rebellion. So, Lan was besieged in the city. Whenever she thought of Lan, she stood still. Always directed the soldier Vu Lam to protect the situation out. Golden green on the mud. To stench is hard to describe. The branch of this female sun is entirely scattered, covered on one side, but does not cover the frantic eyes and hot. Makes people terrify. The boat is. Flip. Trong Thua Keen did not exceed half of it. She cried. She just looked at him, as if she nodded. Pale, like a paper. Cutting person. Big eyes without light were to pale ink on white paper. Will. Back to once, locked once. Forever without a freedom. She recalled when she was young. Whenever she came in the middle of the summer. The Circus cavity sent the person to give her a cup of ice. As a large block of ice, swirling a thin cup like luli, crushed rocks to beat into snow powder contained inside. Accompanied by other types of bile incense. In the hot Luke all year round is extremely rare toes. She liked the slippery ice cup. Always holding her hand, but grasping the faster the more. The next moment, a hole melted into the snow juice from the gap of the finger flowing out. Cold bone, half her life. Just a cup of ice. Father, brother, chief, lover. All the every step out. At the foot there is extremely endless path. The directions of the directions. As a result, each person is to lan in Phuong en Geo Kung until July. In camp then suddenly to en Dung Phi Phuong Thi. After survival of an accident at sea. Ingu wife followed the diagnosis of her pregnant nearly 2 months. Had to temporarily detain Vietcho and Thai. The body was slightly flourishing. Immediately deliberately returned to Thien Kai. At this time. From February until now. During the 5 months of defending Huang Tien. The military court was immobilized. Never. Teng Kantiyu does not count as honesty. But it will also not bring the North and the North to expand. Joy hands. Since the disorder to the present, the news in the palace blockade strictly. In Thien Kai Than said. Thuk Dung Phi Lan Lan in the army lost the whereabouts. Even if he sent people, he could not find her whereabouts. Till Lan looked down at the ruined empire before her eyes. A wind blowing her long hair to fly her beautiful long hair. She soon knew he was like that. The external palace announced that General Trong Thua Keen came. Deputy Marshal near the surrounding area of the army was opposed to the army, because the Emperor Huk received. The owner of the Marshal Hugyu was imprisoned by Fugia. He did not come to visit for a long time. The Lan knew the intention to come to a bad estimate. But he was a knife. She was not a little frang. In contrast, she had empty hands. And there would be no more fear. Trong Thua Keen was also not polite to her. Slightly clasped his hands, said, "Please immediately repair the simple page." Lan anticipated him to take her life. But if that was like that, naturally did not need to repair the same page. She was suspicious. Where are you going? Go north. Trong Thua Keen laughed and refreshed. Trong Thua Keen walked in the front. She walked back from Thien Dinh, around the door of the palace. Estimated to have 300 soldiers waiting out. Lan imprisoned for a few months. Now the sunlight hooded towards her. Could not help but be a little fascinated. Hurriedly covered the turquoise velvet cloak on her body. The soldiers surrounded her. Along the spacious road of thinly thatched to the south. Before Tay Phong Kom wanted to fold towards to Homon, the south had a car that went to the staff. Gradually approached, overlooking the palanquin in front of Huang Fi's level. The soldiers simultaneously stood still. Ordered an R. All went back to the road, knelt on one knee to the ground, leaving only Lan Lan stood still. The big palanquin was 18. Plated gold. Plated horns slowly passing through her. Suddenly stopped a little. The light yellow brocade. The female comedy inside the extremely young age. The appearance of 16-17 years old. Although thin Trang Don Engung, the spirit of fatigue, still seeing her, she looked at Delan. Just smiled, immediately let go of the curtain. It was pure Phi Phuong Thi, nursing the female family of the general manager Phuong Chu. Nickname. At that time, she was 6 months pregnant. A corpse in the stomach was born in October of that year. named Chu Dai Don. Chu Dai Don that year in November ascended the throne, proclaimed a Don, changed the reign of the scene. Tuol Phi Phi Phuong Thitn Dowager, Regent Trong Thua Kim attached great importance, until Don Don grew up himself. Trong Thua Kim was up to the position of the upper. That year, Huang Time was concerned with special early, almost the sunset. Thien Dia Vien sun all fell into chaos. Only serious snowflakes were constantly restless. The 300 teams of people in the army and wine, in the vast snowfield, blindly wanted to be a black director. 2 hours ago, far away can vaguely see the light of fire, but until near and not going straight until it was dark, I saw the money of the barracks. The leader of the team pinned the horse, lifted the snow hat, revealed the bearded face, said, "Where's the marshal? There are visitors." Tuve realized that the greed of General Trong Thua King Quan Thuong hurriedly stood solemnly, on the one hand peeking on the back of another horse, although wrapped in heavy snow. Still seeing the other guest was short, absolutely not the appearance of the 5 elements. Inside the mat-like barracks, the book is full of a table, if it is not the corner of the wall hanging on the sword. The body is not the same as the place of the Prime Minister. How many years? The other male was still thin, lying on the table, the fur coat peeled down, revealing the clear curve on his shoulder on his back. The shadow of the snow covered with gently in the back closed the door. Hesitating, silent going forward. The male in front of the table was fast asleep. His face was quiet. The yellow light erased the traces of the foggy fog on his face, looking at the elegant appearance of his childhood. In his hand, he placed a cup of green porcelain wine, clear wine like water, stamping the strange light. The sweet and deep, the shadow of the snow. Wrapped man reached out and grabbed the cup of wine, meticulously observing, and the bottom still something wrinkled, experienced permeability, relaxed in half. Bright blue light, like a, it was high at la, dried soaked alcohol to drink. A flower could have a bizarre dream. Not captured is still not captured, not able to keep nor can it be kept. This flower gives people 3 short hours, so that people in the dream to review those fire and lightning happiness. Along with this face, it is difficult to meet again. However, there are many people who are willing to pay for it. The poisonous flower makes this addicted, along with pure alcohol, every day, every night. Do not know how to compliment the blanks deep and not see the bottom of the thoughts of many people. The male is heavy and sleeping, breathing. Delan took off the snow hat, took a breath of excess wine in the cup. The clear wine flowed down, burning her throat hot. A stream of heat from the chest absorbed into the quartet of the cold hands like ice gradually warmed up. Tired of 3 distances in the blink of an eye, she sat quietly on the ground, knees on his knees, closed her eyes, and fell into a deep sleep. She dreamed that the weather at the end of the fresh spring that year. The sunlight came to the soft hair bone. She was 14 years old, sitting on a large wooden pot filled with white sails, drifting on the river. In the dream, someone held her hand, warmly steadfast and lifelong, even though this moment outside the window covers the afternoon snow. The QI is like Hone Van. Remember to like and subscribe to Than Juan channel.